Aquarius is one of the most beautiful and one of the most powerful among all the zodiacs. So why is she trembling in fear like this? He even warns that if he arrives, everyone is doomed. A few days earlier, Yang Wei, saint of Aries, known for his overwhelming strength, was killed by a man who should not exist in this world. All that is known is that it was a completely one-sided battle. And if even a zodiac like Li Gun could do nothing, it must have been another one of the 12. But which of the zodiacs would ever kill their own kind? Protagonist finishes off Yang Wei and continues forward. He even thanks Li Gun, saying he became stronger because of him, because he still has 10 more targets left to eliminate. The 12 zodiacs stood at the peak of human power. They were chosen by the gods to protect humanity, yet none of them truly wanted to wipe out the monsters. Doing so would mean losing their status, privileges, and fame. Their plan was always to do just enough to get by. But among the 12, one held a very different intention. Li Gun was, without question, the strongest of them all, a battle addict who wanted to bring everything to an end. That is why, when they gathered for the hardest mission, the Crimson Eye mission made everyone shake in fear, calling it impossible. Aquarius collapsed in terror, completely overwhelmed by fear. Meanwhile, Li Gun directly confronted the boss head-on. He charged in and even called for backup. But when he looked back, everyone was already running away. With no one left to distract the boss, he was forced to face it completely alone. So an endless battle began. Li Gun had no idea how many absurd creatures existed there. As time continued to pass endlessly. While fighting, he wondered if anyone would ever return, not even to check whether he was alive or dead. With no other choice, he kept pushing forward, until he was trapped in the hardest dungeon for 2 decades. Even after losing an arm, he continued fighting relentlessly. At last, he reached the final monster, but after defeating it, the entire place began to collapse. Buried alive, he thought this was his bitter end. Those who betrayed Li Gun were likely living perfect lives, while he was left to die down there. Abandoned and alone, Li Gun's life came to an end. The city has already been devastated by countless calamities. 2 young men are running desperately for their lives. One shouts to run, while the other argues he couldn't have known that path was wrong. Today was supposed to be safe. How could a high-level calamity appear? A horned dog-like monster and several others are chasing them down. One of them starts crying, saying they are completely doomed. The fortune teller warned he would meet a terrifying monster today, and he should have listened. Suddenly, one of the beasts leaps in, landing between them and forcing them to scatter in panic. One boy falls to the ground, crying in despair. The other is surrounded and shouts in frustration. He curses that if Li Gun had survived the Devil's Tower, none of this would be happening. He looks toward the distant Devil's Tower, the same tower Li Gun once entered with the 12 saints. Then its gates begin to open as a massive light appears. In an instant, the light engulfs everything and explodes across the area. The 2 boys raise their arms to shield themselves from the blast. Moments later, the destruction left by the tower becomes visible. What just happened? I don't know. No, Jimmy. A human is coming out of the collapsing tower. A human? They stare in utter disbelief. Far in the ruins, a lone figure stands amid the dust. How dare they betray me and throw me into that trap? You're all going to die. I will come for every single one of you. Half buried in rubble, the 2 boys wonder what is happening and who that man is. Then one of the dog-like monsters is crushed by the protagonist. He stomps down on its head without hesitation. The boys cannot believe these are orange-class calamities, monsters that even high-ranking awakened ones struggle against. To Li Gun, they are nothing more than ants. Li Gun grabs the remaining enemies with a faint grin, standing over the defeated ones. He glances aside and vanishes instantly, reappearing in front of the boys, leaving them frozen in shock. They stumble back, screaming and begging him not to attack. Li Gun pauses. You're humans? Good. Then the path is clear. The 2 boys sigh in relief, realizing they might actually be saved. Did you notice that men walking out of the tower? That's unbelievable, isn't it? The other one shook his head. What are you even saying? No one could leave that tower alive. Maybe something went wrong, and when the tower collapsed, he somehow ended it up here. As they were talking, a dark figure slowly rose behind them. Both of them stiffened as another monster fixed its gaze on them. Our protagonist, however, turned toward it without the slightest fear. One of them lost his nerve. No way, that's the wolf boss. Sang, run. Meanwhile, he kept staring at the creature as if it meant nothing to him. Then the monster began gathering energy inside its mouth. A moment later, it unleashed the attack. A massive blast shot straight toward them. The 2 boys could do nothing but brace for impact. The force of the attack ripped through everything before it. After some time, the blast finally came to an end. They looked around, stunned. Did he really just shield us? Our protagonist muttered a curse under his breath. Then he leaped forward and slammed his hand onto the wolf boss. You're nothing but a dirty mutt. Pinned it down and drove his fist forward. The force of that single blow brought the wolf boss down completely. The 2 young men could only stand there in silence. Then our protagonist landed with a confident grin. The surroundings were wrecked, and the boss had already been defeated. He stood there calmly, staring at the 2 boys quietly thanked God that they were still alive. At that point, they truly believed the danger had passed. Then he called out, hey you 2. They flinched and answered together. Yes, sir. Go get me some food. I'm starving. They simply stared at Li Gun, while he suddenly looked a bit embarrassed. Oh, and get me some clothes too. I need something fresh to wear. The scene changes, and they are now inside a small shop as our protagonist devours plate after plate of food. The boys are left speechless when they see the bill. He had eaten enough to cost 10,000 reais. It was enough food to feed about 120 people. And they said they were short on money. He calmly replied that he had held back. But judging from the mountain of empty dishes, his restraint was absurd. One of them blurts out, "What do you mean you held back?" He responds, "Weren't you the ones who promised to pay for anything I wanted after I saved your lives?" Then he adds, "Bring me another plate." They quickly stop Lee Gun in a panic, saying they cannot afford to pay for anything more. Then one of them asks, "Chun Sunja, what are you? A disciple, a divine captain. And why were you near the tower?" He answers, "What do you mean? I just came out of the tower and happened to run into you too." They stare at Lee Gun in disbelief. "You came out of the tower?" But he ignores that part. "Forget it. There's something I want to ask you. You look like ordinary people, so why can I sense magic power coming from you?" One of them explains that he is a disciple. Then they ask whether our protagonist is one as well, someone awakened through a god's blessing. When he hears that, he lets out a scoff. "Those worthless gods? Why would I ever thank those bastards?" But then he suddenly stops. He notices his reflection in a silver spoon and freezes in stunned silence. "A mirror. Give me a mirror right now." A worker points one out, and he rushes toward it so quickly that everything on the table is knocked aside, begins pulling off his shirt and stares at his own face. "Wait, what? My entire body has recovered," he says, still staring at his reflection in disbelief. Then he recalls how badly damaged he had been inside the tower, scarred all over, with missing flesh and part of his head ruined. Those injuries should have been almost impossible to recover from, not unless he risked his power, yet now he realizes something else. His left arm has returned. Huh? And what is this strange mark? On his hand, there is a circular symbol shaped like a snake. Without warning, the mark begins to shine brightly. A surge of pain strikes Lee Gun so fiercely that his veins stand out as he clutches his arm. And system windows start appearing before him. "You have experienced death. You have gained an impossible achievement. Your previous stats will now be transferred into your new body. All achievements from the tower will be changed into XP. You have obtained a divine skill. Every unique skill and trait from your past life has been inherited and converted. You can now use the power of Ophiuchus," a snake symbol of, appears behind our protagonist while the pain continues to surge through Lee Gun. Then, without warning, his consciousness begins slipping away toward a different place. He sees his spiritual sea drifting among countless galaxies. In front of Lee Gun, a massive snake watches him closely. Our protagonist slowly stretches out his hand. In the instant he touches it, a radiant light begins to glow from both of them. And all at once he is back inside the diner. He asks himself, What just happened? One of the boys hurries over. "Brian, are you alright?" Just for context, Lee Gun seems to be the name they use for our protagonist, but his name is Lee Gun. Still unsettled, he asks in confusion, "What? You didn't see that snake just now?" They exchange confused looks and reply, "What are you talking about? We didn't see any snake. All we saw was you suddenly standing up, stripping your clothes, and staring at yourself in the mirror. Then you clenched your fist and started shouting like you'd lost your mind. So that means no one else could actually see it." He keeps staring at his hand, deep in thought, while the boys watch him and feel he becomes stranger the longer they observe him. At that moment, he feels that strange energy again, and another system window appears before him. "You have become the owner of Ophiuchus." More windows appear in front of Lee Gun, revealing 13th seat of the gods, bearer of Ophiuchus. Awakened, name the man who crushes all creation. Additional windows unfold, explaining his abilities, and one of them shows what he has gained. F rank super regeneration activated. All bodily damage will recover. Your body has been restored, but a temporary penalty applies. Physical ability reduced by 50% for 1032 hours remaining. It seems his physical transformation is the result of that skill. He has never heard of anything like this from other saints, and on top of that, he cannot sense any divine presence. Whatever happened, his body is now fully healed. That part is at least not bad. The real issue is what he should do next. Then he recalls the men who shoved Lee Gun aside and left him to face the boss alone. Now he only has one thought, to eliminate every saint who betrayed Lee Gun. Just imagining what he will do to those bastards fills Lee Gun with a strange excitement. The boy watching him grows frightened after seeing that expression on his face. The scene then shifts to another location. At the site of the explosion, people are taking photos while medics and onlookers gather around in chaos. Someone asks, "Is it true the unbreakable Devil's Tower has collapsed?" Another person replies, "Yes, the whole world will lose its mind over this. That tower was a symbol of this place." They begin to wonder if it was the work of Legom's followers or disciples who oppose other factions. Someone points toward the nearby monsters. Even high-ranking saints would struggle against creatures like those. So who could have defeated them all and destroyed the Devil's Tower? Then someone asks hesitantly whether this might be related to Ligong's followers. The answer is simple: they don't know, but everything about it feels deeply wrong. After that, that, the scene shifts again. Inside a building, a large crowd gathers for a press conference. Camera flashes erupt as reporters shout out their questions. Yang Wei, please tell us what you think happened. Do you believe there's any chance Li Gun survived? A heavyset man from earlier stays silent, simply observing the crowd around Li Gun's case. His name is Yang Wei, the saint of the Aries constellation. He only says, I have no comment. Then he turns and leaves, looking uneasy while the crowd continues shouting behind him. They keep shouting for answers, demanding, what do you mean you have no comment? The next scene shifts to his car. Inside, he begins smashing objects in frustration. Damn it, Li Gun, Li Gun, Li Gun. Everyone keeps asking about that bastard. How many times have I heard his name just today? Then he starts wondering if Li Gun might truly still be alive. He recalls the image of Li Gun's broken body from the past. He asks himself whether anyone could survive 20 years inside that place. That tower? No, it should be impossible. There should have been thousands of demonic beasts inside it. And every single one of them was high rank. It was already a miracle that anyone escaped without Li Gun, and they even claimed they defeated the Scarlet Horus. So how could he possibly survive in a place like that? His body had already been severely damaged by the backlash of his own powers. Unlike them, he never had any protection from the gods. But what if he really did come back to life? He tries to push the thought out of his mind that if Li Gun truly returned, then everything is over. The scene returns to the protagonist as he checks his phone, thinking coldly that he will start by crushing that bastard first. The story then shifts to an airport. As a plane finishes landing, a man steps out and is greeted by people addressing Li Gun. Welcome. It is an honor to meet one of the 12 constellations, Mr. Hugo Otters. He is the blonde man seen at the beginning, the same one who once ate fried chicken with the protagonist. Now fully dressed in refined style, he is again introduced as a key figure. He is the Sagittarius constellation, Hugo Otters. He asks where the Prime Minister is, and they reply that he is waiting at his residence, and the car is ready. Right, let's go. People nearby whisper, impressed by his presence. To them, he truly looks like a majestic chosen one. Once inside the car, Hugo Otters sits quietly, lost in thought. Then he notices his phone suddenly vibrating. It's those reporters again. He can't believe the rumors are still spreading. Rumors that Li Gun is alive. Then he spots an unknown number calling. It has already been over 20 years. He finally answers the phone. He turns it over in his hand, recalling what they once told Li Gun, or you will die tomorrow. He also remembers Li Gun smiling despite his broken face, asking why Hugo Otters had so little faith in him. During the attack on the Devil's Tower, he had left the structure and fought disaster monsters outside at Li Gong's request. He hopes his bad feeling was wrong and that Li Gun managed to return safely. But instead, Li Gun appeared severely injured, asking what had happened to him. The saints who entered the tower with him abandoned Li Gun and returned, carrying only the head of the Scarlet Eyes. All of them came back without him, having left Li Gun behind, and only brought back proof of the Scarlet Eye's defeat. Because that achievement was officially recognized, the 12 saints, myself included, were celebrated as heroes and gained great influence from it. Even later, while he was in the hospital, he still could not bring himself to do it. He refused to believe Li Gun was gone, so he kept urging others to keep searching for him. Li Gun, but that selfish bastard abandoned him. Hugo Otters, you realized it far too late. The man was Jianluis Morong. Saint of Cancer reminded Li Gun just how many disasters had emerged from that place. He said it was foolish to believe Li Gun could have made it out of that tower alive. Then he told Hugo Otters coldly that if he cared so much, he should search for Li Gun on his own. But if he chose to do that, the number of saints would fall to 11. Hugo Otters could do nothing but stand there, burning with helpless frustration. Returning to the present, he was still trapped in those thoughts. He kept telling himself that even someone as powerful as Li Gun could never have survived, and after so many years had passed, there was no longer any hope left for Li Gun. Then someone called out, Sir Hugo Otters, the Prime Minister is on the line. The incoming call appeared on the screen. Hugo Otters answered, and the Prime Minister immediately asked whether he could hear Li Gun. He asked if Hugo Otters had seen the news about the devil tower collapsing. Hugo Otters dismissed it, thinking it was the usual old story. He apologized, but said that if this was another request to look for Li Gun, he would turn it down. To Hugo Otters, Li Gun had died inside the Devil Tower that day. Whatever was happening there now was most likely caused by Li Gun's followers. If the situation was only being used to gain votes, the Prime Minister cut him off. No, that is not what this is about. He said South Korea had just received urgent information. Not long ago, that line received a call. Hugo Otters stopped for a moment. What line? The private hotline that had been created exclusively for Li Gun. As soon as Hugo Otters heard those words, he went completely still. He shouted, demanding to know if it was true, then anxiously started striking the unlucky driver. Stop the car. Stop it now. The driver rushed to follow his order. He hit the brakes immediately. At that moment, Hugo Otters understood something. The call he had received earlier might have been connected. His phone showed 30 missed calls and 1 message. The moment he saw it, his face turned pale. He hurriedly dialed the number back. The instant the call connected, a voice said, Hey, Hugo Otters. I'm going to come find you, and you will pay for this. Those words struck Hugo Otters like a bolt of lightning. Then, despite his disbelief, a smile slowly appeared on his face. With the way that person spoke, it truly could have been Lee Gun. He instantly ordered the driver to turn around and return to the airport. The driver hesitated because of Hugo Otters' schedule, but Hugo Otters snapped and told him to head to the airport immediately. The scene returns to the small shop where Lee Gun jokes that Hugo Otters has matured and even gotten better at answering calls. One of the boys asks who he had called, and Lee Gun casually replies that it was just some guy. Then he points at the device and says it is a cell phone, adding that it is rather interesting. He entered the tower in 2005, so if the year was now 2025, then the world had changed a great deal. The boy is shocked to learn that this is Lee Gun's first time using a cell phone. He explains that with it, he can also look up news and watch videos. Lee Gun immediately shows interest. That means he can search for news about the protagonist, and even see the most popular current stories. A flood of articles quickly appears on the screen. Lee Gun silently scans through them while the boy watches with wide-eyed amazement. After a while, Lee Gun notices the comment section. Some claim his return is impossible, while others say he could conquer the world if he came back. Another insults Lee Gun by comparing him to the 12 Saints, and soon the replies descend into chaos. The protagonist grows so furious that he almost crushes the phone, making the poor kid plead with him not to break it. He is enraged that those bastards are being praised for defeating Scarlet Eyes. Back then, they had been terrified, yet now they were trying to push everything onto Lee Gun. He tries to dismiss it, saying it makes no difference to him, but then something comes back to mind. That sudden thought makes Lee Gun stop completely. He searches further and finds a special report about what happened after Lee Gun's death. At that time, Lee Gun had vanished without a trace. He had decided that if he died, all his assets would be donated to orphanages and school foundations. Now he wonders whether that wish was actually carried out. He keeps searching, but the articles say the 12 Saints mourned him and honored his sacrifice. They also claim he left all his belongings and relics to them, so his will could continue through them. Every one of the 12 Saints accepted it, except Hugo Otters, the Saint of Sagittarius. In other words, those bastards had taken everything. The protagonist loses his temper, crushes the boy's phone, and swears he will ruin them all, including those useless gods. The poor child collapses to the floor, crying over the ruined phone, while Lee Gun thanks it for its service and feels relieved that the call history is gone. The kid is utterly devastated. Meanwhile, Lee Gun considers what he should do next if he wants the world to know he has returned. His current appearance is nothing like the face he had 20 years ago. Even if he went around telling everyone he was Lee Gun, people would simply assume he had lost his mind. So until he can deal with every last saint, it is wiser for him to stay hidden. The boy is still crying over the phone when a system window suddenly appears. It warns Lee Gun to be careful because someone is watching him. A red mist begins to gather around Lee Gun. Lee Gun immediately recognizes the energy. As he rises to his feet, the boy asks where he is going. The protagonist simply says he is going out to get some air. After stepping outside, bizarre goat-like creatures with burning bodies and flying monsters appear. He recognizes them instantly. Avatars. They are confirmed by the system as servants of the Ares sanctuary. The avatars are building a barrier under Ares' name, suppressing other constellations' influence, aiming to force Lee Gun into making an offering. Lee Gun clicks his tongue, thinking those bastards serve the gods while humans are the ones who suffer the cost. He cracks his knuckles, preparing to fight, but someone nearby suddenly starts complaining loudly in the background. Lee Gun? Lee Gun, seriously? The man complains that he keeps hearing stories about Jesus. Says he is completely sick of hearing that name. They are badmouthing Lee Gun right in front of him. A woman standing with Lee Gun also joins in. She says the news never stops talking about it, and she is already tired of it too. He simply watches them, wondering why the media treats someone supposedly from the past like a constant headline. And he notices something else unusual. There is a badge pinned on the man's shirt. Two boys recognize it immediately. They are from the Gemini Sanctuary. One of the boys quickly tells Lee Gun to come back, warning him not to provoke them. But the protagonist keeps staring, and the man notices it. What are you looking at? He snaps, telling Lee Gun to get lost. The boys panic, thinking they are now in serious trouble. The man takes a drag and blows smoke straight into Lee Gun's face. He mocks Lee Gun, saying if he has a problem, he should try doing something about it. Before things escalate, the woman tries to pull Lee Gun away. She says they should leave before he humiliates himself, while the man casually pats his head like he is nothing. He keeps hurling insults without stopping. The insults continue and the woman laughs along with him. He sneers, asking why anyone would admire a weak so-called saint. He even questions whether the protagonist was ever a real saint, which finally pushes him over the edge. One boy nervously reminds Lee Gun that they are disciples of Gemini, all above A rank. Lee Gun ignores the warning and calls them cowards. The man turns around and asks if that insult was directed at Lee Gun. Lee Gun fires back with an even harsher insult, clearly confirming it. The man then walks straight over to him. He demands Lee Gun repeat himself, shocked that a normal human with no mana would dare speak like that. Lee Gun says nothing and refuses to respond. He simply flicks the man on the forehead, sending him flying back unconscious in an instant. He slams into the ground with force, causing a massive blast, leaving the woman stunned. Two boys cannot believe what they have just witnessed. Lee Gun only smiles faintly at the scene before him. Now the woman is truly terrified. The protagonist calls her out, saying he already knew what she tried to do behind his back. She had already gathered fire magic in her hand, attempting a surprise attack from behind, but it was completely useless from the start. Lee Gun responds with another flick, sending her flying and smashing through everything in her path. She collapses to the ground, leaving the boys completely speechless. They ask how he can use abilities so openly in the middle of the street. Lee Gun replies that they are mistaken. If he had truly used a skill, they would already be dead. So he took down an A-rank opponent, using nothing but his bare hand. Then he crouches down beside Lee Gun. The man examines his necklace closely. He rips it off, saying something felt strange when he struck Lee Gun earlier. Lee Gun asks why they even had a divine artifact if it was not real. Only saints were supposed to possess items like that. One boy finally realizes Lee Gun knows nothing and begins explaining that decades ago humanity nearly went extinct due to calamities. Humanity survived thanks to divine beings and the saints they chose. But since 12 people alone could not protect the entire world, saints gathered followers and built divine cathedrals. Those who gained power through saints and awakened became known as disciples. As he explains, an example of such power display appears on screen. Their ranks reflect strength, with SS rank at the top belonging to saints and chosen divine beings. Below them are SS 10-star candidates, then S rank divine captains who lead the disciples. After that come A rank disciples, followed by B rank and lower tiers. Divine beings grow stronger through the faith of their disciples. That is why cathedrals host events and competitions to attract more followers. The disciples they select are even granted gifts from the divine beings. While listening, Lee Gun looks over the displayed treasures. He realizes all of this developed during the 20 years he was gone. Then someone calls out, telling Lee Gun to look. When he turns, the goat-like figures appear again, and the system issues a warning. The House of Riches, Greed, and Aries are enjoying the situation. They demand that Lee Gun kill both the woman and the man, craving bloodshed. They even promise a reward if he eliminates them, causing the boy to panic. He says Lee Gun has attracted the attention of the House of the Gods. They are essentially shadows of divine beings. Opposing them is equivalent to opposing the gods themselves. The boy urges Lee Gun to obey, but he simply smiles and continues speaking. He wonders why Yang's fools are in a place like this. Now he understands they were trying to feed that filthy pig. For God's sake, he really has not changed at all. Then Lee Gun begins pulling out his power. He slams his foot down, and a massive blue shock wave surges across the area, crashing into every floating goat-like creature. The boys raise their arms to protect themselves from the burst of light. Then the red smoke is swept away completely. How dare you oppose me? House of Airs retreats, and the barrier vanishes as well. That Hyan is definitely far from ordinary. Then Lee Gun drags up a thug lying on the ground. He asks whether that man truly belongs to Gimini's disciples. The answer is yes. They are part of the country's strongest divine cathedral. It's an elite organization filled with powerful and influential figures. Lee Gun goes straight to the point, asking if they must be rich. The boy only stares back in confusion. After all, everything that man wore looked expensive. So the protagonist gets right to business and says it's time to loot. And for Lee Gun, looting is the most enjoyable part. Later that night, they finally arrive and Lee Gun complains that the day felt endless. The boys begin telling him where they live. One points to his second-floor apartment, while the other says his place is just down the block. They thank Lee Gun for protecting them and bringing them home safely. After that, they simply stand there and wait. Lee Gun yawns and asks why they are not going inside, saying he is tired and clearly serious. Before long, they are inside and Lee Gun removes his shirt before cutting his hair. When he finishes, he says it finally looks the way it should. Now he has his style back again. Jian gives Lee Gun an impressed thumbs up and asks if he really cut it himself. The protagonist becomes slightly embarrassed. He explains that long ago, the side effects of his power made each strand of hair precious. A strong breeze could almost make him go bald. That reminds Lee Gun of how miserable he once looked, half bald and completely worn down. Now he can barely believe his good fortune. Even his hair has returned to normal. Then he suddenly stops. Why is there a calamity inside this house? He immediately swats the tiny bug. It crumbles into dust, and the boy panics because even professionals normally could not defeat one barehanded. There isn't only one. More keep appearing, and Lee Gun wonders what they are sensing from him. Someone asks if he is giving off an aura that draws calamities toward him. Lee Gun rejects that idea, saying it usually means something inside the house is attracting them. The boy looks at Lee Gun in silence. Lee Gun says the cause is probably the evil relics kept in the house. The boy protests, insisting they were gifts from a saint. Even if they did not belong to him, he says they were still blessed items. Lee Gun answers by smashing one of them immediately. The boy collapses to the floor in despair, while the protagonist calls the item disgusting. Then he points them out one by one, explaining that the mask is a divine relic used to watch its owner. The music box steals personal information, and the clock attracts calamities. The poor kid looks completely devastated. Lee Gun becomes furious. Those rotten saints did not just take his money. They are also selling cursed relics to people while stealing their information. Just thinking about it is enough to make Lee Gun's anger rise. The boy is stunned by Lee Gun's rage, but he is told to throw everything away. Meanwhile, someone arrives outside and hears all the shouting. Inside, Lee Gun stands there while the boy cries and clings tightly to him. Lee Gun. The newcomer steps inside and looks around in complete confusion. He asks who he is, and the anxious boy blurts out, Chun Sunja. That immediately makes Lee Gun snap. He shouts that he is the owner of the house, idiot, and begins releasing his power. The story then moves to Erza's sanctuary at Yang's residence. He is shocked to learn that the Korean avatars have vanished. The report says the entire Korean branch has fallen into chaos. Yang cannot believe it. An avatar is a direct servant of the gods. Only an incredibly powerful awakened one could force them back. So he orders his men to contact the other saints and ask whether they were involved. They obey, but add that they still have not been able to reach Hugo Otters's sanctuary. Yang dismisses it, saying Hugo Otters probably went to the UK to act as a mercenary again. But then he learns that once Hugo Otters reached the UK, he suddenly changed direction. That makes Yang ask where he went instead. The answer is Korea. After hearing that, Yang begins to feel uneasy. Hugo Otters was once a close friend of Lee Gun, so Yang wonders whether this is connected to the rumors the protagonist survived. That would mean he remembers Lee Gun as he was in the past, terribly disfigured. Did he truly return? Damn it. He refuses to accept it and throws a chandelier at an innocent servant. Then he demands every piece of information they have. They report that near the place where one avatar disappeared, a disciple of Jedi, Jiminy, was found unconscious on the street. According to the witnesses, he had started trouble with an extremely handsome man. Handsome man? Yang then decides it cannot be Jiang. The man he knew had a ruined face, but either way, things have been going terribly lately. There is still a chance the protagonist is alive and has come back. For some unknown reason, the avatars in Korea are disappearing, and even worse than that, they recently failed to defeat the Spider Queen as well. If things continue this way, Yang risks losing his position, so he orders his team to get the jet ready immediately. They ask him whether he intends to go there personally. He confirms that he will. He wants to witness it firsthand, so he sets out with his subordinates. The scene then shifts back to Korea, to a hospital connected to Jiminy, a man who previously messed with Lee Gun. From earlier, he remains unconscious, while an enraged elderly man demands to know who harmed his grandson. The thug is still lying motionless in the hospital bed. Meanwhile, someone reassures that there is no need to worry, as the Gemini Sanctuary has already dispatched their leader. He is the S-Class Gemini Knight known as Frozen Min Sung-hun. Back at the apartment, the newcomer asks whether they encountered Lee Gun at the Devil's Tower earlier. He hears claims that Lee Gun dealt with all the disasters alone without any weapon, and the boy nervously confirms it. Then comes another question: did he really take down an A-class level 2 opponent? The boy once again confirms that it is true. The owner completely loses composure, insisting none of it makes sense, especially since Lee Gun destroyed every relic in the house. The man calmly responds that all of them were fake, including the one placed before Lee Gun. The red-haired man, on the verge of exploding, demands to know which sect the protagonist belongs to, but the protagonist only smiles and says he has no need for one. At this point, the man is only moments away from losing control. He then asks which god Lee Gun serves, and Lee Gun replies that he serves none of those foolish gods, only himself. The questioning continues. What is his awakened class? He casually answers, perhaps a worker. Finally comes the last question, his name. Protagonist replies calmly, saying his name is the protagonist. The moment Chun Sun-jae hears this, he begins gathering power while the other boy tries to calm Lee Gun down. Chun Sun-jae has already stopped listening. Lee Gun has entered someone else's home without permission. He destroyed all the relics and now even dares to use the name Lee Gun. As a massive aura erupts behind him, he shouts Lee Gun's name, demanding how he could dare imitate him. Jiwoo yells that this is their home and asks if Sung-jae is trying to destroy everything. A system message appears for the protagonist. The magic power of the Gemini Temple is being released. Lee Gun becomes excited, sensing he can study everything here. Another window appears, asking to activate a skill. It locks onto Chun Sun-jae of the Gemini House, Awakened Class A. Title: One who punishes possessed abilities. Skills listed include Witch's Stake S rank and Ice Capsule Seal A rank, with traits such as Genius, Violent, Stubborn, obsessive and idle admirer. His genius trait significantly enhances his learning ability. Lee Gun notes that Chun Sun-jae already uses high-level summons at a young age, proving that his talent is genuine. Meanwhile, Chun Sun-jae continues powering up his massive summoning ability. The other boy panics and shouts for Lee Gun to run. He warns that Chun Sun-jae is an A-class awakened from Gemini Sanctuary. On top of that, he is a complete fanatic when it comes to Lee Gun. He then yells at Jiwoo to escape as well, or he will get caught in the fight too. While he is still shouting, the protagonist suddenly appears behind Chun Sun-jae, warning him not to play with fire as he raises his finger. Just as he begins to turn around, Lee Gun flicks him on the forehead, sending him flying instantly. Afterward, the other boy panics, saying this fool might burn down not only the house, but the entire building. By then, the boy in the back is still panicking and rambling nonstop. The red-haired man collapses unconscious on the floor, and the boy nervously asks if Chun Sun-jae is dead. Lee Gun replies that he is fine, just knocked out briefly. That answer only makes the other boy even more anxious. It turns out the red-haired man has a huge bump from the flick on his forehead. He says he is going to sleep and will wake up when he wakes up, while the other boy keeps asking whether Chun Sun-jae is still alive. He tries to get a response, but the red-haired man only lies there with foam at the mouth. After that, Lee Gun walks into the room. Inside, he finds numerous statues and figurines of himself. He stares at them and asks what this ridiculous thing is supposed to be. The boy explains that Chun Sun-jae is completely obsessed with the protagonist. At that moment, the red-haired man wakes up and shouts not to touch them carelessly, calling them his precious Lee Gun collection, more valuable than his own life. Lee Gun walks over, tears the head off one figure, and says this is making him feel terrible. He then suggests they might as well tear all the heads off, leaving the man frozen in shock. The red-haired man screams about his figures and begs him to stop, but the protagonist continues destroying them anyway. He says again that he is not some insane person. He adds that he is Lee Gun, while the collector is completely shattered and bursts into tears. The scene shifts to a cafe where someone is watching the news. The report states that 2 Gemini affiliates were attacked yesterday by an unidentified individual. Witnesses also claim the suspect stole items from the victims. The viewer is Hugo Otters. He immediately concludes it must be Lee Gun's doing and wonders what that fool is up to now. He grumbles that this is the first news he hears after arriving in Korea, right as a waitress asks for his order. Hugo Otters suddenly turns cold and tells Yang Wei to stop the act and get lost. The waitress smiles and admits he noticed right away. It is then revealed that the overweight man has been controlling the woman's body. He says he could not reach Hugo Otters, and judging by how quickly he arrived in Korea, he must care deeply about Lee Gun. That alone tells Lee Gun everything he needs to know, so he demands that Hugo Otters reveal everything he knows about Lee Gun. Hugo Otters snaps back immediately, saying that is exactly why he hates body possessors, and flicks him away. In an instant, the woman regains consciousness. Confused, she wonders what she is doing there. Hugo Otters curses Yang Wei, saying he needs to find Lee Gun before anyone else does. He calls out, trying to figure out where Lee Gun is. Scene then cuts to a supermarket. The red-haired man and the boy are shopping, and the boy says that Hyung might actually be the protagonist. The red-haired man immediately denies it, saying there is no way they do not look alike at all. To Lee Gun, he is the hero who once saved humanity. There is no way that delinquent could be Lee Gun. The boy insists he clearly saw Lee Gun emerge from the Devil Tower, and his power was far beyond normal. So if that really was him, the red-haired man cuts him off, saying no, he is certain that person is not Lee Gun, because his father confirmed it himself. The other boy tries to argue, bringing up what his father said, but the red-haired man interrupts again and tells them to just go pay. At that moment, a woman suddenly screams in the distance. She yells that a thief is here. Both of them freeze, wondering who shouted. Then someone suddenly rushes past them. He moves so fast that items scatter and shelves are knocked over in his wake. The red-haired man instantly recognizes the speed and says that man is a Scorpio affiliate. He is using his ability to steal wallets and valuables throughout the supermarket. The figure darts through the store like a blur. As he moves, he thinks to himself that no one can match his speed. Even if other affiliates show up, it won't matter. He claims he has already taken most of what he wants and is moving on to the next target. Just as he prepares to leave, suddenly, he is struck hard in the ribs. It is Lee Gun, calmly stating that he caught him. The thief is stunned, and the other boy asks why Lee Gun is there. The protagonist casually replies that he came because he forgot to ask them to buy chicken. The thief drops to the ground, writhing in pain. Someone nearby remarks that Lee Gun is quite impressive. It is difficult to catch a Scorpio affiliate because of their extreme speed. Still, judging from his energy, they assume he is just an ordinary believer. They tell Lee Gun that next time, he should report it to the police first. The arrogant man barely has time to react. when something suddenly draws his attention. He turns around as the entire supermarket begins to shake. The thief panics, thinking it might be an earthquake. He realizes this is his chance. He decides to use the chaos to escape and immediately runs. While running, he thinks the strange man must have finished Lee Gun. But now the earthquake has given him a chance to flee. Suddenly, the ground in front of Lee Gun splits open. A giant centipede emerges from it, and the thief freezes. He realizes it is a calamity and cannot believe one appeared in a green zone. He curses himself for getting involved and not escaping earlier. Even so, he still tries to run away. He assumes that no matter how strong it still won't be able to keep up with Lee Gun's speed. But as he continues smiling, the monster suddenly lunges forward with its jaws wide open. The result of that moment is easy to imagine. And the creature is finally shown in full view. It is the same monster the overweight man mentioned earlier. The one they failed to capture now stares down at everyone like they are prey. Panic immediately spreads throughout the supermarket. The monster continues to watch them with a cold, deadly stare. An announcement confirms this is not a drill. Panic grows even worse as another broadcast voice comes in, reporting a calamity inside the supermarket with civilians still trapped. Everyone is ordered to evacuate the building immediately. With the queen spider appearing, the supermarket's threat level has been upgraded to a red zone situation. Then the monster unleashes a swarm of smaller creatures. Insect-like swarms and centipede-like creatures scatter, and a child is left crying as a monster rushes toward them. Just as it closes in, a green flash suddenly appears. Lee Gun smashes the creature away from the child. He takes it out with a single heavy punch. The child looks back in shock. Lee Gun checks on the kid and tells him to be more careful. But the moment the boy gets a clear look at him, he panics and runs off without even thanking him. Lee Gun is left standing there, slightly speechless. Still, he decides the kid's to be fine. Then he wonders what kind of supermarket has more calamities than customers. After being away for so long, he decides it's time to warm up and begins drawing his weapon. The scene then cuts to a speeding car where the overweight man hears reports of a calamity at a supermarket in Bochon. At first he says he doesn't care, then asks what type it is. He hears it is the queen spider. He is completely shocked. He curses, recalling that the previous raid failed and they barely managed to seal it. Now he wonders if it has escaped, admitting he can't handle a red-class calamity alone. Then it is explained that after calamities appeared in the world, humanity classified them into 6 levels of danger. Blue represents low danger, green means safe, yellow signals alert, orange means evacuation is required and danger is rising, red indicates the area has been overtaken by calamities. Black zones indicate that human survival is virtually impossible. So if the queen spider shows up, it means that market has already transformed. It has turned into a red zone. The driver then asks Yang Wei what they should do about the market. After a brief thought, he says everything must be buried. Driver is stunned and asks Lee Gun to repeat himself. Yang Wei replies that no one must learn the truth. If people discover that the failed raid caused even more destruction, it will spiral into a major disaster. So he orders them to claim everyone inside is dead, and to have their affiliates bury the entire building. Then the scene shifts back to the supermarket. The market is already being ravaged by rampaging monsters. Bald Man curses the situation. Using an ice prison technique, he freezes nearby insects and monsters around Lee Gun. While attacking, Lee Gun warns them not to underestimate an S rank. It seems this bald man might be the operative sent by the old man to deal with Lee Gun. Even though the monsters are frozen, they quickly break out of the ice and rush forward again. The bald man is shocked that his ice magic was so easily shattered. Then Lee Gun suddenly appears in front of him, holding a pile of cans casually, telling him to step aside. The bald man doesn't even notice when he moved. Lee Gun looks at the monsters and comments that they must be starving to target humans like this. He casually tosses one of the cans into the air. He catches it at high speed, smirking as he says, "Eat this." He begins hurling cans at the monsters, each throw landing with heavy impact. The creatures all scream in unison. One of them is cleanly cut down and split in half as Lee Gun tears through the rest effortlessly. "You think you can bare your fangs at me, trash?" Smiling like a maniac, he clears the market idle by aisle. "Know your place, weaklings." The Gemini affiliates watch in shock as Lee Gun wipes them out at incredible speed. Then the system appears beside Lee Gun, announcing, "You have defeated a calamity. Your zodiac experience has increased. New materials have been obtained for crafting." Materials? What is this system talking about? A small crystal forms in Lee Gun's hand as the system explains further. With the collected materials, you can create skills and relics. The production skill has evolved. Lee Gun decides to test it later. For now, moving like this actually feels good. Even with his physical abilities reduced by 50% due to recovery penalties, he may now be able to draw out even greater power than before. Meanwhile, the bald man stares at Lee Gun in complete disbelief. He cannot believe he erased S-rank calamities so easily when he himself could not stop them at all. Meanwhile, Sung Sung suddenly asks Lee Gun when he got that dagger, showing it to him, leaving the boy frozen in shock. Where did this guy even come from? Lee Gun remains calm, but the bold man suddenly speaks up. Hey, I knew something was off. So you're the one who attacked our affiliates? That statement briefly catches Lee Gun off guard. The man recalls the two people Lee Gun previously crushed. Still, Lee Gun tells him to shut up and slaps his cheek. The bald man collapses, stunned. Damn it, how did he figure it out? You know too much. How could I not, idiot? That outfit and badge came from your affiliates. He only realized it after Lee Gun defeated them. It turns out Lee Gun was wearing Yang's outfit the entire time. And that badge is an S-rank relic exclusive to Gemini affiliates. Sung Jae examines the badge while the bald man keeps shouting. That relic is probably why you're absurdly strong, right? Wrong. Lee Gun looks down at it. What is this trash? Disgusting. Then he grabs it. The bald man turns pale. You insane bastard. That thing is worthless. At best it's just decoration. You were all fooled by that witch. The man can only gasp, calling it blasphemy. He shakes his head in disbelief, unable to accept that this guy is still acting the same way after 20 years. While Lee Gun is talking with the bald man, the monster suddenly charges in. The protagonist's expression turns serious. Sung Jae and the red-haired man point in shock. It is the queen spider, tearing through everything in sight. Panic spreads as destruction unfolds, and the bald man moves instantly. Out of the way, Queen Spider, Gianna. He immediately releases his aura. Then he leaps toward the monster. Hey, Queen, I've got a gift for you. He lands a heavy strike on her, sending the massive spider flying backward. Everyone watches in stunned silence at what just happened. What the hell? He charged the Queen Spider without a relic, without even using any external power. Then a voice echoes through the supermarket. All Gemini affiliates inside. Bald man instantly recognizes it. Wait, that voice? Bishop Choi? Telepathy? Yes, Bishop, this is Sung Ho. Sung Jae and Sung Ho. Is that you? Get out of the building right away. The one speaking is Gemini Bishop Choi Sung Ho. Oh, the Aries people are about to bring down the entire building. Outside, they are already getting ready to demolish it. Choi continues, saying Yang Wei is coming here himself. Stop Lee Gun. And that queen spider in the supermarket is a monster even Yang Wei could not defeat. That is why they are so determined to bury the entire place. It would be a disaster if their failure became public. Sung-ho, you borrowed a teleportation skill, didn't you? Take Chun Sun-jae and leave immediately. But only the two of us. Something causes Sung-ho to pause. He looks around and notices wounded people scattered everywhere. The damage inside the market is far too obvious to overlook. Meanwhile, Lee Gun is still fighting directly at the front. Sung-ho goes quiet while he thinks Choi pushes Lee Gun. Why are you taking so long? Is something wrong? No, sir, nothing is wrong. At the same time, the red-haired boy shouts back. Asking for help would not change anything anyway. So what exactly are you saying? Can't you see how bad it is here? You're telling everyone to be buried under this place. Sung-ho hesitates once more. Then he says he understands, but if people learn the Queen's spider appeared in the heart of the city, what will they think of us? He continues before anyone has a chance to answer. The citizens will place the blame on the divine sanctuary. Their faith will weaken, and the god's power will weaken with it. Humanity's devotion must remain strong if we want to keep receiving divine protection. He says they only have 2 teleports left, so only 2 people can escape. Chun Sun-jae, you are coming with me. I have my orders, and I am getting you out. Out, but Chun Sun-jae refuses to abandon his friend, especially when so many people are still trapped inside. You fool. This is not the time to make me look bad. I am not dying here because of some useless brat like you. He begins summoning his ice power again and adds, I cannot ignore the saint's orders, so I will clear away all this dead. Wait, then you leave me no choice. The moment the red-haired boy hears that, he pulls out his weapon as well. You repulsive piece of trash. Chun Sun-jae, do you really think you can fight me? Our levels are nowhere near the same. Forget that useless conscience of yours. Yours and make the smart decision, but before he can finish speaking, a centipede slams into Lee Gun's back. He crashes face first into the ground, sliding across it hard. Benjian looks over and says what? You're still here. It's dangerous, so hurry up and get out. Hang, the boy calls out. He is using the word for an older brother. Then the red-haired kid explains. The exit is blocked by calamities, so we cannot escape. Our only choices are to use teleportation, or defeat every calamity here. The queen spider is still there, glaring everyone down. There are also many injured people around. Outside, the men in suits keep gathering purple energy. And he adds that the Aries constellation sect is sealed off the entire area. Lee Gun clicks his tongue. What a pain. The bald man, still battered on the floor, gets up and starts screaming that Lee Gun dared to crush him. Lee Gun. He cuts Lee Gun off, saying he thought the man had already run away and abandoned everyone. Shut up, idiots. Survive on your own if you want. I am leaving no matter what. But the moment he tries to teleport, a web shoots onto his back. Queen Spider has caught Lee Gun. But no way. She pulls Lee Gun straight to her jaws, and that seems to be the end of Lee Gun. Only his phone drops to the floor. Everyone stares at the spider with grim expressions. Lee Gun tells the other 2, I will handle this. Help the injured and escape when you get the chance. The red-haired boy and Chun Sun-jae exchange a look, look but the protagonist. Adds, I will end this quickly, so move. Outside, the barrier continues rising. Yang arrives and asks for a report. They tell Lee Gun they have sealed off the store and placed the entire building under high alert. He does not seem impressed. For something they began before he even arrived. This is not enough. Then they notice the barricade is not holding because something is blocking it. Suddenly, a green light erupts, breaking the barricade apart and sending everyone flying back. Then a massive serpent symbol appears across the area. What is that? A snake. People begin rushing out of the supermarket in a panic. They beg for help, shouting that the calamity is still inside, and people remain trapped there. The men in suits try to restrain the crowd, while others shout that someone was grabbing the spiders. Yang watches everything unfold without saying a word. Grab the spiders. No, that cannot be possible. Even I cannot catch one, so who did? Done. He begins releasing a deep crimson aura. The guards immediately warn everyone around them. Sir Yang Wei, there may still be calamities inside. He ignores it and orders everyone to stay on full alert. Then he leaps rapidly from one building to another, until he finally enters the supermarket and speaks. My God, how could someone have killed it? Who did this? There are clear signs of battle everywhere. What happened here? Is someone actually hunting the queen spider? This is becoming even more complicated. There are already too many things to worry about. But this energy, he suddenly runs forward, looks down and freezes. Wait, that bastard? Why is he here? In the crowd below, he spots Hugo Otters. Yang begins to suspect that Hugo Otters may be behind everything. Could it really be Lee Gun? It almost adds up until someone suddenly speaks. Hey, have you been doing fine without me? The moment Yang hears that voice, his body stiffens. What is it, fatty? Something bothering you? It was Lee Gun. After talking for a while, he asks why he looks like he's eaten something unpleasant. Shocked, the large man stammers, You're here? Green emergency alarm begins blaring across the scene. Firefighters rush people out while shouting for anyone injured to come forward. They order everyone to move away from the building, while Denim and the red-haired man stand thinking, that guy really is Lee Gun. His appearance is different, but his movements are unmistakable. Then someone calls out, Chun Sunjae. It was Hugo Otters. He stares at Lee Gun and asks, Cheon Chun Sunja, why are you here? Denim freezes and mutters, the Sagittarius Saint. The red-haired man looks confused. What? Since when did you come back? So this is how you speak to your father. It is revealed that the red-haired man is Hugo Otter's son, a shocking twist. Denim smiles faintly, while the red-haired man is clearly furious. Hugo Otters continues watching them closely. Then he says it's good they don't appear seriously injured. A bit of treatment from the medics should be enough. What matters is that they were inside the supermarket, and I heard the calamity was killed. So who did it? The red-haired man ignores Lee Gun completely, still burning with anger. He glares, wondering who Hugo Otters will target next. Denim then says, but brother Lee Gun should be fine, right? The moment Hugo Otters hears that name, he rushes forward. You just said Lee Gun? Where is he? You know Lee Gun? The frightened man panics. Sorry. Are we talking about the same person? Yes, he's inside the supermarket right now. He's also the one who defeated the Queen Spider. He said his name is Lee Gun. Tell me exactly what happened in there. At that moment, a massive explosion erupts inside the supermarket. Hugo Otters turns and sees the blast behind Lee Gun. Lee Gun, then the scene shifts again. The large man is now battered and dazed. You bastard, he mutters while the protagonist only smiles. You're really dramatic. We've known each other for 20 years, and you attack me the moment you see me. Me? Who the hell are you? Big man snaps. You look a bit like Lee Gun, but his face is unscarred, and his voice feels different too. There's no way he could still look this young. You bastard. How dare you impersonate Lee Gun? You almost fooled me for a second. The large man continues shouting furiously. How dare you challenge me? Are you ready for what comes next? The protagonist simply stares at him silently. What are you even talking about, idiot? Then he steps forward and strikes the man squarely in the chest, sending him flying. Did you think I was joking? He doesn't stop. He batters him like a ping-pong ball until he crashes to the ground. With one hand in his pocket, the protagonist walks forward calmly. Do you people really need a beating before you listen? Did life improve after getting rid of me? You filthy bastard? You stole my relics and even faked my testimony. From what I heard, the large man can only stare in shock. Fine. I was already planning to send you flying anyway. I'll start by teaching you a lesson. The man is still shaken as the protagonist continues speaking. After that, I'll go to your house, your sanctuary, your relics, and the rest of those trash saints too. I'll destroy everything. I won't let any of it remain. His tone and presence make it clear he is not bluffing. Laughing nervously, the man thinks, I couldn't even track his movements earlier. Is he really legitimate? Did he actually survive the tower and return? No way. If you really are Lee Gun. The large man begins releasing his power. Prove it to me. A red-purple energy flares up around Lee Gun. A dark symbol spreads across the ground, and something rises behind Lee Gun. Lee Gun appears with a crown as the system voice announces it. The Master of Errors, the Jade Emperor, has revealed himself. So just a fragment of your god actually appeared. Even after showing up, the big guy still acts arrogant. He unleashes a wild barrage. Chains surge out to seize Lee Gun, and once they coil around him, Lee Gun, he scoffs, do we still seem weak to you now? I have no idea how you managed to return from that town. Power, but I'll make sure you regret it. Skill, divine armament. Even more chains wrapped tightly around the protagonist. They pin Lee Gun down as an enormous spike. Takes shape right before Lee Gun. Wow, that is actually impressive. Shut your mouth, bastard. Every spike launches straight ahead. Toward Lee Gun, tearing through the entire surroundings. A heap of blades piles up over Lee Gun, layer after layer. Is he finally gone? I was shocked he even returned from the Devil's Tower. Even so, he is still as foolish as ever, charging at me head on like this. Did he really believe a few small level increases and some experience points would be enough? What a fool. Did you honestly think I spent the past 20 years doing nothing? Then a green glow begins to shine from within the spikes. The big guy instantly goes tense. An explosion suddenly erupts. The blades are blasted away as the protagonist rushes out and lands a heavy blow on the big guy's face. The impact sends Lee Gun staggering backward. How did he live through that? Are you even human? The protagonist laughs. So you finally noticed, you fat bastard. Presses one foot against the big guy's stomach and continues speaking. Yeah, exactly. I really have returned. How did he make it out alive? And what happened to you? Even your weapons reek like garbage now. A recovery like that should be impossible, even for Aquarius healers. System messages begin appearing. You have experienced near death, conditions fulfilled, skill unlocked 13th sense. Thanks to you I became stronger. Now why don't I test something new? Hey, wait, please. The system continues displaying messages. God Ars is stunned by Lee Gun and tearfully asks why he is still alive. The God Ars shakes, insisting that this should be impossible. The God Ars disappears beneath a surge of curses. Big guy is left in panic. What? What is happening? Why is a god vanishing? Protagonist gives his answer. Maybe he realized there's no point in fighting me. Since I'm feeling generous, I'll only make you endure what I went through. He says it with a pitiful smile. Then he starts overwhelming the big guy. And after a while, sometime later, Hugo Otters arrives with the man's subordinates asking, what in the world happened here? Here, the whole area is in ruins, and Hugo Otters silently takes it in. That energy, Yang Wei, this was definitely Lee Gun's work. Only he could leave chaos like this behind. One of the men adds, something feels strange. I can still sense Yang Wei's energy here, but it is far too faint for someone who is still alive. What happened? First, Hugo Otters says nothing. Then he releases his aura and tells them, step back for a moment. In the next instant, he disappears, heads straight toward where the big guy had been. After scanning the area, he curses. Lee Gun, that bastard. He even left a message behind. Pathetic bastard. What kind of trouble are you causing now? The scene changes to Ira's house. The protagonist arrives calmly and says, so the divine artifact Yang Wei stole from me is here. Huh. He steps inside and, before long, he finds a statue of the big guy, with people moving all around the place. The protagonist glances around and says that bastard is completely obsessed with appearing wealthy. He is showing off all this treasure, but I can already sense my divine artifact. What are these fake relics? Looks like he even took clothes from my house. Every weapon here is fake. Then something catches his eye. Labeled toothpick used by. There you are, my precious. Then the scene cuts to people in shock. Shock spreads as a red alarm begins blaring. It's the thief. Hurry. All guards move to Area B. They arrive, the protagonist is already there, holding the toothpick. In moments, an entire group surrounds Lee Gun. Lee Gun, raise your hands, put the item down, and surrender quietly. He only stares at them. Yeah, I really don't feel like it. Then he flicks the tiny toothpick, and it begins tearing through the surroundings, knocking people away. They are tossed in every direction. Meanwhile, he calmly says, you should always use what suits you best, right? Then it shifts form. What was once a toothpick transforms into a slime. It's good to see you again. The system announces that a divine artifact has been unlocked. Slime responsible for creating divine artifacts. Guidance rank S trait, shape-shifting rank S. Another system message follows right after. Conditions met. Skill creation workshop unlocked. A 15-meter workshop space has been generated. Default workshop functions activated. Production, repair, reinforcement, and dismantling. With the creation skill engraved, traits of the artifact creating slime can now be bestowed. Alright, should we leave this place now? Another system alert appears, detecting strong energy from Ares' divine artifact. Leaving empty-handed would be disappointing. The slime watches as Lee Gun moves forward. He opens the door, saying it's time to farm. Meanwhile, Hugo Otters arrives too late. The large mansion is already in chaos, with people running everywhere in panic. Lee Gun, please stop this. People continue fleeing as the scene shifts again. The protagonist mutters that he's starting to feel hungry. Hungry? Hugo Otters suddenly shouts and rushes over in tears. But he runs straight past Lee Gun without even noticing him. Instead, he grabs another man, demanding why Lee Gun wasn't contacted if he had returned. Lee Gun just stares at him, confused by the situation. Hugo Otters continues rambling, saying his injuries look minor, but the rest of him is a mess, asking where he's going in that condition. The situation escalates unexpectedly. He suddenly kicks Hugo Otters in the face, snapping, "Can't you even recognize your own friend, idiot?" Hugo Otters spits blood in shock, while a nearby bystander desperately wants to escape the situation. Hugo Otters freezes, then notices the divine artifact. Artifact, the slime, he stares in disbelief. Before he can finish, Lee Gun cuts him off, threatening another strike if he keeps talking nonsense. The man struggles to even speak clearly. Finally, Hugo Otters blurts out Lee Gun's name and rushes forward emotionally. Even Lime looks pleased. Hugo Otters can hardly believe Lee Gun is truly alive. Hugo suddenly gets struck in the stomach. Hugo reels in pain, while the protagonist curses him for suddenly hugging him. Still, Hugo becomes even more convinced it really is Lee Gun. At that moment, the system issues a warning. Apollo has appeared. Everyone freezes as a golden aura spreads across the area with Apollo's arrival. Hugo stares upward in shock. Apollo opens his eyes, locking a strange gaze onto Lee Gun. Hugo grows more nervous, while Lee Gun remains calm. Apollo suddenly appears in front of them, leaving Hugo confused about his purpose here. Apollo continues silently observing Lee Gun. Lee Gun frowns and asks what is going on. The system identifies him, Apollo. He doubts Lee Gun truly survived and suggests verifying his identity, leaving Hugo confused on how to respond. Apollo draws his bow, saying a fire arrow will reveal the truth. Hugo quickly hugs Lee Gun, begging Apollo not to shoot, while Lee Gun considers eliminating the so-called god on the spot. The man is already aiming at someone he just met. Hugo continues trying to calm the situation, insisting Lee Gun isn't injured. The protagonist says he prefers to settle something first. Hugo flinches at his words. He recalls Lee Gun's voice and goes pale. While Lee Gun continues speaking, Hugo freezes in fear. Lee Gun explains he just escaped the tower, only to find his home sold, his reputation destroyed, and all his relics gone. Hugo tries to stop him, but Lee Gun says he'll settle things with just one punch for now. He follows through and takes the hit, stating that this proves Hugo is indeed his ally. Right then, Yang Wei's guards arrive, shouting that they've found Lee Gun. They order everyone to capture the man who stole the relics. Lee Gun blinks, realizing he's being pursued again. Hugo turns and asks what exactly was stolen. The protagonist casually says it wasn't much. He then reveals a bag full of items. Hugo realizes he has robbed Yang Wei's relic vault. Hugo tears up and shouts, asking what kind of chaos Lee Gun has caused this time. The guards attempt to arrest him immediately, but their leader stops them, saying this isn't someone they can handle. He knows even sending more of their kind won't change the outcome. Before anyone can react further, a massive gust suddenly tears through the area, and Lee Gun wonders what just happened. Something then leaps into the scene. One of them immediately recognizes the arrival. Gigantic sword slams down. They realize it clearly this is Ura's avatar, the Beast of Riches. The creature roars right in front of Hugo Otters and Lee Gun. They look up as Hugo Otters panics instantly. It is indeed Ura's avatar. He demands Lee Gun return what was taken from Yang Wei. Step back and run, he urges, but Hugo is told to stay calm instead. Lee Gun says he already has a plan, then instructs Lime to proceed. Lime's eyes begin to glow. Light spreads outward as energy flows into Lee Gun. Moments later, something resembling Lee Gun's weapon is expelled. The protagonist knows it will be difficult to fight an avatar in this condition, so he calls for its true form to awaken, the power that has been dormant until now. Green energy begins wrapping around his old weapon. Hugo Otters finds himself wondering what sort of power this really is. Then lightning crashes down, forming a massive new sword in Lee Gun's grip. He remarks that it finally has real usefulness. The system explains that the relic awakened through Ophiuch's power, and due to its snake hunter trait, the sword now carries a fatal strike effect. The blade sharpens further, and its overall strength increases. Beast, another skill has been unlocked. 13th Sense now allows Lee Gun to perceive enemy vital points and lines of destruction. C smirks, realizing this is his new ability. He immediately tests it and identifies the monster's weak spot. With that knowledge, he prepares to strike. He rushes straight toward the beast while Hugo Otters watches from behind. He recalls that this is exactly how Lee Gun has always fought before, always taking the lead and charging into danger. He tells Lee Gun to end it quickly, but the monster suddenly slams its paw down just as he closes in. Hugo Otters shouts in alarm. Yet something strange happens to the beast's paw. Lee Gun complains that Hugo Otters is shouting too loudly. He jokes that the beast's stench nearly knocked him out, and says it's his turn now. The monster is stunned as its paw is suddenly sent flying. Lee Gun cleanly slices it off. The beast roars in pain as the system warns them to stay cautious. Beast of Riches Pichu activates its skill. It continues roaring, but the protagonist remains calm, saying it would have been spared if it had behaved. Now he decides to start properly. He prepares for another attack. The system announces that Ophiuch's trait has activated, Snake Hunt. Jin swings, releasing a slash that races across the ground toward the monster. The monster, The force tears through everything in its path, spreading deep into the surrounding area. Everyone can only watch in shock. Lee Gun stands firm as the trail of destruction. The destruction clearly shows how powerful that strike was. Hugo Otters realizes this power is equal to Lee Gun at his peak. In no time, the monster is completely defeated, and the system announces he has defeated an avatar, increasing his divinity points. And it asks whether he wants to take the Beast of Riches, Pichu, as his own avatar. Lee Gun is surprised since only the 12 gods are supposed to control avatars, so this is possible as well. He walks over and gently pets the beast. As he pets it, his aura begins to wrap around it. The creature even sprouts wings as a result. The system confirms that the Beast of Riches Pichu has become Fucus's avatar. With the current avatar count updated, it now looks strangely adorable. Pichu shrinks down into a cute form. It then clings to its new master, and Lee Gun picks it up. He says a beast of riches like this will work perfectly as a treasure holder. Hugo Otter stands in the background, completely speechless. He has just turned another sanctuary's avatar into his own, and Hugo Otters cannot comprehend what kind of condition made that possible. Lee Gun gently holds the small beast for a moment when the system appears again. It informs him that he can now name Pichu. The protagonist pauses to think. After a moment, he names it Piggy, and the scene then shifts to Hugo Otter's residence. Hugo Otters calls Lee Gun a traitor, and Lee Gun fires back at him. He asks if Lee Gun has any idea how worried he had been. Lee Gun calmly replies that, unless he is mistaken, Hugo Otters got married, started a family, and lived his life while his friend was trapped in that dreadful tower. Lee Gun keeps pressing him, even joking that he might not be able to rob him in his own house anymore. He repeats the point more bluntly, but Hugo Otters insists there is no need to worry, saying Lee Gun can stay as long as he wants since he lives alone. That awkward admission slips out, and Hugo Otters quickly tries to lighten the mood. He then panics, clarifying he is not divorced, and stammers about his wife before asking Lee Gun for forgiveness. Instead, he asks what really happened inside the tower. Privately, Hugo Otters decides not to tell Chun Sungjae or Yu about Lee Gun yet, since they were both obsessed with him. Back then, Hugo Otters was fighting outside the tower. Calamities kept appearing outside the tower, so he never learned what happened inside or why the other saints emerged carrying the Scarlet Eye's head instead of Lee Gun. Lee Gun explains that the truth is simple and harsh. He was betrayed and thrown into a trap. That place was filled with calamities. More and more kept appearing endlessly. Even Scarlet Eyes came back to life, and Hugo Otters is shocked upon hearing this. Scarlet Eyes was revived. The protagonist confirms it. He explains that the monster was deeper inside the tower. Its true form was a massive fire dragon. Lee Gun says he still managed to kill that bastard. But the real issue was not Scarlet Eyes, but the tower's true administrator. That entity could revive dead calamities. No matter how many times Lee Gun destroyed them, they kept returning, yet he somehow still managed to escape. Deep down, he never truly believed he would ever make it out alive. That twisted monster had tormented Lee Gun without mercy. After enduring it for a long time, I finally used everything I had and brought down the tower's administrator. If I recall correctly, I was buried right after that. When I came to, the monsters in the cave were gone, and somehow I had obtained new abilities. One thing is certain, the one who stabbed me clearly knew the tower inside and out. That's how he trapped me inside that cave. A place filled with calamities, he had to know it perfectly. I'm definitely going to make them pay for this. Those who stole what belonged to me and spoke so carelessly about me. But the real traitor, I've prepared something special for Lee Gun. First, I need to get everything ready. Hugo Otters is left stunned after hearing this and asks what he should do next. Lee Gun replies that he needs to craft the equipment he will use against them. Then he activates his power on the small wooden horse he had prepared. Skill triggers, Creation Workshop, Level 1. It can summon a workshop capable of creating anything. The system scans available crafting materials and asks if divine relic materials should be used. A list of usable materials appears. Corrupted essence containing the Queen Spider's stored magical power can be absorbed. A calamity fragment increases both success rate and power when creating a divine relic. In addition, several divine relics belonging to Ares are detected. These are the relics taken from Ares' domain. Lee Gun decides to throw everything in without hesitation. The creation process begins. The entire house is engulfed in green light as more system messages appear. Creation complete. A divine relic has been forged, and it has formed an ego of its own. Imitation horse rank. If a person's name is written on it, that individual can absorb a portion of the magic power from anyone they touch. Allows the user to steal 10% of another person's magic power. The effect lasts for 1 hour and is strongly loyal to its owner. Lee Gun is satisfied. A divine relic with self-awareness can even grow independently. Hugo Otters claps in amazement. Still, he remarks that such a high-level ego artifact doesn't look that impressive, which instantly angers the horse toward Lee Gun. Lee Gun fires back, asking if he has any idea how many materials were used to make it. Relic asks whether the remaining materials should be used to craft something stronger, but the protagonist decides to leave it for now. Hugo Otters then changes his tone, praising the design and calling Lee Gun a genius. Lee Gun points out his earlier criticism, and Hugo asks if he studied design in the Devil's Tower. He thinks for a moment and replies that it depends on how useful Hugo Otters proves to be going forward. They need to start dealing with those fake saints. Poor Hugo Otters even gets lightly hit on the head. He asks how the protagonist plans to carry this out. He says it won't be easy to lure the other saints out of their territory. Lee Gun asks if this should be enough to draw them in. It is the true divine relic from Era's house, the Golden Fleece Chest. The system explains, Golden Fleece Chest SS rank. It can store anything and even multiply items inside, though it requires a cost. It is one of the highest grade divine relics. Hugo Otters asks why he brought it if he cannot even use it. Lee Gun replies that he heard Aizo is a saint without money, so he brought it to support their financial resources. Aizo immediately gets irritated and snaps that he is not poor. He asks whether higher-ranked relics always require more materials to operate. Lee Gun explains they will use it to multiply resources and create divine relics strong enough to crush their enemies. Hugo Otters how that is possible when no one there can activate it. Lee Gun looks at him and asks if he truly cannot use it. Hugo Otters reminds him he is not Ars saint, but the Sagittarius saint, questioning if he has forgotten that. The protagonist had not. The two fall into silence. Then Hugo Otters suggests that maybe Lee Gun can use it instead. Lee Gun immediately shuts that idea down, saying they need another solution. Then he casually mentions he already sent a declaration of war to a broadcast station. Hugo Otters is stunned and asks what exactly was sent and where. He sighs and says there is no point now, they need another approach. The protagonist repeats the question anger, calling Lee Gun insane. The scene shifts to the Blue House in Korea. A high-level meeting is taking place. One man angrily scolds the others, saying they couldn't even defeat a single spider, and instead ended up humiliating themselves. He says they should have stuck to selling charms, instead of trying to fight a calamity. He is Divine Captain Oliver of the Divine Lion faction, but someone interrupts him mid-speech. They warn Divine Lion Oliver to be careful with his words. Oliver replies that he heard some unknown man defeated the Queen Spider. Then he wonders if the supposedly dead Lee Gun might have returned to life. Another man tells him not to go too far. It is obvious he is overly obsessed with Lee Gun's past hero stories. That man is Gemini Divine Captain Choi Sung-hee. He was the one who ordered the bald man and the dagger user to retreat from the supermarket. Troy asks what the issue would be even if it really were Lee Gun. He argues that Lee Gun could easily defeat the spider. Didn't you see that famous Russian subjugation footage? Another man argues that Lee Gun only succeeded because he had buffs from other saints, even used borrowed weapons. With that level of support, anyone could have done better. Choi coldly replies that maybe he simply lacked enough support to defeat the Queen Spider, and that is why he failed. Man immediately becomes angry. He insists he is only stating facts. Era's faction defeated the Queen Spider thanks to the sacrifice of an S-rank disciple. Troy mocks Lee Gun, saying heirs must have someone impressive. He would like to meet them, though he might have to look inside the Queen Spider's stomach. The argument continues while an old man in the back complains that the Blue House has turned into a place full of thugs. Suddenly, someone bursts in shouting that the president must turn on the news immediately because something major has happened. On a broadcast, a reporter announces that their station has received a mysterious package containing photos, and a short message from someone claiming to be Yang Wei. Photos show Yang Wei heavily damaged, along with a note that simply says, "I'm back." Forensic handwriting analysis confirms a 99% match. The writing is confirmed to belong to the supposedly dead Lee Gun. The scene then cuts back to Hugo Otters shouting. He demands to know what the protagonist was thinking when he sent it. Lee Gun calls it a declaration of war, warning them to prepare as he intends to tear down everyone opposing him. Hugo Otters keeps shouting, telling him to stay focused and stop acting like a madman. Defeating Yang Wei was already serious enough, so why did he also have to make his presence known? Lee Gun corrects him, saying Yang Wei is not dead. Hugo Otters freezes in place. What? He adds that technically he is alive, but not truly living. Hugo Otters is completely stunned as the protagonist explains. Tada, this is Yang Wei. He holds up a teddy bear which is sweating, while Yang Wei inside curses angrily. Hugo Otters cannot believe it and asks if that is truly Yang Wei. From inside the bear, Yang Wei screams to be released, explaining that the fight made his abilities grow, allowing his soul to be suppressed. Now he is able to suppress Yang Wei's soul. He speaks to the bear as if it were misbehaving, while Yang Wei continues trembling inside. Hugo Otters asks if something like that is even possible. Lee Gun dismisses it and tells him to look at something else, handing over an orange peel. Hugo Otters has no idea what he is looking at. The protagonist explains that this is an orange peeler. He says it was used to carve into his back in the Devil's Tower, and the attacker who tried to kill him used it, with engravings suggesting it wasn't owned by an ordinary person. Hugo Otters asks if Lee Gun has any idea who the culprit might be. Lee Gun barely pays attention, continuing to tug at the teddy bear containing Yang Wei. He says he will stop by the Divine divine artifact store for a while, and Hugo Otters asks why. Lee Gun says maybe someone there has seen those engravings before. The mood eases as he asks to borrow clothes, and Hugo tells him he can use anything in the closet. The scene changes once more. Now dressed stylishly, Lee Gun says he will leave servant number 2 at home this time, prompting Hugo Otters to ask who that is. He adds that there is a number 1 as well, meaning Hugo is servant 1, which makes Hugo furious while Yang Wei, trapped in the bear, grins. The story shifts back to the place where he fought Pichu. A group of sharply dressed women arrives and begins surveying the area. One of them notes the Saint of Aries is absent and his divine power cannot be detected. It then shifts to someone calmly taking a bath, pondering where he might have gone. She wonders where he might have gone. She is identified as the Aquarius Saint Sophie Morris. She suggests he may have disappeared along with his wealth, which would be troublesome, especially if he made a deal with another saint behind her back. She asks where the fat man has gone. One of the others cautiously speaks up. She suggests that the newly returned Lee Gun may have kidnapped Yang Wei. Sophie Morris simply smiles. She calmly says those jokes are not amusing. Without changing her expression, she pushes the other woman under the bathwater, silencing her. Terrified, the woman quickly apologizes, saying she spoke out of turn. Sophie lets it slide and instructs them to proceed to the divine artifact store as planned. She says they must prepare to sell divine artifacts and gather funds for the drachma auction, which is very important. At that moment, another bodyguard rushes in. He reports a major issue. Other saints have also applied to join the drachma. Hearing this, she is shocked and blurts out her disbelief. "What?" she exclaims, and the scene shifts to the Lion Academy. A group of muscular men stares ahead in shock. In front of them, a beast-like man trains intensely, pushing through heavy squats before dropping the weight. Someone approaches Lee Gun and says his artifact will appear at the drachma auction. He falls silent for a moment. He lets the weight crash down and laughs, saying it has finally appeared. He declares that Lee Gun's artifact will belong to him. He is revealed as the Leo Saint Stephen Marker. A portal opens with crackling lightning. Protagonist steps out of it. Hugo Otters' son comments that teleportation is very useful. Redhead explains it usually costs a lot, but for those connected to Gemini it is free. As they arrive at the Divine Artifact Store complex, he thanks Lee Gun, mentioning he needed an appraisal and was introduced to an SS rank expert. Redhead recalls his boss's order. He remembers meeting the man who defeated the Spider Queen. He is instructed to fully support and monitor Lee Gun, no matter what happens. He checks his phone and sighs. Lee Gun asks if his boss has been bothering him since that incident. The boy quickly denies it. He then hands over an item, saying it worked well against insects. The item's details appear on screen. It is revealed as an orange peeler, Janus Desire, rank A, which can summon two-faced soldiers and trigger a random ability. Redhead notes it was not rusty when it was taken from his house. He explains he repaired it, though its effects have slightly changed as a result. The boy thanks him, calling it amazing. He asks if this is the place where the SS rank appraiser works. Inside, a man has suddenly begun reacting. Outside, people begin murmuring in surprise that someone so striking is actually present. He looks around inside, noting the SS rank appraiser is indeed here. Meanwhile, outside, the crowd is buzzing in disbelief that such an impressive figure is actually here. It's the same group of bodyguards from earlier, escorting Aquarius. The saint walks in with an air of absolute confidence. She heads straight toward the clerk. She states she wants to deposit divine artifacts with the appraiser before the auction begins. The clerk, clearly nervous, apologizes and says the appraiser is currently with another client. This immediately irritates her. How could he be attending someone else while she is here? Still, she forces a polite smile and says she'll wait nearby. Even so, her curiosity lingers about who is inside. Inside, as expected, it's Lee Gun. He surveys the luxury items and remarks that an SS rank truly runs this place. The appraiser then asks Chun Sunjae who created the item, and the protagonist casually replies that he did. The man freezes, asking if Lee Gun has any connection to that name. He is a Virgo affiliate and an SS rank appraiser. The red-haired man introduces Lee Gun as someone claiming to be Lee Gun himself. The appraiser assumes it's a joke and tells Chun Sunjae they are discussing serious matters. He turns back and demands to know the protagonist's relationship to Lee Gun. The protagonist replies, "What do you mean?" The appraiser explains that most people know Lee Gun only for combat. However, he was also a legendary craftsman. Regarding the artifact brought in, he says he has seen many fakes, but this one feels different. He can sense the craftsmanship within it. This makes the protagonist smirk, thinking the man clearly recognizes him. The appraiser proudly says he does recognize him because he is Lee Gun's disciple. He even blushes slightly as he says it. Lee Gun is just as confused, wondering what nonsense he is hearing. He insists he doesn't remember ever having a disciple. Still observing Lee Gun closely, the appraiser adds that while the man's age suggests he cannot be a direct student, his skill is extraordinary. He was almost deceived by it. That only makes Lee Gun want to knock some sense in him. The appraiser then pulls out a small notebook, saying it is an item the protagonist once gave him after acknowledging him as a student. Lee Gun is shocked it's the notebook he had lost. He realizes this must be the young follower who used to trail him in China. Back then, the man was so persistent that Lee Gun considered him nothing more than a nuisance. Now, 20 years later, he has aged significantly. The appraiser grows emotional, saying Lee Gun had an incredible eye for artifacts. He recalls how Lee Gun once gave him extremely valuable guidance. Then one day, Lee Gun suddenly disappeared, leaving everything behind. And this notebook was all that remained. The protagonist realizes this disciple truly kept it. The man continues, saying Lee Gun's handwriting was terrible. It was barely readable, but he believes it still contained his intentions. Lee Gun internally wants to shout that the man is completely wrong. It was actually his hit list. After reawakening, he can gain information from anyone he defeats. And since this man SS rank, he likely holds very valuable information. The appraiser insists the notebook would be more useful for a talented young man like Lee Gun and asks him to take it. Lee Gun is pleased, noticing even some of his notes were inside. Losing it had clearly bothered him. Then the system announces that the dormant notebook is reacting to its owner's magic. It will evolve into a divine relic through the power of Ophiuchus. The appraiser is stunned, saying it is a divine relic capable of storing memories. He adds that Lee Gun possesses an ability he has never seen before. Under this influence, the worn notebook begins to transform. It changes form, becoming fresh green and fully restored. At that moment, someone calls out to Jin Mayung that something has happened. The old man turns and asks what it is. Still confused, the assistant reports that the saint is outside. Jin Mayung grows annoyed, wondering why everyone is making a fuss over something so minor. Saint? Lee Gun hears it and repeats the word. Outside, the Aquarius saint remains waiting by the entrance. She internally complains about all the low-ranking people staring at her in public. It is the same kind of attention she always gets. In the background, the red-haired man casually drinks juice. He remarks that Sophie Morris usually only appears at official events, and it's rare to even get her to leave the church. Now losing patience, she decides that waiting any longer is pointless. She chooses to enter and speak directly with the appraiser. She insists the appraiser must purchase their divine relics at a high price to fund the auction. She is tired of being kept waiting. Waiting has already worn down her patience. Her bodyguards urge her to remain calm since the client is still inside. She snaps back, determined to see who is inside for herself. The moment she opens the door and looks inside, she freezes completely at the sight of Lee Gun. Shocked, she finds him strangely radiant, and in that instant everything shifts. As before, the saint steps into the room again. The moment she sees Lee Gun, she is visibly shaken. As she moves closer, terrifying aura suddenly engulfs her, and she drops to her knees as her guards rush in panic. All she can think is what that overwhelming force was. It felt like being surrounded by countless serpents. She immediately realizes she must leave at once. She flees in panic while Lee Gun and the appraiser simply watch her go. The mustached man asks why she ran, and the protagonist casually replies that maybe she just understood something. Right after that, the system speaks again. A Zodiac affiliate approaches Ophiuchus without any hesitation or fear. Fear is gone. Your divine power has risen. Current level 35%. Lee Gun wonders whether divine power differs from magic, and the system provides an explanation. Divine power is formed from the authority of gods. It can be taken from gods or even stolen from others. If it ever reaches zero, the Zodiac loses all strength, and prolonged depletion causes weakening. Lee Gun realizes his abilities keep steadily increasing. Then he asks whether the girl who just ran out was a saint. The appraiser is surprised he does not know her, since she appears often in the news as the Aquarius Saint. Jean pauses, Sophie Morris, so that is what all the saint talk refers to. He realizes that the girl has become a saint and changed a lot. He is not surprised he failed to recognize her. She already looked acceptable before. Even if plastic surgery made her prettier, her corrupt nature remained unchanged. If he sorted things he despises into fish bones, worms, and trash, Sophie Morris would definitely be a worm. To Lee Gun, she barely qualifies as human. She values skincare over human life, says the mustached man. The man says he cannot understand why people call her the peak of compassion and kindness when she is actually cruel and selfish. Gigi notices this means he knows something about her. The saint outside instructs one of her bodyguards to return to the pawn shop and identify that man. The guard agrees, then asks what to do about the appraisal. She cuts him off and says she has changed her mind. Kill them all. The guards are stunned at how ruthless she is, and any connection with Lee Gun is already doomed. She believes the Virgo Saint is too attached to that appraiser, and they still need to sell their items. Being dragged into this situation ruins her mood and humiliates her. Worse, that man brings back painful memories for her. To her, both of them are just disrespectful fools. Even when offering divine relics and proposing to lend godly power, Sophie Morris hesitates. Using such power in a neutral district is dangerous. Sophie Morris interrupts and asks if she is refusing an order. The scene then shifts to the relic shopping district in the central zone. In the zone, Hugo Otter's red-haired son walks walks casually through the area, sipping juice and minding his own business. Suddenly he stops. What is this? Why is there water on the ground when it is not even raining? The water feels weak but still carries magic. He then realizes something is wrong. A hand rises out of the water, and a water-made clone begins forming from it. Shape. He is completely shocked, trying to understand what is happening. Looking around, he sees others panicking as more water clones appear. Above them, the saint observes the entire situation and calls it mirror duper. Duplicates are only ranker level templates, but even weak ants can bring down an elephant if enough of them attack together. Someone shouts at the guard, asking why she is using a combat skill in a neutral zone. He tells her to cancel it immediately. She brushes off Lee Gun, saying this came directly from them, Saint claiming it is the will of the gods. She activates a relic, and a massive light fills the area as Chun Sunjae tries to stop her, but he is too late. She releases the water chalice called a. In Bolivian, water spheres begin surrounding everyone. People are trapped as more clones appear behind her. Satisfied, she says she will handle the man inside the appraiser's building herself. She orders others to capture every relic appraiser as water clones spread out. RJ realizes he must get up quickly. If he stays, he will lose consciousness no matter what. The scene cuts back to Lee Gun calmly watches water drip from the roof, while the mustached appraiser mutters that something bad is happening outside. A wave of water magic suddenly wraps around Lee Gun, and someone appears right behind him. Lee Gun. She warns him not to move, saying it is nothing personal, but the saint is angry with Lee Gun, so he should stay still. Still, if he wants to avoid bloodshed, he should cooperate. The saint ordered both of them killed, but may spare them if he apologizes for disrespecting her and pays a high price for the relics. Meanwhile, the mustached man is trapped inside a water bubble, but then he witnesses something that shocks him. Lee Gun suddenly grabs her dagger and snaps it effortlessly. He tells Jin Myung to make them pay for the damage. The woman can only stare, unable to process what just happened. The appraiser is stunned, realizing the dagger was a gift from Aquarius. He cannot understand how Lee Gun broke it so easily. She shouts that she told him not to move, then summons a water dragon that rushes toward Lee Gun. Lee Gun destroys it instantly. He smirks and asks if she has anything else. She is in disbelief, realizing he destroyed her Rancor level clone in one strike. Now she finally understands how the saint felt. This man is dangerous, and if she leaves, with Lee Gun acting alone, he becomes a serious threat to Sophie Morris, so she unleashes everything she has against him. She claims this power was forged from the saint's purest magic. She then summons orange rank water wolves, forming a full pack right in front of her. From his position, Lee Gun simply watches and remarks that she is really trying. Then he reminds Jin Myung that he was told to take whatever he liked, so he decides to take these two. In the next instant, he vanishes from Trazer's sight, and he rushes through the woman and the wolves at extreme speed, cutting them apart in an instant. Instantly, he is impressed by it. The dagger, saying it slices through them like butter. The material must be above a certain rank or level. He only came to appraise his items, but ended up discovering something far better after destroying all the wolves. The system announces that he received data from a mirror duplicate friend fragment. Message after message appears before Lee Gun, and he simply calls it beautiful. The woman can only stare in total disbelief. Every summon from the saint was crushed with ease. There is no way this cannot be the end. She quickly realizes he is far above her level. If she attacks again, she will definitely lose, so she turns around and runs away, running. Lee Gun simply smiles as he watches her retreat. At her retreat, even the mustached appraiser is left completely stunned. Right then, the red-haired boy rushes in, asking if the protagonist is okay and saying he was attacked. Also, when he sees all the defeated enemies, he cannot figure out what happened here at all. He notices the magic and realizes those were the saint's summons. Lee Gun says if she keeps sending things like this, she is basically giving him materials to use. Still, he tells Chun Sunja they need to leave before the next attack arrives. But the mustached man stops him. For a moment, he says that 20 years ago, he followed Lee Gun everywhere and studied his creations. He clearly remembers it all. How Lee Gun used to gather materials from enemies after every battle. That wild fighting style, along with that demonic presence. Could this really be Lee Gun? The protagonist simply raising a finger, he tells Lee Gun to stay silent, and the old man immediately understands. Then Lee Gun walks away, saying he will come back for those materials, so keep them safe. He has questions, too. The appraiser thanks Lee Gun and asks him to come back again, then watches Lee Gun leave in a stylish manner. Next, he talks with Chun Sunja, who asks why the saint is being targeted. Did the protagonist somehow end up making her his enemy? Me? Lee Gun tells him to wait, saying he's about to show him something fun. The scene shifts, and they are now inside a snack shop. Cupcakes, cakes, and sweets are everywhere, while Lee Gun happily stuffs himself with food. He asks Chun Sunjae if the ice cream is good and tells him to eat as much as he wants. Chun Sunjae agrees but but points out the place is expensive. Then he remembers that when the woman ran away, she dropped one of her eye items. After checking the item on the floor, he says it should be fine. It's a small item, but it should be very useful. It's a badge that works like a credit card and can also store abilities. Looking closer, it seems to be tied to Aquarius. If it really functions like a payment card, it could cause trouble. Later on, Lee Gun keeps eating as if there's no tomorrow. He asks Chun Sunjae if he likes the ice cream, but the poor guy freezes upon hearing a voice. Turning around, he blurts out, "Captain Choi Sung-gilk." Choi Sung-gilk asks if he can join them. Lee Gun looks over and realizes this is Chun Sungjae's boss. Boss, the same man who was talking trash about Lee Gun. Choi introduces himself as the divine captain of Gemini, Choi Sung-gilk. He politely mentions that Chun Sunjae spoke about someone earlier. The protagonist confirms it was Lee Gun, and Choi says he heard Chun met an acquaintance who defeated the Spider Queen. He adds that even Yang couldn't accomplish it before. Lee Gun asks what that has to do with him. He explains that recruiting outstanding talent is part of his job as a divine captain. Lee Gun immediately asks if he's trying to recruit him or even bribe him. Choi reveals that one of his 8 divine relics will be auctioned soon. There's no rush, so they can talk while he oversees things. The moment Lee Gun hears this, he stops eating. They're auctioning his belongings. Then there's no time to waste. He says he's going and asks where the auction house is. Chun Sunjae gently tells him to wipe the ice cream off his mouth first. Troy smiles and reaches out. He says that since this is one of the protagonist's famous relics, it will be auctioned properly. It will take place at the world's largest auction house, a floating fortress 16,000 feet in the air. Its name is Drachma, the city fortress. Massive zone surrounded by floating islands, all centered around a giant tower. Then the scene transitions again, maintaining the same flow of power and presence. The saint trembles in her seat as fear takes hold, while someone nearby begins speaking up. He tells her that if she plans to sit there shaking, she should just leave. She is ruining the atmosphere for his drink. In her mind, she insults Lee Gun as a rude brute with no manners. Still, she chooses to tolerate Lee Gun for now. At this point, this man is someone who once stood above even Lee Gun, so staying near him feels safer. He is the Saint of Leo. Stephen Marker states that the MC weapon being auctioned today originally belonged to Lee Gun. Lee Gun says she shouldn't even consider bidding on it. When she asks where he is going, he replies it is none of her concern and tells her to stay put. He walks away and she glares at his back in irritation. Even so, she tries to steady herself. This is Draka. No matter who that man is, there is no chance he could appear here. Yet just then she notices Hugo. Hugo Otters arrives, greeted as an important guest right on time. Hugo Otters scratches his head, wondering where he might have gone, thinking he could be here among the valuable divine relics. At that moment, the saint appears behind Lee Gun with an unsettling smile. Her smile looks like something straight out of a horror scene as she greets Lee Gun warmly. She calls out to Hugo Otters as if speaking to an old acquaintance. Hugo Otters is mentioned, and he recognizes her immediately. Sophie Morris, Hugo Otters says, noting it has been difficult to see her lately. He jokes that even she couldn't stay hidden forever, once known as one of the most beautiful saints. But she has changed significantly over time, very much so. Or perhaps it is because, unlike others, she barely has any disciples. Hugo Otters stands there, then abruptly tells her to leave, wanting no involvement with her. He demands she get lost and refuses any connection with her. She mocks Lee Gun, asking if he intends to ignore her and walk away. She warns that if he does, he may lose his children, just like he lost his wife. Hugo Otters' expression turns cold, but she continues speaking. She claims his wife is still alive. That situation could change at any moment. What can he do as everything around him falls apart? All because their leader is useless. That is when Hugo Otters finally snaps. Powerful burst erupts as he glares sharply at her. He warns her again to leave immediately, but she remains composed as if nothing happened. She tells Lee Gun to calm down and blocks Hugo Otters' attack with one hand. He reminds Lee Gun that of all people, he should understand what it means to be a demi-saint. A saint. Then water magic begins forming around her. As it gathers, someone suddenly shouts, "Hey you." She turns toward the voice, and Lee Gun flicks her forehead. The impact shocks her completely, and she loses consciousness. She falls to the ground as Hugo Otters quickly turns to the protagonist in disbelief. He asks in shock what Lee Gun has just done. Lee Gun says he was worried Hugo Otters would get dragged into another fight. Hugo Otters jokes that he must really care, but tells him to stop messing around. Then he asks why this woman keeps appearing wherever they go. The saint lies unconscious nearby as the protagonist wonders if she might actually like Lee Gun. Hugo Otters just stares, thinking this man has serious issues. Then the perspective shifts to the saint's thoughts. She reflects on Lee Gun, the 13th saint, the one everyone once called the strongest. Shaken, she admits she never truly hated Lee Gun, she feared him. Feared his scarred face and violent nature that crushed anyone in his path, and those cold eyes that always looked down on her. On her specifically, her memories drift back 20 years. People were screaming that Lee Gun had arrived, trying to stop him, insisting this was Aquarius' sanctuary and ordering him to leave. But Lee Gun only looked at the woman standing before him and bluntly told her to screw off. She froze in shock, while someone behind asked what he meant by that. The young saint demanded to know how he dared invade this place and told Lee Gun to leave immediately. Lee Gun startled her briefly, as if testing whether her heart was still beating. Then he grabbed her arm. He said everything had gone to hell recently. People were calling them useless, so she had to come with him. She immediately refuses, saying she has no intention of helping anyone. Lee Gun gives her a cold stare, but she complains he smells like sweat, and she still needs makeup for an interview. She tells him to let go, whining that his grip is too rough and disgusting. That is when Lee Gun loses patience. He slaps her across the face. After that, they continue arguing inside. In the end, she says she was dragged there to treat the wounded until she collapses. She calls Lee Gun rude and irrational, and says she truly despises it all. When she opens her eyes again, Lee Gun is there as always, calmly telling her she talks too much. She has even fallen asleep and is drooling, making the situation even more embarrassing. Feeling embarrassed, she stares at Lee Gun, and after a brief, tense silence, she suddenly screams and asks what he is doing. She demands to be released, questioning how he dares treat a saint like this. Lee Gun thinks she has not changed even after 20 years, still repeating the same foolish words as before. Meanwhile, she tells herself things are no longer the same as they were 2 decades ago. She plans to coat her hands with acid and melt the rope binding her, believing a restraint like this is meaningless. If she can break free and meet Stephen Marker. Before she can finish, Lee Gun flicks her forehead again. He tells her to stop, saying her tricks are too obvious to hide. She snaps back, calling Lee Gun an idiot. Her acid defense skill activates the moment her body is struck. The acid begins spreading across her body. She imagines it melting through Lee Gun, starting from his hand, but he simply points at her and says it is fully restored. She is stunned as the melted area heals instantly, realizing this recovery is not normal. Lee Gun calls it theft instead of recovery, then says it is time to review everything between them. He mentions hearing that she has been claiming she told everyone she was his doctor, and he calls it pathetic, asking if she sent her foolish servant to the appraisal shop. If so, she has already earned 5 strikes. She panics and begs Lee Gun to wait, but the protagonist simply raises his hand. Time is up. He begins flicking her forehead repeatedly. As this continues, Hugo Otters calmly drinks coffee, thinking Lee Gun treats everyone the same way. He believes everyone, man or woman, usually gives Lee Gun a reason first. Still, Hugo Otters senses something unusual happening. It feels as though Lee Gun's divine status is rising with every strike. System messages begin appearing. They indicate his divine status has reached 40% so far. It also states he has landed a heavy blow on the Saint of Aquarius and obtained a special saint-ranked item. After a while, Lee Gun finally stops. The area is completely destroyed, and the system speaks again. It announces her divine status has been unlocked. Current divine status reduced by 50, and charging required. Lee Gun interrupts, confused, asking what divine status means. He requests an explanation. The system explains that divine status is the source of a god's power, used to maintain and manifest divine strength. It adds that divine status can be stolen from disciples or even from other gods. If divine status drops to 0, a zodiac loses its power and may even die if it remains that way too long. He realizes he can gain divine status by defeating opponents and wonders why he did not receive any from Yang earlier, possibly because the system was not unlocked. Then Hugo Otters notices the phone and asks where Lee Gun got it. Lee Gun casually replies that he borrowed it from someone he knows. He mentions Hugo Otters' son and says he needs to head to the auction house, leaving the rest to Hugo Otters. As for her, Lee Gun says to throw her into any trash bin. Hugo Otters is left speechless as Lee Gun walks away casually. He says he will contact them after the auction is over. Hugo Otters calls out, asking what he is supposed to do with her. Shortly after, the door opens again. Hugo Otters assumes Lee Gun has returned and asks if he forgot something. When he looks up, he realizes it is not Lee Gun. It is Stephen Marker who takes in the scene, seeing the saint tied up while Hugo Otters stands there. He asks Hugo Otters what is going on here. It has been a long time since they last met. He says this, but it is clearly not a moment for friendly greetings. Hugo Otters asks why Stephen Marker is at the auction, and Stephen Marker explains that the Saint of Aquarius formed an alliance with Lee Gun, even while noticing her beaten condition in the chair. And he asks again why Hugo Otters is there. Hugo Otters replies that he has business at the auction house, and it is none of Stephen Marker's concern. Stephen Marker asks if he is also after the divine relics of Lee Gun being sold there. That question catches Hugo Otters off guard, and he asks if Lee Gun's relics are really in this auction house. Stephen Marker is surprised he did not know. He then sneers, saying the items will be far beyond what Hugo Otters can afford, so knowing would not change anything. Hugo Otters smiles and calls Lee Gun out, saying Stephen Marker has always collected relics tied to love. Lee Gun, yet he never admitted how powerful Lee Gun was and always felt inferior to him. He questions whether Stephen Marker truly believes owning those relics will make him as strong as Lee Gun. Stephen Marker is briefly shaken, but then both men begin gathering their power. Stephen Marker moves first. He grabs Hugo Otter's arm and warns him not to get arrogant, calling Hugo Otter's nothing but a fool. He says he does not want to hear Lee gain from him. As he twists Hugo Otter's arm, Stephen Marker claims he is stronger than Lee Gun's influence. Then someone rushes in, shouting about the divine cat. Just then, another interruption breaks the moment as chaos unfolds nearby. Captain, we have a problem. The Gemini group is rapidly buying up all of Lee Gun's items. Stephen Marker immediately releases his grip, saying he has no time left to waste. He tells Hugo Otters to do as he pleases with Aquarius, since Hugo didn't even come for her in the first place. Leave. For Stephen Marker, the auction is the top priority, so he heads upstairs. He heads out, but before leaving, he gives Sagittarius one final warning, warning him to control that attitude and keep his head down if he wants to stay alive. Hugo Otters sarcastically thanks Lee Gun so much that he feels like he could cry. After they leave, Hugo Otters stares at his hand and curses Lee Gun. His hand is in terrible condition now, and he isn't sure what he should do next. The scene shifts to Drachma's auction house. Inside the Gemini VIP room, the auctioneer announces that Gemini has won the divine relics. With that, the first session of the auction comes to an end. The first session is over, and the second will begin shortly after the break. Hugo Otters celebrates, saying the items are his again. Someone congratulates Lee Gun and tells him he can buy anything he wants. Hugo Otters thanks them for inviting Lee Gun into the VIP room and letting him purchase freely. Take whatever you want, that's only natural. We want someone talented like you. Like you, Divine Captain, are you sure this is okay? The total already goes into the billions. It's fine. More importantly, Chian Chun Sunjae, sorry about that. Sorry, could you cover the alcohol bill? I didn't bring a company card. He had already borrowed a lot of money, but since he was my superior, I couldn't really refuse. Then he suddenly pulled out a black card and said not to worry, everything had already been paid. Wait, isn't that my unlimited card? Take it. You looked pretty drunk, so I paid it in advance. You really shouldn't let your subordinates pay, even indirectly. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. I was just about to hand Lee Gun my personal card. So, thanks for helping me out. He looks young, but he's clearly trying to get inside my head. Still, this is the super rookie who defeated the Spider Queen. If I use Lee Gun properly, no price will matter anymore. Anyway, we've had enough drinks. Let's talk about the real reason we're here. I've been thinking a lot about you. I'm sure you have huge potential. Potential you could reach S rank or even beyond. Especially if you receive blessings from the Saint of Aries. But our protagonist notices something. First, that purple mist filling and dominating the space. Ordinary people wouldn't even notice it. It doesn't force obedience, but just breathing it in makes people trust Lee Gun more. You might even become one of the 10 saints. And that's not all. You gain wealth, honor, and the authority of the mighty mage Saint of Aries. All of it completely free. Now take my hand and become one of great Aries' disciples. That makes our protagonist burst out laughing, while everyone around him looks confused. Wow, today has been incredibly funny. So let me get this straight, you want me to become some minor god's employee? He was polite a second ago, why is he suddenly so angry? I need to change the subject first. I think you've got one thing wrong. Just then, someone outside speaks up. Excuse me, I brought the auction items that were purchased. Perfect, timing, please come in. A woman enters carrying the items and offers congratulations. Here is your auction item, along with a certificate confirming it is one of Lee Gun's divine relics. A certificate of authority. These people really know how to deceive others. Idiots. But the man with glasses sees it clearly right in front of Lee Gun. Did you really buy one of Lee Gun's relics? You said I could buy anything. I wasn't looking for this, but it seemed useful. Stephen Marker is completely obsessed with Lee Gun's divine relics. Alex, we really shouldn't have provoked Lee Gun by buying this. I'm sorry, but this relic already has another owner, so we'd like to refund the money. Then the door suddenly bursts open with a flash of lightning. Everyone immediately turns toward it at once. Furious, Stephen Marker demands, who was it? Who dared touch what belongs to me? Oh, Stephen Marker? He's the one I told you about, the man who wanted my relic. Mr. Stephen Marker, I'm very sorry. Please forgive us. The newcomer simply made a mistake. He didn't know any better. I'll return it to you right away. Fine. Then all he needs to do is admit it and hand it back. Thank you very much. Please take your time with the payment. What? You don't actually think you can walk away after touching what's mine, do you? Captain Choi Sung-hee. Stephen Marker grabs the man with glasses by the head. Crap, he's trying to save billions by calling it a simple mistake. Stop talking nonsense. I bought it, so why would it be yours? If you want it that badly, I'll sell it to you for $20 billion. Stephen Marker goes silent for a moment, then suddenly bursts out laughing. Haha, Gemini isn't full of cowards after all. There's at least one bold bastard here. Oh no, this lunatic really wants to die. Doesn't he know who Stephen Marker is? I like you. A man should at least have courage. He tosses the man with glasses to the floor. Then he walks straight toward our protagonist. If meeting like this is fate, then why don't we introduce ourselves? Whenever I meet someone I like, I always make sure to handle it properly, and with a good amount of spark behind it. What the hell are you even talking about? About Stephen Marker, you bastard. Looks like your skills have improved. Just a bit, as expected from Leo, built for combat. Your fighting spirit can't even compare to Aries or Aquarius. Once you show your claws, you're never satisfied until you tear someone apart completely, right? What a rotten temper. Stephen Marker suddenly lunged forward, hand raised toward the protagonist. Lightning burst out in every direction. The others watched in utter shock. Shocked voices called out toward the protagonist. Certain he had already won, Stephen Marker sneered. That was fun. You'll spend the rest of your life comfortably in a wheelchair. Then he paused. Hey, what are you doing? Trying to brush dirt off your shoulder? What was that? That attack definitely hit Lee Gun head on. You redirected my attack using teleportation. You really can't tell, huh? All muscle and no brain. Stonewall Breaker, did you really think the skill I created would work on me? You begged me to teach it, saying you wanted to use it to save people. But it looks like you only used it to show off your power. Power? What? You? Who are you? At that moment, the woman returned, thanking everyone for waiting and announcing that the main auction highlights were about to begin. Soon. Oh, is it time already? What now, another relic of mine? I've got questions for you, but this auction matters more. Take care of that pendant. I'll come back after it ends. After he left, Chun Sunjae turned to the man with glasses. He asked how that attack had been deflected. Deflecting an attack from a Saint-tier fighter is almost impossible, even for Lee Gun. Who the hell is this guy? Meanwhile, Stephen Marker thought that it was finally within his reach. His mind drifted back to an incident where an unknown calamity appeared on an island in Germany around 20 years ago. The island had already been completely devastated. The island lies in ruins as a helicopter circles overhead while reporters watch closely from above. Overhead, the reporters continue observing and broadcasting. Hello, we are currently flying above the island where the catastrophe is unfolding. Even after 4 days have passed since the incident, since the 13th awakener, Lee Gun, entered the area, no one has been able to confirm what is happening inside. He still has not come back out. Several saints attempt to enter, but none of them succeeded. A thick poisonous barrier completely surrounds the island. We will return with further updates as soon as there are any changes. Back then, when Stephen Marker was still young, someone standing beside Lee Gun said, "This is the closest we can safely get." Saint Stephen Marker could only wonder how Lee Gun managed to go inside such a place, fighting where no ordinary person could even imagine entering. Why do I feel like this? Because of some man who almost died without receiving a god's blessing. What is the difference between me and Lee Gun? Power, followers, skills. What am I missing? Saint Lee Gun is finally seen emerging from the entrance. What? Everyone stares in shock. It's Lee Gun. He came back alive. Lee Gun has cleared the Delta calamity, and the protagonist calmly regains his composure. He casually says, "Man, it's hot as hell," while everyone else celebrates his return as a hero. Turning away, someone remarks that it looks like Lee Gun has stolen all the spotlight again. It's fine. I understand now. Saint, where are you going? Prepare to withdraw. You're not taking your weapon? No, I don't need it. You can keep it. I've found something far better. This is what I was missing. Compared to Lee Gun, this is truly a divine weapon. The scene shifts back to the auction, where the announcer speaks again. Now we present one of Lee Gun's 8 great relics. We will now unveil the strongest relic ever used in Berlin and by Wolf, and everyone looks on in utter shock. Shocked, thinking, just as I thought, I finally get to see it. Again, Lee Gun's relic, I'm finally seeing it once more. This time, I will obtain the thing that will make me stronger. It is the strongest bone club, also known as the Great Bone. My God, I can't believe I'm seeing this. I only read about it in history books. This is the greatest divine artifact ever recorded. It holds unmatched historical value and incredible practical power. So who will claim ownership of the Great Bone? The room erupts as everyone shouts and competes to purchase it. Our protagonist thinks to himself, yeah, I really did use that before. But Chun Sunjae is too shocked to respond. Not now, I'm busy. Later, Captain of the Sanctuary, handle it for now. I'll contact you afterward. Headquarters, we cannot allow them to seize this so easily. Our protagonist grows irritated as they continue to ignore the situation. Lee Gun. We will now start the bidding for this item. Opening price is $1 million. It quickly climbs to 5 million, then 10 million, 30 million, and 50 million. A wave of system notifications suddenly appears before the protagonist as his fame continues to rise. He wonders what is going on and calls out to the system. calm down. He is shocked, asking why people are throwing around such enormous sums of money for that item. Moreover, isn't it obvious? It is a legendary weapon personally crafted by Lee Gun himself. Lee Gun becomes increasingly annoyed as the explanation drags on. You may not realize it, but there's a specific reason people behave this way. These accessories, charms, and tools all function together in the same system. Every divine relic he creates is regarded as top tier, the best of the best, and anyone who wants them will go to great lengths. Anyone after divine relics is willing to do anything just to obtain one. Especially the Saint of Leo, Stephen Marker. Markin is a serious case, having gathered Lee Gun's relics from all over the world. He is so overwhelmingly strong as a saint that no one dares oppose Lee Gun over relic matters. Because of relic disputes, people are too afraid to challenge him directly. It's unfortunate that only part of his collection is complete with those relics. I need to stay calm. All profits are being deposited into a government-managed account. Anyway, the protagonist pauses, realizing the profits are going straight into his own bank account. That means no matter who buys them, it all works out fine. The bidding process continues without slowing down. Stephen Marker suddenly shouts out loud, 1 billion. He declares he will pay 1 billion. His announcement freezes the entire venue as he steps forward. He repeats firmly that he is buying the relic for $1 billion and says he can raise it to 10 if needed. The announcer pauses, momentarily stunned. Then he repeats the bid, 1 billion, an unbelievable 1 billion offer. With such an enormous amount, the competition ends immediately as no one can match it. No one has anywhere near that level of money. Even Chun Sunjae and the glasses-wearing man are stunned and helpless. Lee Gun simply watches the entire scene as if it were entertainment. To him, it all feels like a show unfolding before his eyes. The announcer declares the sale complete. The Great Bone has been sold for an astonishing $1 billion. Nearby, cleaners comment on what they just heard. They agree that it's a price no ordinary person could ever afford. People like them can't even imagine numbers that large. Honestly, one of them hopes someone will come and take that man down. Suddenly, something draws their attention. Looking up, they see a massive ice dragon standing right in front of them, causing the man to recoil in shock. Back at the auction, Stephen Marker celebrates while holding his prize. In his hand, the legendary relic still looks surprisingly ordinary to Lee Gun. Stephen Marker can hardly contain his excitement, insisting he finally got it. He repeats that he truly managed to obtain it as people around Lee Gun cheer and praise him as the greatest. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupts directly in front of Lee Gun. Stephen Marker wonders aloud what is happening. A gigantic ice dragon suddenly appears. Panic spreads instantly among the crowd. Everyone begins screaming as a calamity is declared to have appeared, and the creature announces something ominous. "I've found Lee Gun." The relic's eyes lock onto Stephen Marker, and it unleashes a deafening roar. Then it charges straight toward Lee Gun at full speed. Stephen Marker just grins and begins summoning his lightning power. He swings violently, sending the dragon flying. The impact destroys everything in its path. Laughing, Stephen Marker says this is the first time he's ever been grateful for a calamity, since it lets him test this divine artifact. Standing there confidently, he keeps throwing lightning while gripping the bone tightly. The bone remains in his hand as he continues his assault. Still, something about it feels terribly wrong. Then the damage from that attack becomes obvious. Someone quickly realizes what is happening. This is bad. The teleportation zone's magic tower is collapsing after Stephen Marker blasted the dragon into it, leaving everyone horrified. If all that debris falls, the floating island itself could collapse. Someone urgently orders the disciples to step in. They use their strength to block it, and others rush in to help as well. Everyone begins gathering their power together, pouring out massive amounts of mana. It forms a gigantic sphere that they launch upward. They fire it into the sky with a loud shout. The blast slams into the tower, preventing it from crashing onto the crowd below. They quickly realize it still won't be enough. The structure is far too massive to bring down in time. Panic spreads again as people scream for everyone to run. Someone then calls Apollo's Fury. A massive whirl of flame sweeps across the area. It stops the falling debris from reaching the people below. In an instant, the wreckage is reduced to ash. Everyone recognizes that technique. Hugo Otters, the Sagittarius saint, has appeared with his bow in hand. Saint Hugo Otters arrives with his bow in hand. He mutters in annoyance that idiot lion really needs to control his strength, because this was far too dangerous. People thank Hugo Otters, but something else suddenly catches Lee Gun's attention. He looks to the side and notices another enormous monster staring directly at him. It looks like a mix between a dog and a dinosaur, already preparing to attack. Hugo Otters realizes there is another one. The creature keeps staring at Lee Gun, then suddenly launches itself forward. Fleshy tentacles shoot out toward the people near Lee Gun. Nearby, the tentacles latch onto them. The victims begin screaming for help as Hugo Otters reacts in fury. He clicks his tongue in frustration and quickly pulls back his attack. He was about to strike when a sudden roar erupts behind Lee Gun, making him turn instantly. At that moment, the blue dragon Stephen Marker had struck earlier rushes back in with its jaws wide open. Hugo Otters realizes too late that the creature is already about to attack. Its target is Lee Gun. Just like the earlier setup, chaos quickly reaches its peak once again. The monster has circled around from behind. Behind Hugo Otters, its jaws were already closing in, leaving everything looking hopeless. Lee Gun rushes in and forcefully knocks the monster away. The sudden move startles Hugo Otters, who yells out in shock. He shouts at Lee Gun to pay attention, as the attack is redirected away by the protagonist. The creature is sent flying, and Hugo Otters thanks Lee Gun for saving him just now. Lee Gun snaps back that Hugo should be the combat saint, so why is he the one getting saved? He even questions how Hugo Otters could be weaker than a production-type saint like this. Lee Gun admits he gets nervous every time he leaves Hugo Otters on his own. Left alone like that, Hugo Otters immediately looks completely depressed. The two start bickering as usual, slipping back into their familiar routine. Then suddenly, something draws their attention again. It's Stephen Marker rushing over while shouting and holding something up. Bone he yells for everyone not to interfere. He insists he is just testing out his new weapon. The monster roars back toward Lee Gun in response. Lee Gun realizes he had almost forgotten the creature was still there. From above, Stephen Marker begins gathering lightning once more. He shouts that no one should ruin the stage he prepared for the Great Bone technique. Ji-un notices something unusual in the situation. Meanwhile, the monster continues growling nonstop. Stephen Marker activates his sovereign skill, Battlefield of the Victors, forming a massive lightning shield around the area. Smirking, he tells them witness Claude's power inside this barrier. They are now trapped inside an unbreakable thunderstorm. He says that before, he was unprepared and could only fight back with limited means, but now they will witness the true power of the Great Bone. The crowd erupts in praise, calling Stephen Marker a legendary saint and claiming even Lee Gun couldn't match him. Energized by the praise, Stephen Marker drags the massive bone forward. Kian still looks unconvinced by what is happening. Stephen Marker declares the monster should prepare for his full fury. He then brings the bone crashing down onto it. The monster doesn't move at all, and Stephen simply stares in silence. He keeps staring while everyone else becomes confused. Even those watching nearby are equally puzzled. Stephen Marker slowly steps closer, still watching the creature. The monster continues staring right back at him without reacting. He scratches his head, and strangely the monster also looks confused. Getting annoyed, Stephen Marker tries again without hesitation. He lines up and repeatedly hammers it with strike after strike. After hit lands, yet the situation still doesn't change. Losing patience, he suddenly punches Lee Gun in the face, sending him flying. As Lee Gun tumbles backward, Stephen Marker cannot understand what is happening. Those attacks should have worked, so why isn't Lee Gun's weapon responding? The scene shifts to Lee Gun, who is now touching the lightning barrier trapping them inside. Inside the barrier, he swears he won't go easy on that foolish lion once they get out, calling its sovereign skill completely ridiculous. Still, Lee Gun decides the priority is dealing with the enemies in front of them first. In front of them are people who have been possessed, moving like a group of zombies, and Hugo Otters realizes something. He suddenly understands something important about these individuals. They are not actually part of the calamity itself. They were merely caught by its ability and are now being used as hostages, preventing reckless attacks. Possessed people stagger forward, begging for help, but Lee Gun suggests they may have no choice but to aim at them. Hugo Otters panics and asks what he is even talking about. He admits he has no real plan, only the intention to tear the control off them. Hugo Otters begs him to wait, but one of the monsters suddenly lunges at Lee Gun. The protagonist grabs it by the head as it attacks with its mouth wide open. He holds it firmly and looks at it coldly. Then he says now in a calm voice. He proceeds to rip the monster's controlling force away as if it were nothing. Hugo Otters is left completely stunned by what just saw. The others also stand there in shock, unable to react. Lee Gun grins and explains it's simple, as the victim collapses but is freed from control, and Hugo asks if he's alright. Lee Gun replies that he should be fine, just unconscious and uncomfortable. Still dazed, Hugo Otters cannot believe it, and asks how Lee Gun managed that. Lee Gun says it was pure brute force, but Hugo replies he can't do that since he's not that overwhelmingly strong. Protagonist shrugs and says he will handle all of them anyway. He adds that he never expected much from someone as weak as Hugo Otters. That comment only makes Hugo Otters feel even more insignificant. Still, Hugo insists they cannot rush in blindly and says he will provide support. Both of them begin powering up, Hugo igniting flames while Lee Gun gathers black lightning. He asks Ifuro if she still remembers how to do it. With a confident smile, the response comes back, and the protagonist tells Lee Gun to keep up. Hugo Otters summons his fire bow as tension rises on the battlefield. Lee Gun says that instead of standing around, they should finish this quickly. At that moment, the monster and all the possessed humans simultaneously turn their attention toward Lee Gun. Lee Gun prepares himself, then suddenly surges forward at extreme speed. He cuts straight through the center of the formation with a rapid strike. His attack spreads outward, striking multiple targets. He destroys every controlled individual and breaks the monster's influence over them. The creature stares at Lee Gun in complete shock. Then it unleashes a barrage of slime-like projectiles at him. Lee Gun easily evades every single shot. While dodging, he realizes the monster isn't just targeting him. It is also aiming at the civilians he just rescued. As the civilians begin regaining consciousness, the monster tries to reassert control over them from behind. That moment, Hugo Otters gathers her power and steps in. She releases a rain of flaming arrows from above. The attack wipes out the incoming threat before it reaches them, forcing the civilians to flinch and shield themselves. They brace themselves with tense, serious expressions. Hugo Otters declares that as long as she is here, the monster will not touch those people. Lee Gun praises her briefly, then turns his attention to the remaining civilians and calls out to them. He insults the creature, telling it to stop wasting time and come at him directly. The monster locks onto Lee Gun once more. The protagonist draws back, preparing a massive punch. He launches a devastating blow that sends the creature flying. The monster is blasted into the sky, letting out a rough scream. Lee Gun strike tears through it in a single hit. One clean shot is all it takes, and he remains standing as if nothing happened. As expected from Lee Gun, the fight ends instantly. With the monster gone, those it controlled begin to awaken, lying on the ground and slowly recovering. While they recover, something draws Lee Gun's attention and he pauses. He tries to understand what is happening around him. Suddenly, system windows begin appearing one after another. They list the skills he has obtained. One of them is Fighter's Instinct. The system shows it is level 1 and asks if he wants to activate it. Lee Gun considers Fighter's Instinct. He thinks the skill requires a certain level of divine power to function properly. This might be the perfect opportunity to test it. He accepts the activation. The scene then shifts to Stephen Marker, still gripping his own arm. He curses under his breath while holding his bone. He mutters in frustration, wondering how everything ended up this way, questioning why the great bone is not responding. He can't understand why it isn't working properly. He wonders if he is unable to access its true power, or if he has become weaker than expected. The monster freezes as it locks eyes on the creature ahead. Giant beast causes panic as people shout that Stephen Marker is being overwhelmed. Then they suddenly notice something else unfolding. Something else. Lee Gun's energy begins spreading out from the breach. Across the entire area, he tears apart the skill Stephen Marker had been using with his bare hands. The ability Stephen Marker relied on is completely destroyed. Realizing the danger, Stephen Marker finally senses things are turning serious. The monster shifts its priority, deciding to seize the divine relic before dealing with Lee Gun. Lee Gun. The moment it charges forward, bite him. Lee Gun clicks his tongue in annoyance. Shut it. He slams it down violently, triggering a shockwave that forces everyone nearby to brace themselves. The blast sends Stephen Marker flying back while Lee Gun remains calm, one hand in his pocket, as the monster is driven hard into the ground. It is crushed into the earth, unable to comprehend how a human could be this powerful. It even questions whether Lee Gun is truly human. Lee Gun snaps back. What nonsense are you talking about, idiot? He stomps again, tearing apart the surroundings as Stephen Marker watches in stunned disbelief. Stephen Marker mutters that there was only ever one being with such overwhelming destructive force. Only one person possessed this level of power. He is before he can finish his thought. Lee Gun turns with a chilling smile and says it's been a while since they met. Again, he calls him a damn lion and says he's been enjoying dragging his name through the mud. The lion is already lying on the ground, shaken. Trembling, he stammers that it cannot be true. Impossible. He swings at Lee Gun. Xian, but he suddenly freezes when Lee Gun catches the massive bone weapon as if it weighs nothing. Stephen Marker trembles uncontrollably as he watches the scene unfold. The opponent remarks that he must have enjoyed playing around with this situation. Then Lee Gun crushes the bone weapon with his bare hands. He says sorry to ruin the illusion, but it's nothing more than an ordinary bone. Bone fragments are thrown straight into Stephen Marker's face. Stephen Marker realizes all his effort has amounted to nothing. Nothing. Lee Gun says it's only fair that now it's his turn. Stephen Marker pleads for him to stop, but there is no time left. Lee Gun drives a punch straight into him. The impact blasts through the entire area and exits out the other side. Stephen Marker curses as he is thrown into open space beyond the shattered battlefield. In the distance, Saint lies unconscious. She remains still, slowly drifting in unconsciousness. Confused, she wakes and wonders where she is and why her head is aching. Her head throbs painfully as she tries to orient herself. Back with Lee Gun, Hugo Otters and the others can only stare at the massive hole left behind. The protagonist casually waves it off, saying goodbye to that damn situation. Leon, if he's still alive, of course. Hugo Otters asks why he ended up throwing Lee Gun from such a height. From so far up. Lee Gun just shrugs, saying a body that tough would probably survive anyway. Maybe so. Hugo Otters then asks whether the captured people are alright, and Lee Gun points out they clearly are. Everyone is safe. In fact, all of them are celebrating after surviving the collision calamity. Then, with a snap of his fingers, he calls something over. Piggy appears, the former Pichu, now one of his creatures. Pets. He orders Piggy to go gather anything valuable it can find. Hugo Otters sighs, remarking that Lee Gun is just as greedy as ever. As always. Meanwhile, the pet happily starts absorbing treasures, while the two continue talking like nothing happened. Hugo Otters then asks about the person who lent the protagonist a phone. Hemsey replies, guessing the man's name was something like that. That response immediately hits Hugo Otter's hard. Lee Gun adds bluntly that the person was probably already sunk. Chun Sungja, someone connected to Gemini still. It was Chun Sungja. He was involved too, but the kid seems sharp, so Lee Gun thinks he might be worth keeping around. Close to home, Hugo Otter starts trembling, realizing Lee Gun is talking about the very son he never wanted involved. Nearby Lee Gun, Hugo Otter screams internally, realizing Chun Sungjae has gotten entangled with this walking disaster. He tries to recall the boy's face. He remembers how carefully he tried to keep Lee Gun away from his children. The kids absolutely idolize him. Lee Gun. And if they discover he's alive, Hugo Otters fears his family is doomed. He mentions Chun Sungjae is with a Gemini bishop who can teleport, meaning a single call could bring everyone here instantly. In an instant. Panicking, Hugo Otters insists they must leave immediately. Now, Lee Gun simply asks why. Hugo Otters quickly makes excuses, saying Lee Gun must be exhausted and shouldn't deal with Gemini matters. Lee Gun pauses at that, remembering the trouble involving Sung Jia. Before that, he admits Hugo Otters might actually have a point. Maybe they're right. Perhaps Gemini truly dislikes Lee Gun. Sorry, Sung. Hugo Otters keeps trying to steer him away from any Gemini involvement. But just then, a voice calls out from nearby. Dad. Hugo Otters immediately turns around. That voice, then a question follows, asking if they are talking about him. Lee Gun. At that moment, Chun Sungjae appears behind them, leaving Hugo Otters frozen. Shocked. Hugo Otters blurts out his name, stunned he arrived so quickly. Here, Chun Sungjae tells his father to speak honestly, while Hugo Otters struggles for words. Words fail him, and before they can respond properly, before it's resolved, the monster begins muttering under its breath. Dion's name is spoken as it unleashes another wave of slime. Attacks. The slime heads straight for Lee Gun, but just before impact, before it lands, Lime suddenly appears out of nowhere. From nowhere, it devours the entire monster until nothing remains left behind. The system announces a divine relic effect, poison resistance gained, and the body's resistance expanding to 100 toxins. Effect. Lee Gun simply stares as Lime devours the monster. The creature is eaten, and Lee Gun suddenly erupts in anger. Furious. He can't believe the glutton is trying to swallow something so filthy off the ground. He shouts for it to spit it out immediately. Lime is shaken violently as Hugo Otters watches the scene unfold, and he thinks that thing really came out of the bone calamity. This could have turned extremely dangerous. Chun Sungjae asks if that slime is the one from the stories, and Hugo Otters realizes he's right, it matches what he read in books, linked to Ji-eun's records. It shows the incredible skill the protagonist demonstrated earlier, that raw magical force, power, the same force his reclusive father once had connections with, friends with, and now that same slime is with Lee Gun. Holding it, Chun Sungjae begins to wonder if this really is Lee Gun, growing emotional by the second, moment by moment. Meanwhile, Hugo Otters silently takes mental hits, completely crushed. Broken down, he watches while Chun Sungjae's eyes shine with excitement. He still feels annoyed, tugging at his patience as things spiral. Online, the scene then shifts to the United States, inside the Lion Temple headquarters. In a meeting room full of top executives, arguments break out over the missing Lion Saint. Since Gemini is known for tracking people, tensions rise. Someone suggests paying any price necessary to locate them. Find Lee Gun. This speaker is Oliver, a Lion Bishop, the same man who once confronted Diocles. Others question whether Gemini would even help after past incidents. Oliver grumbles that he only tried to act impressive during his first major appearance. The discussion continues to escalate, going on. One member cautiously wonders if the one who defeated their leader could truly be Lee Gun. Could it be? The group falls silent at the possibility. Lee Gun. Oliver dismisses it, saying even if it was him, their leader was only beaten once before, previously. He adds that among all saints, theirs is still among the strongest. And suddenly, a phone begins ringing. In the background, a ringtone plays mocking the lions while praising Lee Gun. Instead, the entire room falls into complete silence. Instantly, someone awkwardly realizes their phone is ringing. Standing there, she hesitates in embarrassment. She apologizes, admitting she forgot to switch her phone to silent mode. The speaker is Yoram, vice castellan of the Lion organization and one of its cardinals. Man snaps at her in disbelief over what she just said. He demands to know what she thinks she is doing. She's doing this while they're in a meeting trying to locate their saint. Joran casually asks why they should even bother looking for that bastard. Everyone is stunned, and she quickly corrects herself, asking why they should look for Lee Gun instead. Lee Gun anyway. The guy is tough enough, he'll survive just fine, somehow. Now everyone starts wondering if that really was a slip, while another executive complains angrily. Yo-ha checks her phone and reads the message. Nona, we've got a new uncle now, he's super cool, so come home fast. The legends were true. For context, Nona is basically a way of calling an older sister. Sis, the angry executive keeps shouting, asking if she is even listening. But Yo-ha is stuck on one thing. An uncle. What does that mean? So she announces she's leaving and tells them to decide the rest themselves. She then turns around and walks out, leaving everyone behind, staring. The man with glasses is left fuming, shouting after her, after her. The story shifts to the Aquarius dorm, where Sophie, Morris, and Marty live, as a crowd keeps begging the saint to say something. They demand answers about the Drachma incident, Lee Gun's role in it, and who was taken. They also demand the truth about what happened 20 years ago. But her guards step in and shut it down. They say the saint needs rest. Today. Any answers will come later through official channels, so everyone needs to leave. Sophie Morris watches all this with suspicion. With a face mask on, she fumes over it. Lee Gun. She can't believe he stirred up this much chaos. Her mind goes back to disaster and Drachma. People were panicking and yelling for help. Space rumors spread that the saint had been kidnapped and then released by bold criminals. Wrapped up and looking miserable. She stayed silent. Then the necklace Lee Gun put on her starts glowing green. Everyone panics, thinking it's an attack, but then they realize it's some kind of message. A hologram appears. Who killed me, Lee Gun? Tell everyone the truth about 20 years ago. Sophie Morris panics, not knowing what to do. If she tells the truth, the other saints will come after her. If she stays silent, Lee Gun definitely won't let it go. Either way, she's furious that he did this to her while she was passed out. Worse, she can't even take the necklace off. Screaming in frustration, she swears he will pay for this. In her mind, all of it is Lee Gun's fault. Meanwhile, far away, our guys are completely relaxed. With Kofrino stretching out on his legs, he takes it easy. He casually says maybe he should do some farm work. And we cut to someone watching the news. The reporter says Sophie Morris still hasn't come out of her sacred dorm, and she hasn't made any statement. But of everything that happened after Drachma, this may end up causing the biggest fallout. But Lygian thinks that still won't be enough. Then the scene shifts to Hugo Otter's house, the Saint of Sagittarius. A shot lands right in the center. Points. The one who fired it was Hugo Otters. Using his new bow, he waits for Lee Gun's appearance. Opinion. Asked what he thinks, Hugo Otters says it's perfect. To Lee Gun, it's way better than the one that old goat made before. Lee Gun instantly gets annoyed by the comparison. Harrison. Then he destroys the arrow that just hit the target. Smirking, he calls that a real 10-point shot. Hugo Otters stares and asks if he really had to shoot like that. Even blindfolded, Lee Gun hits Hugo Otters' arrow again. Exactly. He says shooting arrows is fun. On 2. Hugo Otters complains that he did it on purpose and didn't need to aim at Lee Gun. At his shot, he laughs and admits he only did it to mess with him. Hugo Otters. Just then someone walks up beside them. It's Sung Jae, warmly offering Lee Gun something. And water in a towel, asking Lee Gun to help himself. Thanks, Lee Gun. The two sit there peacefully while Chun Sunjae looks at Lee Gun. After Lee Gun, behind them Hugo Otters burns with jealousy. So he asks Sung Jae if he brought water for his dad too. Chun Sunjae tells Lee Gun it's in the fridge and he can get it himself. In at that. While Hugo Otters sulks, Lee Gun starts thinking. After what happened in Drachma, his stats went up, so maybe it's time to invest them. The system announces that Ophiuch's sacred domain, the Serpent Palace, has been created. Since the domain is still low level, the space is small. The sacred domain is where the Constellation Master lives. It's also a territory where that master can store and use power. Now Lee Gun can control his own domain. He can even teleport the low-class Avar Kafrine. Now into it, the system adds that human avatars can strengthen the domain. Further, that part catches his attention. Then Chun Sunjae reminds Lee Gun it's almost time to leave, saying he has things to handle too and they should go together. Lee Gun realizes he lost track of time. Hugo Otters asks if he has a meeting and he says he's got a lot of people to meet. The meeting takes place today, and sometime later Divine Captain Choi asks whether Lee, the main protagonist, is finally planning to join. Under the Gemini banner, Lee Gun casually keeps eating fried chicken, as if wondering whether the man in front of him ever gets tired. Even a nearby worker is visibly stunned by just how much food he is ordering and consuming. While watching him eat, Choi remarks that although he may be busy, recruiting talented people is always worth the effort. He adds that Lee Gun shouldn't try to act so innocent or naive in situations like this, calling him innocent. He notes that after all, Lee Gun has used certain means before. He even used Gemini's money to purchase all those auction items, paying in drachma for goods worth a fortune. Those items were worth millions, yet Lee Gun continues to play dumb without hesitation. With a calm expression, he simply wipes his mouth, as though nothing unusual has happened. In that moment, Troy realizes everything was part of Lee Gun's plan and silently curses him inwardly. He had initially thought Lee Gun was merely irritating, but his opinion is starting to shift. Now he finds Lee Gun oddly likable, while Lee Gun himself recalls the saints he has already obtained. His thoughts turn toward revenge. Next target on his list is already decided. Eventually, he agrees to officially join Gemini. Choi immediately suggests setting an official date, but Lee Gun still holds the advantage with his condition. Condition he demands is the right to choose the badge. Seeing him wear it, others become immediately angry. They quickly protest, insisting that the saint herself had given that badge to Lee Gun. Gun. Lijian steps in and tells them to stay out of it, saying the adults are speaking. He points out that the badge is necessary to access Gemini's privileges, and they can offer support later. He adds that promises only matter when backed by something tangible in hand. If they are serious, investing that much in a talented individual is the least they can do. Troy is left unsure how to respond. Meanwhile, the others keep insisting that Lee Gun should not accept the deal. Lijian tells them to decide quickly since he has another meeting afterward. After this, he checks his chat with Sung Jae. The scene shifts to Sung Jae reading the message he had just received. The protagonist says he will be a little late, and Sung Jae replies that he can take as much time as he needs, reassuring him calmly. While using his phone, Sung Jae simply answers okay without concern. He then thinks to himself that Nona will be shocked when she learns Lijian is his uncle, and he looks forward to her reaction after so long. He even plans to ask for an autograph on the dagger Lee Gun prepared. Suddenly, someone snatches it away, warning that playing with such a weapon is dangerous. The man insists it is too dangerous and confidently says he will confiscate it. Sung Jae protests immediately, demanding to know what he means by that. The person interfering with Lee Gun turns out to be Yeonwoo, an A-rank Gemini Templar. Sung Jae tells Lee Gun to give the item back at once. Yeonwoo looks down on Lee Gun, questioning whether he truly speaks to his superior that way. He casually mentions that they also enjoy coming to this cafe, which only makes Sung Jae more frustrated. Sung Jae curses his bad luck and wishes he had chosen a different place. He feels like striking Lee Gun, but restrains himself since the man is about to leave. As the son of Libra, he tries to act important and composed. Suddenly, a system window appears. The relic Janus's Desire reacts to its master being in danger, triggering a random skill activation. The skill is activated and light begins to pour out. From the dagger, a burst of light erupts, freezing the blonde man in place. In an instant, Lee Gun is summoned midair, his presence suddenly appearing right in front of the stunned group. He crashes forward, slamming directly into the situation and shocking everyone present. Everyone is left staring in disbelief, unable to understand what they are seeing. The dagger has literally summoned Lee Gun into the scene. In midair, the blonde man is thrown violently to the ground. He hits the floor hard while Sung Jae lights up with excitement, happy that Lee Gun has finally arrived. Lee Gun looks around in confusion, asking if that is really Sung Jae and what is happening here. Meanwhile, the other man clutches his nose in pain and cries out. Sung Jae asks how he managed to appear right at that exact moment. Lee Gun casually replies that he was just eating fried chicken. He explains he was at a restaurant when the dagger's one-time summoning skill must have been activated. Realizing this, Lee Gun looks down at the blonde man and coldly assesses the situation with the punks threatening Sung Jae. He asks how they dared to mess with his nephew. The others are shaken, unsure how to react. They begin wondering if Sung Jae ever mentioned having a gangster-like uncle. None of them recall hearing about it, but they all agree this man is terrifying. Truly frightening, Lee Gun steps forward, ready to show what happens when someone touches his family. Panic spreads among them, and the story suddenly shifts back to the restaurant before Lee Gun was summoned. Choi had already accepted the deal by that point. Even so, he thought it was a poor idea deep down. Still, he concluded that Lee Gun was worth spending millions on if it brought results. He also planned to retrieve the badge later by inserting a hidden clause into the contract. Handing over the contract, he warns Lee Gun not to misuse the badge, to which Lee Gun simply replies he will try. Choi then asks him to sign the contract. Just as he is about to hand it over, the situation abruptly changes. Lee Gun suddenly vanishes right before their eyes. Everyone is left staring into the distance in shock. Waitress arrives with the bill, showing an absurd total of 790 drachma, leaving them stunned. They are shocked that he spent all of that money just on fried chicken. Scene then shifts back to the cafe. The group is already beaten down and sprawled across the floor. The blonde man tries to act tough despite the situation. He boasts about being from Gemini, even while looking rough and disheveled. The wealthy man shows no interest in Lee Gun at all. He doesn't care in the slightest and keeps striking Lee Gun repeatedly. He continues the assault until the man ends up begging Lee Gun to stop. The protagonist tells Lee Gun to get up, saying he's only just warming up. The attacker panics as his magical defenses fail to function properly. Enraged, he suddenly snaps. He fires back, insulting Lee Gun as an arrogant worm and calling him Philip's bull. The monster then summons a massive creature behind Lee Gun. Lee Gun simply watches it without any reaction. Others panic, shouting for everyone to flee immediately. They warn that the area is about to fall into complete chaos. Lee Gun mocks him, saying this is what he gets for acting so tough. He sighs and says the man is far too loud and reckless. He expected something impressive, but the power turns out to be underwhelming. It's completely useless, barely worth anything at all. A system message appears as he masters the enemy's magic and gains data from Bola Phalaris rank, excess charcoal. The blonde man is stunned and asks how something like that is even possible, questioning if Gianna was a mage. He replies that she isn't a mage but a blacksmith instead. After that, more information continues to follow. System messages keep appearing one after another. The final message asks whether he wants to convert the data into a skill. Lee Gun says he'll demonstrate how that skill is truly meant to be used. He activates it, calling forth a blazing bull-like minotaur. A massive minotaur materializes. It appears and destroys everything in its path. The blonde man is slammed into a wall, left completely wrecked, while Lee Gun warns him not to touch Chun Sunjae again, or he'll end up skewered. Tells Chun Sunjae not to fear fools like that, since his uncle will protect him. Chun Sunjae nods in agreement, trusting that protection. Chen Yoha arrives asking where Chun Sunjae is. He looks around the area, seeing the destruction. She wonders what happened and whether he is alright. Chun Sunjae excitedly runs up, saying she won't believe what she's about to see. He points forward. He tells her to come see the hero who saved humanity from countless calamities. It's the same legendary figure from the video, the one they used to watch over and over again. Flashback shows young Chun Sunjae and young Yoha watching together. Back in the present, she stares at Lee Gun. She looks at Lee Gun in disbelief and whispers, "Mr. Protagonist." Still in shock, she pinches herself to confirm it's real. Realizing it is indeed true, she becomes visibly excited. It really is Lee Gun, and she can't believe how handsome he looks now. She reflects that he has changed a lot over the years, especially after 2 decades. He spent 20 years inside the Devil Tower bearing countless scars. She expected him to look worse, but tells herself it doesn't matter. What matters most is that the heroic figure is still alive. She's just relieved he's safe. While Chun Sunjae points out she said it aloud, leaving her embarrassed. Lee Gun smiles gently and greets her politely, saying it's a pleasure to meet her. She introduces herself as Chen Yoha and thanks him for helping Chun Sunjae. He tells her she doesn't need to be so formal. Since she is Hugo Otter's daughter, she's practically like a niece to him. The word niece hits her emotionally and leaves her deeply moved. She apologizes for asking something right after meeting him. She says she actually has a request to make. Lee Gun encourages her not to be shy, joking if she wants an autograph. She hesitates and begins asking if, when he has time. At that moment, a lava monster suddenly rises behind Lee Gun with a roar. Chen Yoha reacts in confusion, unsure what kind of request this even is now. She then realizes the roar is coming from the monster behind Lee Gun. It stands right behind them, looming over the scene. Its head is swiftly taken down as Chun Sunjae hides behind his protector in fear. Protagonist tells Lee Gun to give her a moment. She says she'll properly ask after dealing with all these calamities. Then she dashes off at full speed. Chun Sunjae remarks that she only became like this because of Jae-yun, then asks what her sister just meant by asking for his hand. He wonders what her sister just said. He asks what asking for his hand is supposed to mean. The scene then shifts outside. An announcement warns that multiple calamities have appeared. It is not a drill, and everyone is ordered to evacuate immediately. They are instructed to move to safety at once. Giant worm-like monsters tear through the city as chaos spreads across the sky. People flee in panic through the streets. Amid the chaos, one monster is already riddled with holes like Swiss cheese. Yoha stands there with her spear, cutting them down efficiently. More calamities rush toward her, but she pushes herself harder. She tells herself she needs to move faster. She continues slicing through enemies one after another. Her goal is to finish the battle as quickly as possible. She wants to wrap this up fast so she can go and talk to him. Even then, more calamities continue roaring down on her from above without stopping. From overhead, she watches the destruction spread and grows irritated that these calamities keep appearing non-stop. She finally decides to eliminate them all at once and makes her move. She charges forward, spinning her spear rapidly as she rushes straight in for the enemies while Yoha loudly shouts at them. He tells them not to interrupt her proposal. She hurls her spear, erasing every calamity in its path. As it flies, she calls out the name of her technique. The move, Lotus Flesh, unleashes devastating destruction across the battlefield. From a distance, Chainyu watches the aftermath unfold. He wonders if that's all there is and realizes he followed her out of worry for nothing. His concern now seems unnecessary as everything is already handled. Her combat instincts appear even sharper than Hu's. When Yuhai notices Lee Gun, she becomes momentarily distracted. In that brief moment, she loses focus completely. A calamity suddenly appears behind her, but just before it strikes, he steps in and saves both her and Xian Sungjai. Blushing intensely, she admits he even managed to avoid her previous attack in an incredible way. She remarks that there truly are remarkable humans like him out there. Humans exist who can even surpass fierce monsters. A woman suddenly appears, holding a whip, declaring that Lee Gun will become her spouse. She rides on a giant mutated turtle, treating it like her personal special pet. Like a wild beast, she questions the protagonist's intentions. She complains that everyone nowadays keeps playing with fire. Lee Gun replies that he wasn't seeking trouble or fire. However, since he needs materials to forge more relics, he decides to take advantage of this opportunity. She confidently declares that he will become her #1 choice. She considers him both a fuel source and an entertaining human to train, someone worth shaping and pushing further. He comments on their unusual race and says they need to be stopped immediately, then asks Yuhai why she looks so distracted. expected. He points out that she was about to fight alone again. He tells her to leave the fight to Lee Gun, instead protect the civilians with Chun Sunjae. He trusts them because both are strong enough to handle their roles, so they should leave these enemies to Lee Gun alone. Yuhai smiles softly and agrees. Chun Sunjae begins summoning his massive construct while Yahello prepares his spear again. Lee Gun tells them they should be ready again and maybe have a bit of fun with this fight. Just then, the monster woman prepares to strike once more, escalating the battle. She lunges at Lee Gun with her whip while screaming fiercely. She wants him to suffer even more and pushes her attack further. Lee Gun keeps one hand in his pocket, calmly dodging every strike. She finally lands a hit with her whip, but he remains completely composed. Still calm, he lets her celebrate, claiming training him will become even more exciting. She then flings Lee Gun violently through the air. He is smashed through multiple buildings as he is thrown across the battlefield. He continues crashing through several structures before the momentum finally slows. He slams into the ground, tears her whip apart, and complains that she talks too much. Asks if that is all she has. The monster woman grins and says of course it isn't over yet. Her giant turtle then unleashes a massive blast of fire. A huge explosion erupts across the battlefield. Chun Sunjae's giant summon shields everyone from the debris and protects the civilians. He urgently orders everyone to evacuate immediately. Chun Sunjae feels proud after successfully getting everyone to safety. He coordinates the remaining evacuation efforts, and Yoha agrees with the plan. She agrees but still glances back toward the battlefield. Looking at the explosion where Lee Gun was, she worries about the dangerous illusion class calamity. It is one of the most dangerous calamity types, even at high class level. Even the protagonist would struggle against something like this, especially if he is still affected by wounds or lingering side effects from the Devil Tower. If that is true, she feels she must go help Lee Gun. Chun Sunjae reminds her that Lee Gun told them to stay back, but she insists she will return quickly and tells him to trust her. He tells Lee Gun to hide and stay safe. The battlefield is completely devastated, yet Lee Gun still stands firmly in the center. The monster admits she may have gone too far and did not intend to reduce him to ashes. Lee Gun laughs and says this is finally real firepower. At least this level of heat actually counts as something meaningful. Unlike the weak flame from the Gemini blonde man earlier, this one will definitely serve as his #1 fuel source. A system message appears, confirming usable fire has been obtained for the creation workshop. With the attack over, Lee Gun says there is no reason to hold back anymore and summons the Hammer of Creation. The system confirms that usable fire has been detected within the creation workshop. The workshop level 1 activates, applying repairs, upgrades, and attribute enhancements with initial luck effects. It then prompts him to choose a target for enhancement. Lee Gun calmly replies that he has already made his choice. A green targeting circle forms around him as the monster woman watches in confusion from a distance. She decides she won't let Lee Gun finish whatever he is doing. At that moment, Yoha suddenly appears behind her and activates a skill. Lightning roar is unleashed, and a massive red bolt crashes down onto the monster. But Yoha is shocked when the attack produces absolutely no effect at all. The monster shows no mercy, hurling her away with a vicious curse. Yoha is thrown back into the distance, coughing up blood from the impact. Stunned from the blow, the monster then issues another command. It orders its massive beast to finish her off as its jaws open wide to swallow Yoha. Just as the creature lunges in, something suddenly halts it and pulls it back. It is yanked sharply in the opposite direction. Yoha looks up in shock, seeing Lee Gun gripping the beast by its tail. He casually asks where it thinks it is going. The beast seems confused, as if still expecting to play with Lee Gun, before he slams it into the ground. It crashes down hard, revealing it was not a turtle, but something far more dangerous. A lizard-like beast lies there with its mouth hanging open after the impact. The monster woman is shocked that Lee Gun lifted and threw the hell lizard with his bare hands. He warns her that if she ever touches Yoha again, he will erase her entire race. Overwhelmed by fear, she feels an unbearable pressure and begins to panic. It feels as if his very presence is consuming her completely. She cannot believe a mere human is overpowering a proud member of the illusion race. Realizing the situation has changed, she decides to stop holding back. She shifts into her true form, while He braces herself against the overwhelming power, and Jae Yeon remains steady. The monster coldly declares that she truly despises them. She admits she dislikes using this form, but has no choice left against Lee Gun. Now she must treat Lee Gun as a genuine and serious opponent. As a red-ranked calamity of the illusion race, she reveals her infernal wings. She swears to burn Lee Gun and everything around him to ashes. Activating her calamity skill, Infernal Prison, she launches herself forward. At extreme speed, she charges in, tearing through everything in her path. Right before the attack lands, Lee Gun calmly intercepts it. He catches the strike effortlessly with a single hand. Yoha panics and calls out desperately to Lee Gun. A massive explosion erupts, shaking the entire area. A shockwave devastates nearby buildings buildings as the monster freezes in disbelief. She stands stunned, unable to comprehend what just happened. Lee Gun calmly remarks that it went even better than he expected. A system message appears stating his plastic gloves have been upgraded with Hellwing fire compatibility, granting C-rank flame resistance, a small luck bonus, and even minor spicy food resistance, though they are low durability and one-time use. She is shocked and questions what she is even seeing, completely thrown off by the situation. She cannot believe her infernal prison was stopped by nothing more than plastic gloves. Immediately after, Lee Gun's regeneration activates, rapidly healing the damage he took. He declares he will make her pay for setting the entire city on fire. He vows she will not escape punishment for the destruction caused. You're going to keep burning my workshop of creations like this. What an insult. She asks what he is even talking about, clearly confused by his reaction. He questions whether she is seriously underestimating the power of his plastic gloves. He adds that she clearly doesn't understand how useful they are for eating spicy chicken. The system warns that the negative energy is too strong to convert the Hellwing power into a diabolic avatar, requiring purification instead. She reacts, realizing purification is being demanded and questioning what that even means. Lee Gun responds, "Oh, you mean this?" before preparing a purifying punch. He begins unleashing a series of purifying punches in rapid succession. The giant lizard watches in shock as the barrage continues behind Lee Gun. After a while, Lee Gun grumbles, frustrated that the process is taking so long. The system informs him that the target has already been fully defeated, and dead targets cannot be purified. He pauses in confusion, realizing she was defeated so quickly, calling it troublesome. Accepting the situation, he decides to use another option since his fire source is gone. The infernal lizard surrenders and becomes a diabolic captive under his control. The small lizard appears and obediently waves a white flag toward Lee Gun. Lee Gun asks what its name should be. He offers options like torch, gas tank, lantern, charcoal, and Lala lizard. The creature stands frozen, overwhelmed, as every name sounds progressively worse than the last. It cannot believe his terrible naming sense and is completely stunned. The system announces that the final name selected is Torch. Yoha checks on Lee Gun, asking if everything is alright, while he reassures them in return. They respond that they are fine, but Yoha says she still has something to say. She prepares to ask Lee Gun a question. He suddenly remembers she mentioned wanting to ask him something earlier. She had said she would properly ask after dealing with the calamities. Lee Gun is startled, realizing she might be referring to his hand. Before he can finish his thought, she interrupts him. She asks if he really sacrificed himself in Devil's Town. The protagonist blinks in confusion, asking what she means. She explains she has always wondered about it. Everyone called it a sacrifice made for humanity, but something about the Red Eyes incident never felt right. When humanity was on the brink of extinction, things did not add up. How could Lee Gun, the strongest saint, be the one who fell there? There was no proof and no way to properly investigate it, so she kept those doubts to herself all along. She reflects on it internally, piecing everything together. Now she is certain that Lee Gun never truly sacrificed himself. Instead, he was trapped by someone else's malicious scheme. Lee Gun admits she is sharp, just like Hugo Otter's. He confirms that, as Hugo Otter's daughter, her conclusion is correct. Years ago, he was betrayed inside the Devil's Tower and it all began there. He is betrayed and stabbed in the back by one of the 12 saints who accompanied Lee Gun on the mission to defeat the enemy. Red Eyes? What? That's impossible. He can't possibly be... I don't understand it. Weren't the saints supposed to save the world alongside you, uncle? Lee Gun, you are humanity's last hope, so why would you do something like this? Why would they do that? He says, the reason was likely that he was simply superior to all of them, after he defeated Red Eyes entirely on his own, by himself. They probably tried to kill Lee Gun for that exact reason. Along with the leader of with the calamity gone, they could now rule the world however they wished. They desired, and the greatest obstacle in their path was, their ambition was Lee Gun himself. He admits he can't be completely certain, but that seems like the only explanation that fits. Yusha is horrified, realizing Lee Gun was trapped inside the tower the entire time, completely alone, while the other saints stole the honor and glory that should have belonged to him for saving humanity. The protagonist thanks them, then tells them not to cry. He promises he will make those people pay it back 1,000,000 times over for everything they did. The others are left speechless. Speechless until Lee Gun suddenly speaks. He suddenly says, alright, let's see. He checks his phone. Said Sophie Morris, Marty makes sudden visit to Korea. Press conference today at 7. That's the last thing on my schedule. The scene shifts to the press conference. At the venue where the saint is already present in a fancy hall. Reporters crowd around taking pictures and recording everything, all waiting to hear her statement, while two people whisper nearby. One wonders what could be important enough for her to call this press conference. The other guesses it's probably about the strange message that appeared on her necklace in Drachma, or maybe it has something to do with the rumors that Lee Gun survived. Either way, they are certain she is about to reveal something huge. Sophie Morris tries to maintain a graceful pose, but inside she is panicking. Oh god, I'm done. Should I just cancel this press conference and run away? But with that relic hanging around her neck, she has no idea what it might do. It could even be dangerous. If she wants to live, she has to do what Lee Gun said. She imagines Lee Gun controlling her life. Like a puppet, she realizes one thing for sure. Unlike other saints, he was not bluffing when he said he would eliminate her. That thought leaves her trembling. Then she finally says the reason she called everyone here today is to reveal the truth about something that happened 20 years ago. She asks if, back then, people immediately react. Devil's Tower? You mean the Red Eyes raid? They completed that raid, didn't they? Today, Sophie Morris takes a breath and says that the truth is, the real hero who defeated. At first, the crowd repeats his name and tries to confirm it. Some even think it's old news. But then it sinks in, and the entire room explodes in shock. Reporters start yelling, "Saint, what do you mean? Is that true? Are you saying Lee Gun alone killed Red Eyes, not Stephen Marker? Marker? Tell us what really happened." The room turns into chaos. Does that mean the protagonist is alive and the Saints lied this whole time? The whole time, Sophie Morris hesitates, not knowing how to answer. Just as she is about to confirm it, someone cuts her off, saying, "That's obviously impossible." A sinister man appears behind her. She turns pale with fear. It's Jean Lewis, Saint Jean Lewis. Jean Lewis looks at her and mockingly comments on how pale she is. He claims, according to Lee Gun, she clearly isn't in any condition to keep speaking. Isn't that right? Right, Sophie Morris? He continues the act of concern. "Saints, it seems like this conference can't go on. Come on, Sophie Morris." But he snaps at her, telling her to shut up. He demands to know what she thinks she's saying with the microphone still on and reminds her to know her place. All she had to do, he says, keep her acting as a saint like she always did. So what exactly is she complaining about enough to make a scene like this? She doesn't want everyone to see Lee Gun tear her apart. She should be careful. He orders silence, then cuts off her microphone and turns toward the press. He faces the reporters and issues an apology. He claims Sophie Morris is being forced into giving false testimony due to blackmail. He assures everyone not to worry and promises her safety after his apology. He apologizes once more before speaking to the media. He declares to the press that the conference has officially ended. Reporters immediately protest, demanding answers about the situation. They bring up Lee Gun again at that very moment. Dark energy suddenly begins pouring from Lee Gun toward the crowd. He states that Lee Gun died in the demonic tower 20 years ago. He asks what else people even need to know beyond that. He argues that if Lee Gun truly returned, he would have revealed himself by now. At this point, he insists there should be no doubt left. So why has he still not appeared? Reporters push back, questioning his claim about Sophie Morris being blackmailed. They ask why the supposed blackmailer would even use his name. They warn that ending the conference like this will only deepen suspicion toward the Saints. They demand that he explain everything clearly. Their pressure only makes Lee Gun more furious. He curses them, calling them insects who should know their place. He gathers power in his hand and prepares to strike, when a voice suddenly comes from behind him. A voice mocks him, asking if he really plans to wipe out all the reporters. It taunts him for that expression, as if he intends to erase everyone present in an instant. Hearing this, Lee Gun snaps and kicks toward the intruder's head. The moment is described as the end of the previous chapter, marked by the sudden arrival of that strange man confronting the Saint. Just as he attempts to clear out the reporters, the unexpected figure interrupts him. Right when he moves against the crowd, the man intervenes. He rushes in with a flying kick that lands perfectly. The kick connects cleanly, sending Lee Gun flying across the room as everyone watches in shock. The impact throws Lee Gun back while the entire crowd looks on in disbelief. Sophie Morris gasps in shock and cries out in disbelief. She recognizes him and says he has finally arrived. The man struggles to process the situation, muttering in confusion at what just happened. He insults Lee Gun, calling him a rotten crab and noting he has not changed at all. He mocks him and then sends a sudden attack straight at Lee Gun. The man hits him directly, leaving him staring at what was thrown at him. He realizes it is a tail and reacts in surprise. The scene briefly shifts to Torch, Lee Gun's new lizard companion, now missing part of its tail. Returns to Lee Gun's side after losing part of its tail. Lee Gun holds the severed tail and angrily confronts the so-called rotten crab, questioning who he is to interrupt the conference. The crowd begins whispering, recognizing it as the infernal lizard's tail. The man suddenly appears behind Lee Gun, reacting to the same realization. He also confirms it is indeed the infernal lizard's tail. He notes that someone supposedly defeated it recently. Realizing the truth, he says it must have been Lee Gun and clicks his tongue in frustration. He questions whether it was just a clone, surprised that Lee Gun's division skill was noticed so quickly. He asks directly who this person really is. The man responds casually, asking what they think his identity is. He reveals his name as Lee Gun, causing the entire room to fall into stunned silence. Everyone freezes and stares at him in shock after his declaration. One person suddenly laughs, breaking the tense silence. Soon the entire crowd joins in, dismissing his claim as a joke. A reporter mocks him, saying he looks too handsome to be the legendary protagonist. The others continue ridiculing him, all joining in the disbelief. They say he has some skill, but is clearly delusional. They tell him that if he wanted attention, he should have chosen a better target. Lee Gun ignores their ridicule completely and presses forward. Before he finishes speaking, Lee Gun swings the tail down hard in response. Strike sends the man flying across the floor, while Lee Gun casually spins the infernal lizard's tail in his hand. He asks if they all really need a beating to understand the situation. He questions why they are all just staring at him. He challenges them directly, telling them to come at him. The reporters panic and run, screaming for someone to stop Lee Gun. Sophie Morris sees an opening and tries to escape, but Lee Gun suddenly appears behind her, freezing her in place. He asks where she thinks she is going. He calls her a pest and warns her she will not escape. He demands she finish her speech properly. He orders her to explain how they escaped Red Eye 20 years ago. He tells her to reveal how they lived comfortably after leaving him behind to die. He urges her to say everything clearly. The man angrily calls Lee Gun a bastard, but the entire place suddenly begins shaking as tension rises. The system warns that a terrifying energy from the darkest star is approaching rapidly. Dark power begins spreading across the entire area. Lee Gun's body starts breaking down under the pressure. Everyone watches in shock, unable to understand what is happening. They are stunned, calling it impossible as panic spreads. One voice questions what he has done, but another insists it is not his fault. He says the entire situation has gone out of control and senses something overwhelming. He feels divine-level energy emerging as a massive dark figure begins to appear behind them. Jane glares at Lee Gun and says, "So you really are the real one. Good. I don't know how you survived Devil's Tower, but now it's time for your welcome party." As he speaks, he unleashes crushing force straight at Lee Gun. The scene then cuts to Hugo Otter's. At Hugo Otter's house, he is cooking while sighing in relief. He's glad Chun Sungjae and Yoha are finally gone so he can eat peacefully. He turns on the TV, hoping to find something worth watching. But the reporter is broadcasting live from Sophie Morris's press conference, where everything has completely descended into chaos. A man claiming to be Lee Gun has stormed in and is now engaged in a fierce battle with the Sagittarius Saint. The reporter even notes that he looks far too excited. While Lee Gun continues exchanging blows, Hugo Otters goes pale and blurts out in shock what on earth that idiot is doing now. Then the scene shifts back to the fight where the Cancer Saint gathers dark energy in his hands and unleashes a massive attack, sending the crowd into a full panic. As people run for safety, Lee Gun dodges effortlessly. He says the attacks are too weak and will never work. The Saint expands his attack, trying to trap the protagonist. Just before it lands, he is shocked to see Lee Gun block the entire attack with his dagger. Not only that, he is upside down, holding himself with one hand. The crowd is stunned and even starts clapping for Lee Gun. The opponent keeps firing dark attacks, but Lee Gun slips through every one and lands directly in front of him. "All right, my turn," he says, rushing forward at top speed, while the Saint gathers power again and mocks Lee Gun, asking what he trained for over 20 years. He flips and launches another dark attack, but Lee Gun dodges once more. He laughs and says, "That's all you've got," before slicing the Cancer Saint. But something catches Lee Gun off guard. As the opponent turns into ash, frustrated, he mutters that all those years of training were just for this trick, wondering what exactly the Saint is trying to become. Saint smirks and says he'll take that as a compliment. Meanwhile, Sophie Morris braces herself, creates a dark tornado that drains the life force of everything around him. Lee Gun curses, asking how he plans to cover up a disaster like this. The Saint says he will deal with consequences later. For now, he intends to kill Lee Gun using the entire crowd, turning the hostages against him as weapons. "I see, so you were the one behind Devil's Tower as well." The opponent laughs, asking if Lee Gun is truly obsessed with finding the culprit. He finds it funny that a hero is so fixated on personal grudges, saying people might mistake him for a thug rather than a saint. Lee Gun fires back that all he does is talk nonsense, especially for someone hiding behind fear. The man laughs and says they are not simple clones. They were created using the life force of the Republic. If Lee Gun destroys even one of them, that life force will disappear, and the reporter's survival cannot be guaranteed. Lee Gun says such filthy tricks suit him perfectly. The Saint asks if those are his final words, and says he will meet Lee Gun on the other side. He sends all his clones charging forward at Lee Gun, but in that instant, they panic. "A tail? How did that get here?" "So that's one of the skills you gained in Drachma." Lee Gun is already behind him, and rushes in at high speed, shouting, "Try this." He lands a direct hit on the Cancer Saint. The system explains his ability. He can summon recently touched targets as shields for the Ophiuchus vessel. Up to 3, arranged by most recent contact. What is this?" The Saint stammers. Lee Gun strikes him again. The man wonders how Lee Gun identified the real body. 13th sense allows detection of enemy weak points. Lee Gun says again that his tricks are cheap and dirty. It would be foolish not to see through them. At that moment, Lee Gun tears a crystal from the Cancer Saint's body. The Saint gasps in shock. "Even Gemini constellation couldn't find my core. So how did you?" The Avatar appears, swallowing the crystal as a flood of system messages appears. System confirms it is a fragment of Cancer's core containing 33% of a saint's soul and 20% energy, and that a major crack has opened within Cancer. The power of Cancer shakes the divine being deeply, allowing Lee Gun to begin absorbing constellation energy. The surrounding black star energy gradually fades away. Sophie Morris is left completely confused about what just occurred. The overwhelming dark force suddenly vanishes without warning. Reporters are stunned, questioning what just happened and who emerged victorious. As his physical form collapses, the Cancer Saint demands to know what happened to Lee Gun inside the tower. He struggles to understand the situation, asking what in the world occurred. He senses a divine-level power radiating from Lee Gun. He warns that even after being defeated, Lee Gun still intends to do something dangerous. He tells him to stop talking and focus, promising to make use of what he has taken. Referring to the core extracted from Lee Gun, he warns that he still has more tricks remaining. He claims those remaining abilities could still cause serious trouble. After that, he vanishes completely from the scene. The protagonist wonders what he meant by remaining tricks. He suspects that with that man's personality, he will not retreat quietly. Lee Gun notices a calm and steady presence observing everything. When he responds to the signal, Hugo Otters immediately begins shouting at him. Hugo Otters yells at Lee Gun, calling him reckless and demanding to know what he is doing. He orders him to leave immediately with no explanation. Watching the news, he panics and calls him a maniac for defeating a saint. He warns that a missile strike is about to hit his location. The scene shifts to space where satellites prepare for launch. Multiple missiles lock onto Earth as targeting systems activate. They finalize their aim on the designated target. Missiles begin descending rapidly toward Earth. The Mormuth missile is revealed as a catastrophe-class weapon. It was created by Capricorn, designed after Lee Gun's disappearance as humanity's ultimate defense against disasters it could not otherwise handle. It is described as humanity's final card capable of erasing everything in its path. The strike functions as an orbital-level attack, meant to wipe out calamities. The scale of the weapon leaves others in disbelief. Lee Gun realizes the missiles were programmed to launch automatically if that man's biometric signals disappeared, remembering the final warning about his last contingency plan against him. That high-ranking clone he defeated was actually tied to the real system trigger. He concludes that clone was essentially linked to the original body. He realizes this is not the time to hesitate and urges immediate evacuation. He insists that fleeing alone will not solve the situation. Those missiles have the power to destroy entire cities. Lee Gun acknowledges the danger but questions what can be done now. He smirks and says he already has a plan. Then he turns to Sophie Morris, who instantly turns pale. He reassures her that they still have a few options left. Sophie Morris is mentally exhausted, having been overwhelmed repeatedly. The missile continues its descent toward the city. It draws closer and closer without slowing down. It approaches directly over the urban area. Lee Gun grabs Sophie Morris, causing her to scream and panic. She begs him to let her go as he activates his ability. The system announces Gemini Bishop Authority, enabling levitation and teleportation toward the front of the Mormuth missile. They are instantly warped to the missile's path. They appear directly in front of the rapidly descending missile. Lee Gun holds Sophie Morris tightly as they face the incoming threat. He orders her to melt the missile, knowing she can liquefy objects. Still shocked, she asks how she is supposed to do that in this situation. He explains they have no other option and urges her to act or everyone will die. He grabs her arm and throws her forward. As she is propelled toward the missile, she screams out his name. Lee Gun yells back for her to trust herself and act as their only hope. She continues crying and calling out to him in panic. At that moment, the system announces the descent of the Aquarius goddess, shocking even the divine entity involved. The situation escalates as divine presence intervenes. The Aquarius goddess reacts, cursing Lee Gun for his reckless actions, but immediately focuses on the task. She prepares her power, stacking multiple buffs as energy gathers intensely. All that energy flows into Sophie Morris as she cries uncontrollably. In desperation, a tear falls as pressure builds within her. The saint activates the divine skill, Tears of the Goddess. A massive surge of energy rushes toward the incoming missile. The attack collides with the missile head-on. Water-like divine force pushes against it with overwhelming strength. Gradually, the missile begins to break apart under the pressure. It is completely destroyed, leaving Sophie Morris in shock. She realizes she succeeded but notices Lee Gun is no longer holding her. She begins falling toward the ground as Lee Gun calmly says goodbye, confident in the buffs he gave her. A massive wave of water destroys the remaining missiles. She is praised for performing well under pressure. However, the danger is not fully over yet. Missile fragments begin raining down, causing panic across the ground below. Lee Gun realizes the weapon originated from Gemini. If that is the case, he decides it is time to send a message back. He calls out, addressing the Purple Witch, and preparing to respond. He contacts Hugo Otters, asking if he can hear him and whether he found a solution. Stop the missile. Lee Gun says there's no time for explanations and insists it's an emergency, needing Hugo Otters' absolute core immediately. The absolute coordinate skill of Sagittarius allows precise teleportation location of a chosen target, exactly where the user intends. Especially useful for precision-based weapons. Hugo Otters is stunned by how desperate the protagonist sounds and begins to wonder just how serious the situation has become. Still, he quickly draws his magic circle and confirms he will transfer it immediately. Right now, Lee Gun gives thanks to his #1 slave. A notification appears on his phone. Sagittarius has granted absolute coordinate. Remaining uses 200. Lee Gun notes that this should be sufficient. He begins gathering purple energy as the system notification activates. The system confirms that under Sagittarius Saint authority, absolute coordinate has now been activated. He begins teleporting all missile fragments to another location. Missile fragments are being redirected elsewhere. The situation is about to unfold. Lee Gun declares it's time to deliver that present. Everyone stares in shock, asking what exactly that object is. The missile fragments rise back up, and everyone realizes they've been saved. Someone shouts that it must have been Lee Gun who did it. They cannot believe he made an entire missile disappear. Before they can process it, someone contacts Lee Gun via telecommunication. The caller identifies themselves as being from the Yin Yang Palace in the domain of the Gemini Saint. They order Bishop Choi to come immediately. Choi recognizes the voice right away. He responds immediately, asking what the problem is. The voice erupts in anger, demanding to know what he just did with his authority. They report that the Marmot fragments are falling into the Yin Yang Palace. It is revealed that Lee Gun redirected all missile fragments straight toward the Gemini Saint's temple. The scene then shifts to the Blue House, inside the presidential office. Inside the president's office, everyone is stunned by the situation. The protagonist's actions leave them completely speechless. Lee Gun's arrival caused chaos. He destroyed St. Sophie Morris's press conference, defeated Cancer Scent, and stopped the Marmot missile aimed at Korea. None of it makes any logical sense to them. At that moment, Lee Gun crashes through the ceiling and lands in front of them, holding Choi in one hand and Hugo Otters in the other. He holds both of them effortlessly. Everyone is completely stunned and thrown off by his entrance. Lee Gun asks what these rats have been whispering about and whether they are hiding something. The room falls into shock as he says that since he's already here, he will settle the matter. He adds that he also came for his money. He heard they still have access to the account holding the funds from selling all his belongings. He recalls this on the way home, while everyone begins questioning if this is really Lee Gun. They wonder if this is truly him, and panic starts to spread. He tells them to shut up, saying he already tried to access the account using ISO's authority. However, it still didn't work, even though he clearly remembers appointing Hugo Otters as the account holder. Something about this proxy situation makes the issue immediately clear. They awkwardly explain that the Korean government has had difficulty placing trust in Lee Gun and Hugo Otters. Hugo Otters, Lee Gun immediately interrupts, asking what they just said. That was their explanation. They argue it's because Hugo Otters is a foreigner. After the protagonist's disappearance, they say they couldn't trust a foreign saint. Due to several incidents, the Sagittarius faction ultimately became weaker, so responsibility was reassigned to someone they considered more reliable than Hugo Otters, who stands there seething with anger. As he listens, Lee Gun tells Hugo Otters to stay calm. Hugo Otters, on the verge of tears, calls Lee Gun the worst. Lee Gun only shrugs and says that before he starts breaking things, they should return all his money. They suggest he should first return all his assets before causing further damage. The crowd wonders what will happen next. Then someone suddenly shouts for everyone to be quiet. Everyone instantly falls silent at that voice. A sandal suddenly flies into the room. Lee Gun remarks that she has finally appeared. She announces they've already taken control of the account, so he should get lost. Then she steps forward with complete confidence. It is the Gemini Saint. Rakin declares she will need all of his fortune to rebuild the palace he destroyed earlier. She accuses Lee Gun of sending Marmot fragments into her domain, claiming her palace has now been completely ruined. She demands if he even understands the scale of the destruction. She continues yelling angrily at Lee Gun. Lee Gun calmly asks who she even is. That only makes her even more furious. She snaps that he should shut up because she intends to eliminate him. And she forms a magic circle above her head. The system announces Gemini's magical energy is rapidly rising. People panic, realizing it is Gemini and urging everyone to flee. They warn of a powerful spirit approaching. Gemini's strongest technique is being activated, a spirit summoning from another world. A spirit is being called forth from another realm through a ritual. Transcendent spirit begins to manifest as Rakin below continues shouting at Lee Gun to end it quickly. He keeps yelling, urging Lee Gun to finish the fight. The spirit queen Lily Queen responds to the summon. Her form gradually assembles piece by piece. She fully emerges, transforming into a fairy-like figure as everyone watches in stunned awe. Rakin remains composed as he confidently states that this is Lily Queen, a spirit nearly equal to a savior-level god. Lily Queen is introduced as a spirit that approaches the level of a divine savior. She questions whether the protagonist truly believes he can take on such a being. Before she can continue, Lee Gun suddenly appears in front of her. He grabs her instantly and throws her away, telling her to get lost. She is flung out through the same opening he used to enter. She exits through the hole in the same way he came in. From above, everyone watches her being thrown out in disbelief. Crowd screams in shock at his sudden action toward the saint. Her summoned spirit begins to be pulled back involuntarily. Gemini's magical circle starts destabilizing as the power shifts. Lily Queen struggles desperately to return to her origin. She attempts to retreat back home. Just as she is about to disappear, Lee Gun grabs her by the head. She freezes in place as he demands to know where she thinks she is going. He drags her out from the center of the summoning circle. The system confirms he has successfully captured the spirit queen, Lily Queen. Lee Gun mocks her, asking if she really thinks she can escape so easily. Terrified, she repeatedly pleads with him for forgiveness. The scene cuts to Lee Gun leaving the ruined area. Seeing everything destroyed, he says he has recovered his money and decides it's time to go eat something decent. He notices the scattered documents and remarks that something feels wrong. He senses that something about the situation doesn't add up. He wonders why the real Lee didn't appear herself. Describes her as someone who would unleash chaos if angered. Jiyeon remarks that he has been thinking about it ever since the chaos at the Yin Yang Palace. Despite everything, she still hasn't shown herself, which can only mean one thing. Protagonist concludes that something is clearly preventing her from acting. As they continue talking, he becomes more certain of this conclusion. He dismisses the idea that the hot-headed one is deliberately controlling her emotions. Instead, he believes he knows her location and decides it's time to go there. The scene shifts to Chun Sung-jae's apartment in Chiwon. Hugo Otter's son is present as someone suggests they eat while working. They ask him if he would like a burger. Chun Sung-jae looks down slightly, appearing unsettled at the sight of the burger. He decides to choose something else and asks what Jimin would prefer instead. Jimin replies that he also wants something different. At that moment, Hugo Otters suddenly sneezes, prompting laughter from someone nearby. The group jokes and teases Lee Gun and Gemini in the background. They continue joking that she is just messing with Lee Gun. Someone adds that Aesat would faint if he learned about the situation. It is mentioned that Aesat is currently absent. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to him preparing elsewhere. He is seen dressed formally, while others explain he left to do a favor and will be slightly late. Lee Gun announces that it is time to begin the interrogation. The interrogation begins, revealing a small fairy being held. He is confined inside Ara's relic, a highly durable display case used for sealing artifacts. Lee Gun tells her she had better answer his questions honestly. He warns her to respond properly. She quickly agrees, realizing her situation. He explains that being trapped in a transparent box is still better than being sealed inside a book, so she should choose her answers carefully. He reveals an S-rank relic book that can imprison targets as written records, disguised to look like an ordinary cookbook. The frightened fairy continues nodding in agreement. Lee Gun finds it strange that the witch still hasn't shown herself. He concludes that she didn't choose not to come, but is unable to. Therefore, she must be trapped somewhere. Fairy quickly confirms his suspicion again. Lee Gun tells her she only has one chance left. He demands the truth about who she really is. He asks again whether she will speak honestly or force him to reveal it. She finally points toward a statue and identifies the woman in question. He asks if she will confess on her own or make him say it. In the end, she admits the woman is over there, pointing at a statue. He recognizes it as the broken angel statue and immediately senses something is wrong. He recalls that he had noticed something unusual about it from the beginning. He remembers hearing that it was marked in a strange way, likely tied to the witch's coordinates. He recalls Gemini mentioning that the saint personally blessed those marks. This connects with the activation of the 13th sense as he focuses on the statue. The system activates the 13th sense, allowing him to interact with the spirit realm, and the statue suddenly screams in anger. The spirit inside the statue erupts in fury, demanding why Lily Queen betrayed her to Lee Gun. She accuses Lily Queen of revealing everything to Lee Gun. The spirit of Gemini begins to drift out from the statue wearing a crown-like aura. It is revealed to be Lee Ji in spirit form, crying as she emerges. She laments that she has been caught in such a situation by Lee Gun of all people. She cannot believe things ended up like this. She reflects that if things had gone differently that day, none of this would have happened. She recalls that everything began when the Devil's Tower collapsed. Lee Ji remembers that catastrophic moment clearly. She recalls the Devil's Tower collapsing in an explosion of energy. A cup fell to the floor as she sensed something strange at that moment. She finally realizes that the strange energy she felt back then was Lee Gun. He is alive. That same day, Lee Gun arrived at the apartment together with Chun Sung-jae. Ji-woo was also present, already stunned that he had managed to survive. After coming back alive, he headed straight to the only place he chose without hesitation, Chun Sung-jae's apartment, the home belonging to his friend's son. The friend's son's residence. Still, this actually worked in her favor since it fell within her range. It was within her effective range. Curious about Jiyeon's actions, she decided to investigate personally. She used Gemini's teleportation ability, but since only her soul could move, she possessed a target, instead the angel statue, and Sung. At Sung-jae's apartment, that was how she ended up there. She became trapped there while possessing the object. The possession of the statue worked, but when he entered he glanced at it and called it disgusting. Disgusting. The instant he destroyed the statue, she was left trapped. If the possessed object is destroyed during soul possession, escape becomes impossible, and her possession ability becomes sealed, leaving her her unable to escape. Then Jiwoo arrived and said it was just a relic, so he could leave it for Li Ji. Even a weak binding method was acceptable as long as someone could restore what was broken. Then Piggy pulled out a small item, a small jar of glue. In the present, she says Sung Jae must face Lee Gun, but he refuses, unwilling to fight his uncle. She cannot understand it, as Lee Gun and their cult have always been enemies. As a Gemini Templar, Chun Sunja is supposed to stand against Lee Gun, so he decides to leave the cult. That answer shocks her. Chun Sunja says he might be part of Gemini, but Uncle Lee Gun is his hero. If being in the cult means becoming Lee Gun's enemy, he wants no part of it. He rips off his badge and throws it to the ground. Li Ji watches in shock as the insignia falls. The moment it hits the ground, the entire place begins shaking. Li Ji panics, believing it is divine punishment from a sacred god. Chun Sungjae's fate begins shifting toward Ophiuchus as the sacred goddess of Gemini unleashes her wrath, and her magic crashes down on Chun Sungjae. At once, a strange red substance pours over Chun Sungjae's body, and he has no idea what is happening. Everyone shouts his name, trying to understand what is happening. Then he loses consciousness and collapses. Li Ji begs Lee Gun to apologize immediately, saying the goddess may spare him as a candidate here if he submits. She warns that the protagonist is cruel and cannot be trusted. Chun Sunjae immediately rejects that claim. He fires back, saying they abandon people without hesitation whenever it benefits them, so hearing them call Lee Gun heartless makes Lee Gun angry. He remembers the supermarket incident when Lee Gun told them to teleport away and leave everyone else behind to suffer there. They may act like that, but he also remembers Lee Gun defeating a monster to save a child, and the time he rescued Chun Sungjae and Yoha from a monster. In his eyes, Lee Gun always saves people in danger. Real hypocrites are those who claim to save the world while only caring about themselves. He even remembers watching Lee Gun on TV as a child, thinking only he is his hero. So Lee Gun is not someone they can casually judge or look down on. Then Freyja, the sacred goddess of Gemini, finally appears as the true deity of Gemini. She reveals herself standing over Chun Sungjae's fallen body like a sister watching over him. The system warns that Chun Sungjae's declaration has pushed divine punishment to its peak. She gathers power and orders Lee Gun to disappear along with him. At that moment, Lee Gun calmly speaks. Skill. The goddess turns toward Lee Gun and, in shock, Memsi raises his hand and gathers Dark Power Abyssal Cut. He freezes as Jian delivers a cutting strike, severing every connection tied to the goddess, Chun Sunja. At the same time, chaos erupts in Indian Palace. People in the palace shout for rescuers to pull victims from the rubble and begin using magic. Others shout that the fire is spreading and ask anyone who knows water spells to help, but the moment they try, one man realizes he cannot gather any magic at all, magic whatsoever. Someone tells Bishop Ken that something is very wrong, as they cannot feel any magical power anymore. Ken orders them to contact nearby Templars and investigate what is happening. Everyone is stunned because no one can use magic. The scene then shifts to Gemini Templars battling calamities as they run in panic because Gemini's power has completely vanished. Back with Lee Gun, the result of his skill is clear. The sacred goddess of Gemini's magic has disappeared. He tells Chun Sungjae he should be safe now and admits he almost put Lee Gun in danger. He then thanks Lee Gun for trusting his uncle until the very end. Chun Sungjae simply stares for a moment, then smiles through tears, deeply moved. But from the background, someone suddenly shouts, "Ligu, you bastard, what did you do to me?" When they turn to look, Saint Rakin is panicking because she has lost the goddess and the goddess's magic. The scene flashes back to when Lee Gun used Abyssal Cut through the Gemini system. System active. The system explains that he is weakening. The bond between Rakin, the saint of Gemini, and Freyja, the sacred goddess of Gemini, is being described. Freyja is introduced as the sacred goddess of Gemini. Sacred gods can only descend into the human world by using limited portions of their power, as direct intervention is extremely risky. Because of that limitation, they normally transfer their authority to chosen successors. Saints act as the primary carriers of divine power, sharing it with their Templars in turn. In essence, the sacred god functions like a central power source. Saints operate as distribution nodes, while Templars are the connected extensions of that system. Everything remains linked through that divine network. If the main source is severed, all connected parts immediately shut down. They stop functioning as well. A sudden loss of power indicates only one thing: connection has been completely cut off. Lee Gun smirks and taunts her, asking how it feels to be powerless now, calling her the Purple Witch. He mocks her using the same kind of weakening trick the cursed crab often relies on. It involves severing connections through an Abyssal Cut. Abyssal Cut is an SS rank sovereign skill of cancer capable of slicing through anything the user desires. When combined with Lee Gun's abilities, it evolves into something even more dangerous. Rakin can only stare at him in complete shock. He mutters in disbelief at what he is seeing. He realizes Lee Gun can even sever the contract linking her to that corrupt goddess. This forbidden power can cut through memories, bonds, and loyalty itself, growing stronger the more it is mastered. Rakin is stunned, unable to accept what he is witnessing. She warns that he will now face the wrath of a true goddess. Lee Gun tells her to go to hell, along with her goddess. He adds that this makes it easier to drag that so-called goddess out as well. He fixes her with a cold, piercing stare. A purple bolt of energy begins forming beside them. Lightning spreads rapidly across the sky around them. The entire sky becomes filled with surging energy. People everywhere are confused as a massive purple tornado tears through the city. The system announces that the sacred goddess of Gemini is enraged after losing her links to the saint and her Templars. She accepts the consequences and chooses to intervene directly. Lee Gun and Hayu witness the situation unfolding in real time. The entire area trembles as the massive storm intensifies. Violet energy devastates Chun Sungjae's home, while Jin Yuri and the others brace themselves. Lee Gun calmly remarks that this is just a flashback-like moment. The goddess appears before Lee Gun with overwhelming pressure, but he remains calm and observant. Freja, the sacred goddess of Gemini, stands before him. The system warns that her power has become highly unstable. She gathers lightning in her hands. She releases a lightning strike toward Jian as the system reports an item being extracted from Lee Gun's inventory. Her attack continues to surge forward relentlessly. The strike closes in on Lee Gun, tearing through everything in its path. Despite the destruction, Lee Gun remains completely unscathed. The goddess is shocked as he emerges without a scratch. A fragment of Cancer's core activates and absorbs the sacred goddess's energy. That power originates from the item he previously took from the Saint of Cancer. Freja is horrified upon recognizing the fragment from a divine source. The sacred energy continues to be absorbed. Lee Gun comments that it is unfortunate he no longer possesses heaven's condemnation. He says that if he still had his sword, he could cut through even divine beings. He opens the crafting interface, combining materials like the Cancer core fragment, lightning, and the Gemini goddess's energy vortex. With no better option available, he proceeds with forging. Using the Cancer core, he merges multiple energy streams together. The system confirms he has inflicted heavy damage on the sacred goddess of Gemini. Freja screams in pain while Lee Gun stands, calmly holding the energy manifestation. The sacred goddess of Gemini suffers both pain and humiliation. Everyone watches in disbelief, unable to understand how he can confront a goddess. They are stunned that a goddess could actually be pushed back. The Abyss Storm Scythe shatters after a single use. Lee Gun remarks that this is the best result possible from a hastily forged weapon. He notes it was created on the spot. Freja writhes in agony, releasing uncontrolled lightning. The system warns that Freja, the sacred goddess of Gemini, has lost her rationality. Her mental state completely collapses under the pressure. Someone shouts that it was a direct hit, questioning who could have done this. At that moment, Hugo Otters arrives, radiating an impressive presence. His arrival shocks Chun Sungjae and Yuka, who immediately call out to him in panic. "Dad!" they shout as the god of Sagittarius appears behind Hugo Otters. He commands Freja to immediately halt this invasion. The order hits her like a shockwave. He further states that anything beyond this will violate the rules. He instructs Freja to withdraw immediately. Sacred gods are forbidden from using their true forms in this world. Golden chains begin manifesting in response. The system announces that other sacred gods, angered by the violation, are activating restraints. Freja is visibly shaken as multiple restraints target her. More system warnings appear as pressure builds against her. She is warned that further interference will cost her divinity, experience, and attributes, potentially leading to maximum hostility from other gods. Gods are forced to watch as Hugo Otters clicks his tongue in frustration. What a pity. Then additional chains of different colors begin to manifest. More colored restraints appear as well, sealing Freja's body, and Hugo Otters notes that even the other sacred gods seem to disapprove of this. He asks whether she truly intends to push her lucky any further, even further than this. Suddenly, Freja unleashes a piercing, ear-splitting scream. Screams echo violently. Meanwhile, the Sagittarius Saints remain standing still as the entire place begins collapsing, while Chun Sungjae and the others cover their ears in pain. Grinding her teeth, the sacred goddess of Gemini swears she will never forget this moment. Furious, she points directly at Hugo Otters and Lee Gun, and the protagonist can clearly tell how enraged she is. Completely furious. Then he casually shows a rude gesture, which only pushes her rage even higher. Her anger intensifies further, but her body begins breaking down into pure energy as the situation escalates. The system announces that he has utterly crushed the pride of the Gemini goddess, earning reputation among countless watching beings across the world. He also gains a massive amount of experience from the God Throne and rises to beginner God Throne level 9. Once his God Throne Gun reaches level 10, he will undergo a special trial. A special test awaits him afterward. Then the Sagittarius god begins fading away. Hugo Otters gives Lee Gun a thumbs up while everything continues. His presence has fully stabilized, and a special mission activates. Awaken the core of Ophiuchus. When everything finally ends, everyone collapses onto the ground, completely exhausted. Lee Gun walks over to Hugo Otters and laughs, saying he arrived just in time. Still, Lee Gun admits he is furious about what Freya did to Chun Sunja. He says he cannot believe stabbing her with an arrow wasn't enough punishment. He tells her to wait, because he still plans to deal with that cursed saint personally. Hearing this, Hugo Otters lets out a relieved smile, and thanks Lee Gun. Then he mentions he obtained the item Lee Gun requested from the Union, Yang Palace. He becomes alert, and Hugo Otters shows him a scroll as the system. Explains that it is a soul record, a document listing contracts tied to Gemini's avatars. In the background, Hugo Otters asks how he managed to get it. Hugo Otters replies that invisibility and stealth are basic skills for an archer. He also mentions the emblem Jesus that Lee Gun gave him, then mutters to himself while the protagonist quietly observes and supports the process. The system announces that he has opened the soul record, reviewing the list of avatars. Berserker One-Eyed Mad Warrior, Legendary Class. Giant Jotun, King of Giants, Legendary Class. Warrior King Jarl, the Light of the Whitest God, also a Legendary Class entity. Gemini's avatars fully surrender to Ophiuchus. He can either accept these surrendered avatars as his own or keep them imprisoned. That idea amuses him. The system adds that the commander avatar imprisoned beneath the Yin-Yang Palace has also surrendered. Lee Gun assumes that must be the mythical class commander avatar. Still, he questions why he should trust their surrender and demands proof that they are sincere. Before that, a purple vortex suddenly forms above Lee Gun. From it, a body resembling Li Ji begins to emerge. He is startled, but realizes it is not her real body, as Li Ji remains elsewhere, existing in spirit form. As the body continues falling, everyone watches in confusion. Li Ji, she is confused as well, realizing she is still a ghost. The system states that Gemini's avatars have offered Lee Gun Li Ji's original body. He is shocked by how absurd this offer is. Even so, he accepts. The system confirms the surrender of Gemini's avatars. Those avatars are now transferred under Ophiuchus' control. He can now assign names to his avatars. This point, everything already feels like complete disaster. Lee Gun sighs, saying he is too lazy for this and will just name them simply by rank like Bro 1, Bro 2, and Bro 3. The system confirms the avatars have been officially named, leaving even them stunned. They cannot believe it. Then Lee Gun grabs her by the neck and tells her that her sacred goddess abandoned her and ran away, so she should answer properly. He demands whether she was the one who attacked Lee Gun at the Devil's Tower. She insists she has no idea what he is talking about. The protagonist increases pressure on her mind. She screams in pain as pressure is applied to her forehead. He explains that it is a fragment of the Abyss Tempest scythe he once used. He says it is powerful enough to burn even a soul itself, so she should stop pretending and confess, but she still insists she truly knows nothing. He asks if she intends to act tough even while being restrained in spirit form. The others watch as that terrifying power spreads. Even the Spirit Queen hides in fear of it. Hugo Otters shields himself, wondering if she might actually be telling the truth. Then she suddenly blurts out that it was probably likely Virgo. After that, she begs Lee Gun to release her. The moment he hears Virgo, Lee Gun's expression turns dark instantly. A fragment of the Abyss scythe shatters, and he releases her in anger, saying it would have been painless if she had just answered honestly from the start. From the beginning, Lee Gun states that since she provided useful information, he will return her body to her. He restores her body, leaving her shocked that she is still alive before she asks what is going on. Suddenly, everything takes a turn for the worse. Spirit Queen takes control of her body. She thanks him through the body she now inhabits, even if this wasn't the way she expected to be freed. Although her release wasn't ideal, she still expresses gratitude. Lee Gun awkwardly laughs, admitting he may have made a mistake. He accidentally handed her body over to the Rara Queen, who immediately clings to him. Yulva becomes jealous instantly, and the others rush in to hold her back. Afterward, the scene shifts back to the main base. Yang, now in a teddy bear form, says it's pointless to try fixing the situation, while someone questions what he means since nothing seems repairable. Yang explains he already sees numerous corrupted clauses and broken magical contracts everywhere. At a glance, the system identifies it as a top-tier CEO contract created by Virgo, a contract specialist, all of which Lee Gun has taken control of. Yang reports they are already organizing the mess and asks Lee Gun for additional soul records, planning to upgrade everything to SS rank. While staring blankly at him afterward, Remy Keen steps in as the antagonist, while Lee Gun smiles and tells her to proceed, which pleases her. That reaction leaves her delighted. but then something else draws her attention. Li Gun notices Li Ji trapped within a statue crying, surrounded by multiple statues of himself. In her spirit form, she desperately begs Li Gun to release her. A new skill appears, Snake Contract. He is told he can let one thing go but not three. The protagonist stares at the notification, puzzled about the nature of this newly acquired skill. He wonders what exactly he has just obtained. Suddenly, others declare that they are now avatars of Lord Li Gun. System notes that Li Gun's new avatars are showering him with praise. They express that serving him is the highest honor imaginable. Soon, all of them begin excessively praising and flattering Li Gun. Newly acquired avatars from the previous chapter finally appear before him. They look at Li Gun in awe and admiration. Hugo Otters remarks that he has never seen avatars behave like this, since they are usually proud. This comment irritates them, and they immediately snap back at him. They scold Hugo Otters for interrupting while they serve Lord Li Gun. Hugo Otters stands there awkwardly, like a servant caught in an uncomfortable position. Li Gun makes things worse by correcting them, saying Hugo Otters is not a servant. He clarifies that Hugo Otters is actually a slave, which only enrages them further. Li Gun interrupts again and asks why they abandoned Gemini in the first place. They explain they could no longer endure the abuse from the sacred goddess of Gemini. Li Gun does not seem fully convinced by their explanation. Eventually, they admit they witnessed the Lord overpowering her. They recall the moment when he defeated the goddess, which they cheered for in excitement. They confirm he successfully brought her down, which impressed them deeply. He says he is satisfied that they are finally being honest. They continue explaining their situation more openly. It's not just them. Even the commander and other avatars want to survive by surrendering to Li Gun. However, the commander is trapped beneath the sacred domain sea and cannot come here. They add that humanity has already lost over half its land to the mysterious civilization of calamities. At first glance, saints and calamities might appear evenly matched or simply opposing forces, but the reality is far more severe than it seems. They explain they have no real chance of reclaiming the lost territory. Li Gun reflects on this and concludes that if it is near the Yin-Yang Palace Sea, then it must be within that ocean region. He determines it lies beyond the surrounding waters, close to the mysterious civilization's domain. That means it is near the territory controlled by the unknown civilization. He decides it is time to visit and assess the situation personally. The avatars bow, pledging full loyalty and submission to Li Gun. They swear their lives and allegiance to him. Li Gun accepts their loyalty and looks forward to what comes next. He acknowledges their commitment and says he expects results. Yuka comments that this is just like Uncle Li Gun. She adds that even high-ranking avatars fear him, calling it both impressive and terrifying. She casually mentions she is glad she asked for his hand. The moment she says this, both Li Gun and Hugo Otters freeze in place. Hugo Otters turns toward Li Gun with a dark expression. He asks what that statement was supposed to mean. The protagonist can only respond awkwardly, confused by the situation. He asks what she means by that. A brief reminder appears. It encourages viewers to like and comment if they are enjoying the content. It asks viewers to subscribe and turn on notifications to support the channel. Then the story continues, returning to the main plot. The recap notes that the previous video ended at this exact moment. The protagonist was speaking with his three newly acquired subordinates. Meanwhile, Chun Sung-jae and Yudo were watching him from the background. Suddenly, she declares that she is very glad she asked to marry Li Gun. Upon hearing this, Hugo Otters immediately steps in with a dark and serious expression. Li Gun is left completely stunned by the statement. Hugo Otters demands an explanation from Li Gun about what she just said regarding marriage. He questions what this situation with marriage is supposed to mean. Yang comments from behind, joking that this would make Hugo Otters Li Gun's father-in-law, calling it a chaotic situation. Hugo Otters immediately becomes furious at the remark. He fires a flaming arrow toward Li Gun, destroying the teddy bear's head. The teddy bear figure panics and runs away while crying. It tells him to put the bow down first. He tells them they should talk, but Hugo Otters only responds bitterly that he has never heard his own daughter say she loves him, not even on Father's Day. So how could she say that to you? Jiwoo is also there, completely shocked that he managed to survive. After coming back alive, he immediately heads straight to another place. Chun Sung-jae's apartment, the home of his friend's son. The friend's son's home, which actually works in her favor since it is within her range. Curious about Jian's actions, she decides to investigate on her own. She uses Gemini's teleportation ability, but since only her soul can move, she possesses a target instead the angel statue in Sung-jae's apartment. That is how she ends up inside the apartment. She becomes trapped there while possessing the object. The statue possession works, but when he walks in and sees it, he calls it disgusting. Disgusting. The moment he destroys the statue, she becomes completely trapped. Because destroying the possessed object during soul possession makes escape impossible, her possession ability is then sealed, leaving her stuck. Yu arrives and says it is just a relic, suggesting they can leave it to Li Jia and repair it later with a binding method. Piggy then takes out a small jar of glue. In the present, she says Sung Jae must face Li Gun, but he refuses to fight his uncle. She cannot understand it, since Li Gun and their cult have always been enemies. As a Gemini Templar, Chun Sun-jae is supposed to oppose Li Gun, but instead he chooses to leave the cult. Reaction is complete shock. He explains that although he belongs to Gemini, Li Gun is his hero, so if the cult makes him an enemy, he wants no part of it. He throws his badge away. The insignia hits the ground, and Li Ji watches in shock. The moment it lands, the entire place begins to shake. Li Ji panics, thinking it is divine punishment from a sacred god. Chun Sung-jae's fate begins shifting toward Ophiuchus as the sacred Gemini goddess unleashes her wrath. Her power comes crashing down directly on Chun Sun-jae. A red liquid suddenly pours over his body, leaving him confused and disoriented. Everyone shouts his name, trying to understand what is happening. He then loses consciousness and collapses. Li Ji begs Li Gun to apologize immediately, saying the goddess may spare him if he submits as a candidate here. She warns that the protagonist is cruel and cannot be trusted. Chun Sun-jae immediately rejects her claim. He fires back, saying they abandon people without hesitation whenever it benefits them. Hearing them call Li Gun heartless makes him angry. He recalls the supermarket incident when Li Gun told them to teleport away and leave everyone else behind. Back then, they were left to suffer on their own, but he also remembers Li Gun saving a child by defeating a monster, and the time he rescued Chun Sun-jae and Yo-ha from danger. In his eyes, Li Gun always saves people who are in danger. The real hypocrites are those who claim to save the world while only caring about themselves. He once watched Li Gun on TV as a child. From that moment, he finally calms down and lowers his bow. Li Gun steps forward and calls him an idiot, then hits him on the head, hard enough to snap him out of it, telling him not to get so angry over children acting like children. He asks if he looks like someone who would target his friend's daughter. He says Sung-jae wrecked his own house over a misunderstanding. He calls it foolish, adding that they are just bad at expressing gratitude and actually appreciate him more than he knows. They even prepared gifts for him. They return saying he is awake, bringing strawberry cake and his favorite coffee. Hugo Otters becomes emotional the moment he sees the cake and coffee. He rushes toward Chun Sung-jae to grab the cake, but Sung-jae dodges him. Hugo Otters chases after him, accidentally running straight past Li Gun. Meanwhile, Li Gun is already eating the cake. Hugo Otters desperately tries to snatch it back, but Li Gun keeps slipping away with it. In the chaos, the house ends up getting half destroyed. Later on, Yang is being stitched up again after her injuries. Yuka quietly watches everything unfold. Then something catches her attention. She looks at her phone in shock. The alert announces a red class calamity called Thousand Legs, ordering all Templar forces to mobilize immediately. The scene shifts to near Manila, the capital of the Philippines. Lightning flashes across the sky as soldiers on standby prepare for deployment. They were told this is a red-level calamity, and the atmosphere is terrifying. Some wonder if they will be safe facing something like this. Despite the crowd, they believe their numbers give them a chance to win. They try to stay calm, saying danger is just another opportunity. Even without their saint, they claim they will defeat the red-class calamity themselves. At that moment, something drops from the sky. It is the Saint of Leo, arriving dramatically as part of their plan. They declare that humanity is taking another step forward and urge the world to witness it. The crowd cheers loudly while Yo-ha covers her ears, feeling overwhelmed and thinking she just wants to go home and see Li Gun. She feels uneasy and only wishes to return to him. Something about the situation feels very wrong to her. Scene cuts to masked soldiers in a tent where an old man complains. He says the soldiers are like barbarians, acting violently without reason. He believes they are simply hiding fear behind brute force. Still, he does not care much, but wonders if his gift has arrived. The view returns to Hugo Otters' ruined house. Someone arrives and greets him as his secretary. Secretary Siu Urine says it has been a long time. Saint, how have you been? Why is your entire house in ruins like this? What on earth happened? My god, even the ceiling is gone. Hugo Otters sits in the corner looking miserable and says don't ask, it was necessary. You're even looking at my arms. It was unavoidable. You're the one watching my arms. Radio too? Yeah, Hugo Otters was sent over there as well, by the way. By the way, what's in that box? It was left at your door, so I brought it inside. It's not a delivery. Then a voice suddenly screams from inside the box. Where is that little punk? The scene then shifts to G. At the forge, another material snaps and breaks, and the system announces the crafting tool is too low ranked. The system reports the production tool rank is too low and has been damaged. Not again. How many times is this going to happen? Why is this happening now of all times? You need higher rank equipment for that item. The dagger Li Gun just destroyed is beyond this tool. That was a dagger. Damn it, this crafting hammer has hit its limit. I even lost the hammer that guarantees achievements. I don't even know where it ended up over the past 20 years. It's difficult to craft anything above mid-tier after 20 years. With slime, I need to stock up. I should gather decent weapons beforehand. Before facing Virgo, someone hired by another zodiac sneaks into the sanctuary where Li Gun and Sagittarius are staying. Wait, is that Hugo Otters? Hugo Otters, it's been a long time. From the Seven Village. Voice echoes through a goat head speaker. Goat head speaker? What is this weird hobby? This feels like something Yang would do. Yang looks confused, wondering why he's being dragged into this. Then Lee Gun walks up holding a small hammer and says he heard someone sneaked in. But it's just this old goat. It's been a long time, Lee Gun. I'm relieved you're safe. The woman nearby looks confused. Lee Gun? I am Seven Village Vladimir Ivan of Capricorn. Remember me? Oh, Vladimir Ivan, I said Seven Village. Explanation follows. Seven Village Vladimir Ivan is the saint of Capricorn. Like Lee Gun, he specializes in crafting, and after Lee Gun vanished, almost every legendary weapon passed through his hands. He is the mustached old man from the previous chapter. We are shown the many weapons and armors he has created recently. The last one was that goat head speaker. Anyway, I'm glad you are doing well. The reason I came to find you is this. You like this, but Lee Gun grabs the goat head and says it's because you want to apologize for what happened before. He tosses the goat head upward and smashes it to pieces. Lee Gun says, can we really just ignore what he said? Lee Gun shrugs it off. He always talks nonsense anyway. What kind of idiot says he came here just to cooperate with ingredients? I mean, cooperate, right? We should just go watch the raid coverage. His personality really hasn't changed. Annoying saint, it's time for you to show up, huh? Well then, maybe I should take a look at this Thousand Legs raid. He is introduced as the Saint of Sagittarius, Sergeyevich Vladimir Ivan Amir En. Powerful agents have also gathered, including additional forces. The House of Leo is present with Ilhan. Prava still holds her spear alongside Vice Saint Yoha and Captain Oliver. Oliver asks whether the beasts of Leo are in charge of this battlefield, along with transformation experts and naval tacticians from Pisces. The naval war tacticians of Pisces are also here. Taurus, the iron wall defending the front lines, is also present. They are in position. Aquarius, the saint who can repel bombs with holy power, is also here. On top of that, Capricorn, the one who crafts and enhances weapons needed for battle, has arrived. Troops from all nations are deployed for this war plan. All units from across the world have joined the battle strategy. And now the Saint of Capricorn has appeared. What is that old man doing? It looks like the Saint of Capricorn is about to act. He raises his hand toward the sky. Then Lee Gun's hammer appears. That old thief, the divine artifact of Capricorn. He summoned the hammer that guarantees achievements. Hey, wasn't that your item? Capricorn, the saint specialized in crafting. They use that hammer to strengthen divine artifacts before battle begins. He begins hammering with Jian's tool, and everyone starts cheering. The Saint of Capricorn's reinforcement ability is known worldwide. Everyone around the world recognizes it. Shut up. The small figure beside Lee Gun covers his ears. That dirty old goat, I was already furious. He stole my item, and now he's showing off with it. Ridiculous. I need to beat that old man before dealing with Virgo. I'm going right now. I'm gonna crush that old bastard. Lee Gun starts running just as the woman says it has appeared the calamity. The calamity has shown itself. Something massive rises from the sea as a giant monster erupts from the ocean. A huge maw appears, and everyone freezes in place. Then it lets out a roar. Toward the sky. The Thousand Arms Calamity Red appears. Danger level declared. All units prepare for combat. Wait, what is that? Something is hanging from one of its tentacles, and they look closer. It's Stephen Marker clinging tightly to the monster. The monster's tentacle thrashes around as someone reacts in shock, realizing what it is. That's Stephen Marker, still stubbornly gripping the bone he fought for last episode, refusing to let it go. Monster is stunned that he is actually battling a calamity over a single bone. It seems absurd, especially since he paid $1 billion for it. Even now, he still won't release it. He is completely fixated on that bone. Castellan is urged to retreat and calm down immediately. They demand to know what he is doing right now. Bishop Oliver, the Lion Saint, and the Thousand Arms arrive together, leaving others wondering why they are just standing there. Complains that the old man is trying to steal command and take credit for everything, even though he was about to give the order himself. The lion fighters drink physical enhancement potions and prepare themselves for battle. They quickly down the potions from their vials without hesitation. Pixicide activates support abilities simultaneously. They begin casting underwater breathing skills. Wave resonance and ocean-based techniques are activated. Aquarius applies combat buffs for survival and mobility. Additional buffs enhance health regeneration, movement, and defense. Taurus forms a defensive rear line to block the calamities from reaching the shore. They work to prevent the enemy from reaching the coastline. The lion fighter leader leaps forward and shouts for everyone to prepare for battle. The lion beasts surge forward, charging straight at the enemy. Lightning crackles as they rush ahead at full speed, beginning their transformation. A system message announces beastification has been activated. The users gain the power of raging beasts. Lion fighters transform into tigers and panthers, rushing into combat. The beastified lion assault squad advances aggressively. Aquarius continues casting continuous blessings, She stacks even more buffs on the frontline fighters. Yoha takes command at the front lines. The sect leader gives the command to advance. Massive energy lion formation surges forward. It charges directly into the calamity and slams into it. At the same time, the transformed lion fighters rush in as well. They swarm the creature, attacking from all directions. Meanwhile, Stephen Marker still hangs on tightly to the bone, shouting in frustration. He yells for everyone to be quiet until he gets his bone back. Castellan is ordered to stop acting foolish and stay still. The two continue arguing amid the chaos unfolding around them. Someone shouts in disbelief, asking why they are still arguing over a bone. Another yells at them to shut up and focus. A voice warns that their forces will die at this rate. They are shocked to see Vice Captain Yoha still present. He says she is still here and that changing plans to save that foolish lion may not have been wise. Despite everything, she realizes she has no other option now. Red lightning begins crackling around her body as she prepares to act. Nearby women shout for her to wait and offer buffs. She refuses coldly and launches forward at full speed using acceleration. She rushes directly towards Stephen Marker and the bone. Before he can react at all, Yoha strikes through the monster's tentacle. In a single move, she frees both Stephen Marker and the bone. The rescue succeeds as Stephen Marker falls into the water. He coughs and splashes around, still holding the bone. Water splashes everywhere as he struggles to recover. Yoha steps onto his face, dunking him underwater. Lee Gun is pushed back beneath the surface as everyone watches. The crowd stares in complete disbelief. They are stunned that she crossed such distance in one leap and severed the calamity's tentacle. They praise her incredible strength as she continues standing firm on Taurus. Meanwhile, Stephen Marker complains for her to get off him. He continues shouting for her to get off, firing up everyone around them. The group regains momentum and prepares to finish the calamity. They unleash everything they have, combining physical strikes, magic, and purple energy attacks. All forces attack together in a coordinated assault. The calamity suddenly goes still before raising a massive wave of water. A gigantic tsunami forms and rises over them. They are ordered to take cover immediately. The Taurus Templars activate an impenetrable defensive wall formation. Someone shouts in shock, thinking a volcano has erupted. The monster charges straight at the soldiers, spreading panic through the ranks. Fear spreads rapidly among the troops. The old man mutters that if something like this appears, there is no other option left. Before he can finish, a voice suddenly comes from behind Lee Gun. Lee Gun speaks up from the rear. He mentions a detonator in their hand and reveals explosives placed along the coast. The man turns in shock, startled by the sudden voice behind him. At that moment, Lee Gun strikes his hand. Simultaneously, the slime creature lunges forward with its giant mouth. In an instant, it swallows the old man whole. Someone reacts in disbelief, calling out Vladimir Ivan in shock. He sighs, saying they are becoming a serious problem, noting the people in the water are only stalling for time. That monster. But isn't it going too far to destroy it along with the calamity? Don't move. For the first time in 20 years, I'm going to show you the proper way. I'll teach you the correct way to cut octopus. Sashimi. Then the scene suddenly switches to someone sprinting forward. It's Jin Yuri running across the water, recalling the disastrous aftermath of the Thousand Arms raid. She remembers forcing her way through that raid at extreme speed, cutting through everything in her path. She couldn't avoid anything, taking it down in a single decisive strike. Jin Yuri keeps rushing forward, slipping past every tentacle in her way. As she moves, memories flood back just like Lee Gun during his last raid. 20 years ago, she charged ahead relentlessly, slicing through the monster's tentacles. In her mind, she can clearly see his image. She can picture it vividly. He looks terrifyingly strong. If she fought Hugo Otters would definitely lose to her. He pauses for a brief moment and thinks carefully. Once I get close to its body, I just need to stab its eyes with anything I have. She tightens her grip on her spear and aims a direct thrust toward the creature's eye. Red lightning surges through the spear as she prepares a full power attack. She unleashes Lotus Flash at full force, but something feels wrong as she attacks. When she looks again, the monster has already blocked her spear with a single tentacle. What? It blocked it so easily. The creature glares at her while holding the spear in place, and it suddenly lashes out with another tentacle, straight toward Yoha. At that moment, Stephen Marker rushes in and pulls her away. He drags her out of the attack's path as everyone watches in shock. Around them, soldiers are being torn apart and screaming for help as chaos unfolds everywhere. She wonders what Lee Gun would do here. He would charge in with his longsword. Then suddenly, someone rushes past her wielding a sword. It's the protagonist, charging straight toward the monster. The monster roars at Lee Gun, but he calmly draws his sword. He unleashes a relentless storm of slashes across the giant creature. The massive octopus is carved apart as his skill erupts. Great mountain eruption. A massive hole tears straight through the creature's body. Did I go a bit too far? He mutters casually. The onlookers are left stunned, while someone from behind shouts in disbelief. How did he get here? Lee Gun replies, why are you all so surprised? I just came to demonstrate. You were struggling too much against a weak monster like this. Shut up! You only showed up at the end for the finishing blow. We could have handled it ourselves. But before they can continue arguing, the octopus suddenly grabs Lee Gun. The monster monster's tentacle wraps around him, and everyone freezes in shock. It swings its massive mouth toward him, trying to swallow him whole. Even Lee Gun briefly takes notice of the situation. Hugo Otters screams in panic, warning Lee Gun as chaos unfolds. Everyone looks around desperately, unsure what to do next. They wonder if anyone can actually defeat this monster now. Beneath it, smaller octopus-like creatures also begin to appear. They start shrieking wildly, their expressions distorted in chaos. At that exact moment, Lee Gun calls upon his power. He channels his energy through his weapon. His spear shoots back into his hand, tearing up the ground as it returns. He grips it tightly, and the monster immediately feels the pressure building. The creature recoils, sensing the overwhelming force coming from Lee Gun. Energy erupts wildly around him as he spins the spear above his head. Skill activated, he says. Blade baptism. He launches another devastating attack. The strike tears through the monster in one sweeping motion. Everyone can only stare in stunned silence, unable to react. Lee Gun stands calmly amid the destruction. Good thing about huge enemies is that they're easier to cut down. Whether it's 1,000 legs or 1,000 arms, it's still just an octopus. In the end, it's nothing more than an octopus. A massive gap is carved through the monster's body. He casually says he's already split it apart, and the rest is up to them. Unbelievable. An event people will talk about for years just happened. The returned hero has defeated the 1,000 Arms creature. The name gets slightly mispronounced, but no one cares at this point. Whatever the name is, it doesn't matter anymore. The crowd erupts into cheers, overwhelmed by what they've witnessed. His achievements inspire awe, and stories of him will be remembered and worshipped for a long time. A book suddenly forms, filled with glowing text as the system activates. The system announces the creation of the Ophiuchus Bible. It records his deeds and says they will be passed down through generations. Even the Constellation Masters are caught off guard by the sacred book of power. Interesting, some says from afar. Over here, Yo-ha! Someone calls out, and Yo-ha responds weakly, waving. She thinks Hugo Otters would definitely ruin the mood if he were here. Someone suddenly steps in front of her, asking if she is okay. She says she's fine, but then notices something on the newcomer's back. The protagonist sighs and asks why that thing is on your back. Did you really carry it all this way? Hugo Otters immediately gets nervous and asks what she is talking about, insisting there is nothing like that. Lee Gun then asks if she actually likes it. She quickly denies liking bones, saying that's just a Leo thing. She explains she only kept it because it is valuable to her as a collectible. Then Lee Gun reveals the broken remains of her spear, the weapon he previously used to finish the fight. He admits he broke it and promises to craft a new weapon for her. He says he will replace it soon with something better. Hugo Otters immediately lights up, excited at the idea of a weapon made by Uncle Hugo Otters himself. She eagerly agrees, saying she would love that. At that moment, Stephen Marker suddenly appears and grabs her, announcing his arrival. The sudden interruption leaves everyone frozen, and Yo-ha turns toward Lee Gun in annoyance. Stephen Marker insists he has every right to be happy about it. As a Leo Cardinal, Jin Yuri is under his command. Now that Lee Gun is offering to craft a weapon for her, it naturally concerns him as well. Stephen Marker also wants one for himself. He immediately looks annoyed after saying it out loud. He keeps pushing the matter, irritating everyone further. Things escalate until Lee Gun seems ready to snap. Before it explodes into conflict, a massive surge of energy suddenly erupts. Behind Lee Gun appears a giant goat-like presence. Stephen Marker panics and jokes about Lee Gun causing explosions with his voice, but Lee Gun snaps back that it wasn't him. He insists the blast had nothing to do with him. A dense yellow mist spreads rapidly across the battlefield. Panic erupts everywhere as people start screaming for help. Some begin crying out as confusion turns to terror. They suddenly transform into mutated beasts with glowing green eyes. Someone shouts in shock, asking what has happened to them. One of the beasts suddenly lunges forward and bites a soldier. No one understands why this is happening at all. The Leo forces have completely lost control. Leo squad begins attacking Taurus forces, throwing everything into chaos. The old goat calmly responds as if it is obvious. He says it was the radiant flash marmot bomb he planted. He complains that the explosion was weaker than expected. When they turn, they see the old goat in broken robotic armor smirking. He claims the explosion was only a greeting before the real event begins. He says this while casually holding Lime in one hand. He continues holding it without concern. Someone immediately demands to know what he did to Lime. Stephen Marker, confused, asks what marmot means and whether that bomb was planted in his battlefield. The old man tells Lee Gun to stop immediately. He says he isn't surprised that every Leo affected by the blast has gone berserk. He laughs and accuses the old goat of being behind everything. Then he laughs again, saying this is exactly what he expected from Lee Gun. He decides to show them something even more interesting. The old man blows a whistle, sending a massive wave of sound through the area. At the signal, transfer units begin moving in immediately. Leo soldiers react at once and rush forward. They charge straight toward Lee Gun and the old goat. They grab Yoha and the protagonist, forcing them down. The old man mocks Lee Gun, asking how he managed to handle so many calamities at once. He adds that Lee Gun must now be out of strength to resist. He declares it checkmate as the monsters pin Lee Gun down. Lee Gun and Yoha are restrained while Stephen Marker glares at the old man. The goat smugly enjoys seeing Lee Gun pinned down, saying it feels even better than expected. Stephen Marker curses Lee Gun and demands to know what the old man has done to his subordinates. The old man explains that Stephen Marker and the protagonist were unaffected because they never drank his potion. The drink given earlier in the fight was actually a controlled drug. It was designed to manipulate soldiers. He reveals that Stephen Marker's men are reacting exactly as intended. In their current state, they will only obey commands transmitted through his flute. The controlled soldiers will obey only flute signals from him. Stephen Marker roars at Lee Gun, demanding he turn his men back to normal. Goat tells Lee Gun to calm down. If he wants his troops restored, he must accept the offer first. He throws Lee Gun's sword toward Stephen Marker. Stephen Marker catches it and stares in shock, recognizing it as Lee Gun's sword. The old man confirms it and says he forged it himself, then offers Stephen Marker a deal he claims cannot be refused. Take the sword and kill Lee Gun. Stephen Marker asks why he suddenly wants Lee Gun dead and why he should obey. The goat insists he has no alternative choice. He reminds Stephen Marker that he needs his subordinates restored. Stephen Marker already feels the gap between his own strength and Lee Gun's. The old man also points out the difference between his forging ability and Lee Gun's. The more they struggle, the more they realize how impossible those barriers are. They are walls they simply cannot overcome. Calls this Stephen Marker's once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He promises to support him and forge the strongest weapon possible. A weapon made exclusively for Stephen Marker. If they join forces, they can bring everything down together, and Stephen Marker could become the strongest among them in no time. 12 Cardinals issue an order telling Stephen Marker to pick up the sword and eliminate Lee Gun. Stephen Marker pulls the blade from the ground as UB shouts for Lee Gun to stop him immediately. UB warns that it is obvious the old man cannot be trusted at all. She reminds Lee Gun that the old man is completely unreliable. Stephen Marker keeps his gaze fixed firmly on Lee Gun. UP warns that if he even touches Lee Gun, she will never forgive him. Stephen Marker simply walks forward without hesitation. He approaches Lee Gun, while the old man urges him to finish the job. Stephen Marker turns back and declares he doesn't need dirty tricks like theirs to win. He says he is not trying to replace Lee Gun using cheap schemes. He dismisses them and gestures rudely, leaving the old man speechless. The old man continues shouting, but Stephen Marker says he has already surpassed past Lee Gun. He claims all he needs now is a weapon equal to the protagonist. He tells the old man not to compare Lee Gun to worthless trash. He mocks the idea of someone inferior trying to forge a weapon for Lee Gun. Stephen Marker continues verbally dismantling the old man's argument. The old man hesitates briefly, unsure how to respond. Stephen Marker suddenly charges, breaking through armor and stunning the old man. The old man yells for Lee Gun not to underestimate him. He activates his armor and unleashes a barrage of missiles. Missiles are fired at Stephen Marker, triggering a massive explosion. He boasts that even mighty Leo is nothing before his masterpiece. Stephen Marker transforms into a lion and charges forward again. He admits that 20 years ago he had a deep inferiority complex, just as the old man said, but he has long since overcome that weakness. He has trained himself repeatedly for only one purpose, to impress Lee Gun. He unleashes the skill known as Thunderclaws. He tears into the old man at incredible speed. The armor begins to break apart under the pressure. Stephen Marker continues advancing, stating Capricorn truly made durable armor. He rips off the chest plate and discards it. He says he fought calamities without proper gear, so the old man should stop hiding behind armor. The old man is shaken by his words. Suddenly, Lee Gun's son interrupts the confrontation. He asks when they are going to finish fighting. Stephen Marker looks over in shock and asks how Lee Gun is there. The protagonist casually explains he let himself be captured to hear them out, but got bored and stood up. He adds that the beastmen were too weak to restrain him anyway. The old man is left completely confused by the situation. Both sides stare in disbelief, unable to comprehend what just happened. Lee Gun dismisses the situation, kicks Stephen Marker aside, and tells the old man to get lost. The scene shifts back to moments earlier in the fight. The beastmen were still restraining Lee Gun, while Stephen Marker argued with the old man. He was already growing bored during the prolonged argument. As it dragged on, he eventually snapped. He declares that it is all extremely annoying. He simply stands up, confusing the beast holding him. The beast cannot understand what is happening. Lee Gun calmly states that the fight is already over. At that moment, he appears right beside them. The narration explains that 20 years earlier, just before the Devil Tower incident, someone declared with a sinister smile that the protagonist would die. It is connected to the Devil Tower incident involving Lee Gun. Lee Gun immediately recognizes it as the prophecy Hugo Otters once received from his saint. However, he is told it was only a prediction, and the real plan was different. The old man continues speaking with a dark smile. Lee Gun interrupts, saying he doesn't care about the flashback and only wants to know who tried to kill him. The old man hesitates while trying to respond. He insists he will talk, but only if he is guaranteed safety. He tries to negotiate for protection. Lee Gun grabs him and warns he has no right to negotiate in this situation. Tells him he is in no position to bargain. He threatens him not to waste any more time. Lee Gun coldly says he will tear his tongue out if he keeps stalling. Terrified, the old man quickly blurts out the answer, Virgo. He confirms it was Virgo again. The witch had already hinted earlier that Virgo was involved when he captured the Saint of Genius. Everything points to Virgo being the mastermind. The protagonist decides he must meet Jin Ming again and review the dagger analysis from the previous attack on Lee Gun. For now, he lets the matter slide but decides it is time to reclaim his equipment. He states that the hammer guaranteeing achievements belongs to Lee Gun. The old man is shocked and asks if he intends to take even that. He quickly gives in and returns the relic hammer of Capricorn. The weapon responsible for guaranteeing achievements is handed back. Lee Gun appears satisfied with the outcome. The Saint of Capricorn trembles in rage and regret over losing the hammer. Lee Gun mocks the miserable expression on his face and calls for his 3 brothers. They respond immediately to his summons. He orders them to take the man back to their dimension, allowing them to break his limbs if necessary as long as he survives. The old man is horrified upon realizing Lee Gun commands avatars. He understands that Lee Gun has control over multiple avatars under his command. Under his control, wait, you didn't become a saint. You became the god of a new constellation instead. The poor man starts being dragged away. He is pulled off to the side. Take some time to think it through. It's not like I intend to forgive you. Huh? What just happened? My head. Good grief, the Leo faction. The Leo group finally regains consciousness, and everyone feels relieved. Some even wonder if the attack is finally over. But on Capricorn's side, the situation is terrifying. Their saint has disappeared. So what are they supposed to do now? For them, it has become a matter of life and death. So they begin activating another hidden power. Through their armor, something triggers and starts causing massive explosions. They begin blowing everything apart without restraint. It looks like they've forgotten their saint already sabotaged all their equipment. They shout that they will blow everyone to pieces and send them to hell. Prince, I really don't think you should do that. A, fire the marmot shell. The creature launches torpedoes toward Lee Gun. When one of the projectiles heads straight for him, Lee Gun mutters that it's just their little toy. Some kind of marmot thing. Marmot this, marmot that. What even is a marmot? Using the hammer of guaranteed victory relic, he can modify or upgrade any valid target. Select a target. He chooses the marmot. He swings his hammer and smashes the incoming torpedo head-on. He strikes the torpedo directly with his hammer. A massive burst of lightning erupts. Target successfully modified. The marmot bomb has been turned into fireworks. Thanks to Lee Gun, the marmot turns into harmless fireworks. Huh? It became fireworks? Damn it. But suddenly a heavy paw slams onto the ground. The ground shakes as someone roars, asking how dare they use them and then discard them. What's happening? They came back too? The beast folk shout that they are tough and hard to kill. If that marmot had still been a bomb, it would have been different, but now it's just fireworks. Now they can't even scratch them. Wait, please. One of them panics and turns to run. The man flees in fear, while Stephen Marker angrily shouts that they cannot be allowed to escape. Do we have any weapons left? Give me something big, strong, and throwable. Lee Gun replies, why bother? I'll just make you a weapon. He scans Stephen Marker and smirks like a devil, saying he already has something in mind. Actually, I've already got one. Stephen Marker nervously asks why he's looking at him like that, feeling uneasy. He gets a bad feeling about this. Later, Stephen Marker ends up flying through the air after Gia. Leon throws Lee Gun, sending him hurtling forward at full speed toward the enemy. Lee Gun crashes through them, sending everyone flying in all directions. Maybe I should try bowling as a career, he mutters, and he looks down at Stephen Marker's foot for a moment. Poor guy is already knocked out cold. He drops him onto the ground, still noticing something strange near Stephen Marker's foot. Keeps staring at whatever odd object is attached to Stephen Marker's foot. Finally, he lets go and says, nope, I'm not touching that. Let's not go any further.